Five Nights at Freddy's is a decade-old franchise with a lot of lore, with a bunch of theorists all over trying to solve the story once and for all. Today, I'll be providing you with a full guide, no matter your experience, to all of the lore from FNAF. From FNAF 1 all the way to the newest Help Wanted 2 update, all the books, the movie, and more, as well as showing you all of Scott Cawthon's own statements about the lore, confirmations that you may not have ever seen, as well as a list of almost every theory in FNAF history. This video also features a ton of FNAF theorists such as Game Theory, RyeToast, ID's Fantasy, Gibby's Horror Homestead, and more to give their own opinions on the lore too, and provide some other fresh perspectives, instead of just me the whole time. Speaking of, there'll also be this little switch on the top right, which whenever I or others are being biased, this switch will turn red, and whenever it's completely unbiased and just talking about general theories, it will turn green. Also, this video is a part of the biggest FNAF guide ever, FNAF the Spring Guide. So if you enjoy this and want more FNAF insanity, including every single little detail from the franchise, I highly recommend checking it out. Without further ado, please subscribe so we might hit 240k by the end of the year, or somehow 250. Remember, this is all just a theory, and let's head back to 2014 to begin our lore journey. Within FNAF 1, we learn that on June 26th in an unknown year, 5 children were lured into the back room during their birthday party by someone using one of the company mascots, where they were killed and then stuffed into the animatronics themselves, causing foul odor to come from the machines and eventually cause the place to shut. Then sometime later, this Freddys opened, and we now work as a security guard named Mike, taking advice from the phone calls from a previous employee who we hear unfortunately died by the end of the week, at the hands of the animatronics now possessed by those 5 children. One of the biggest mysteries to come from this game is an event mentioned by Phone Guy, the Bite of 87, where an animatronic attacked someone, causing them to lose their frontal lobe. We also learned that they actually survived. However, which animatronic did the bite is the main part of the mystery. From this game alone, the main suspects were Freddy, who has a fingerprint on its head, and so someone might have been trying to get out of the bite, Foxy, who is weirdly the only one who's out of order and withered, seemingly broken, which could be implying that Foxy is dangerous, or Golden Freddy, the most damning evidence being the jump scare that occurs after setting Custom Night to 1987, but also that he's out of sight in the location and hidden away, as if something happened surrounding it that Fazbear Entertainment once separated from their restaurant at this point. We would get a more clear explanation on who the possible culprits are in the next game. Around this time though, there are also theories going around about what "it's me" actually means, whether one of the animatronics has a connection to Mike Schmidt, who at the time may have been either a relative of one of the kids, or possibly the murderer himself, who they're trying to intimidate with the phrase. Honestly, we don't even have a much clearer answer 10 years later, as most interpretations rely on other theories, mainly with who you think possesses Golden Freddy, to be true. Some suggest it's meant to be the crying child, Mike's brother in a later game, either from within Golden Freddy or possibly even from just haunting Mike. Golden Freddy isn't real was another theory that has genuinely been debated upon to this day, a theory that arose because of Golden Freddy's ghostly nature and teleportation abilities, leading people to doubt he even exists physically. Another Golden Freddy theory was that if he was indeed a real physical animatronic, it might be in the kitchen, the only offline camera. Some less important and more smaller theories also arose during this time, such as Foxy is a good guy, which was based on the fact that Foxy doesn't actually come in and jump at you, but instead just kinda stays at the door and peeks in. Another one was that the phone guy is stuffed into the Chica suit, a theory based on the fact that Chica seemingly had extra teeth within, which we now know is simply just the endoskeleton's teeth. A smaller theory that would leak into the second game too is that the phone guy is actually the murderer of the missing children, and they kill him for their revenge. Obviously, we can't go into the next game without speaking about MatPat from Game Theory, theorizing that the first game actually takes place in 1993, which while 1993 is contested to this day, albeit not much, it should be noted that it's the most likely answer due to the evidence from the future. Mike gets paid around $4 an hour for 30 hours for his 5th night paycheck, meaning they're likely paying him minimum wage, leading to around 1991 to 1996 where the minimum wage was $4.25, rounding down to $4. Funnily enough, in the next game, once Scott knew for a fact we would actually calculate the paycheck just happens to perfectly equal the 1987's minimum wage with no error rounding up or down at all, meaning at most he was indeed implying that they paid you minimum wage in FNAF 1 and MatPat was correct, or at the very least he liked MatPat's idea enough that he decided to make sure it was exact and accurate in the next game. Some have mentioned that the minimum wage not being $4.25 exactly is a major problem with the solution, although I propose that Scott may have have simply just done 4 times 30 to get the paycheck amount of $120 instead of doing specifically 4.25 times 30 to get the actual exact amount of $127.50. However, that is just a personal assumption, so feel free to disagree at that point. Whether it was initially meant to be solved that way or not though, judging by FNAF 2 making the pay actually accurate, Scott would later mention how FNAF 1, 2, and 3 were solved, and that the story was completely uncovered by YouTubers and the community. I think it's very important to note that this is when 1993 was the main date for FNAF 1, and 2023, gotten from 1993, was the main date for FNAF 3, used by almost the entire community, which he would still go on to never clarify that those dates are incorrect despite everyone using them for 10 whole years, and instead actually references one of the dates, 2023, in a later game, to seemingly confirm or at least heavily imply that we were correct. And he'd also later create a code in the survival logbook that makes FNAF 3 taking place before 2017 extremely unlikely, to the point some say impossible. Within unused FNAF AR emails, 1993 was mentioned twice as the date FNAF 1 takes place, and while this is unused content, Scott did apparently say that they were bound to be leaked anyways, although to be fair I can't seem to find a screenshot of that statement, so make of that what you will. Overall, I think if Scott has had 10 years to say that everyone is incorrect, and he instead makes sure he's 100% accurate with the minimum wage in the next game, officially states that we've been correct about the first 3 games, references those years in the future games, disproves other solutions with a logbook code, and more, it seems pretty likely, especially considering the other main option, 1992 for example, uses the exact same minimum wage solution, but just uses the fact that in FNAF 2 we get paid on a Thursday, so maybe we get paid on a Thursday in FNAF 1 as well.
FNAF 1 has been pretty much completely solved at this point. It's been almost 10 years since the game is released, and we know pretty much everything about it, but we never really talk about Phone Guy's death. On the 4th night, it's pretty obvious he got killed by Gordon Freddy, but what happened after? What happened to his remnant? As pretty much everyone watching this video knows, remnant is the term for soul energy which binds souls to inanimate objects. Typically, it's metal, and the closest piece of metal to Phone Guy when he died is the phone he was recording his message with. He is literally possessing the phone. That would explain the Night 5 phone call, which is literally just this. And why he is so out of place in Ultimate Custom Night. But then again, he did choose Trash in the Gang over really important story characters like Nightmare Foxy. So take that with a grain of salt.
In 2017, Scott Cawthon revealed that he had made only one actual retcon in the series, the first 5 games at that point. While he didn't reveal what, he did say it was integrated pretty seamlessly, most people didn't notice, and that it wasn't merely a new story detail, we're talking about a contradiction. And that doesn't leave us with many candidates. Maybe who owned the pizzeria, or how long Freddys existed? But I believe the most plausible one is this newspaper clipping. Suspect convicted. It seemed pretty standard for the lore of a standalone game. Kids went missing, suspect convicted, but no bodies. But this detail didn't make as much sense when the story was continued. Most later evidence implies the suspect wasn't convicted, or at least it'd be hard to fit that into the story. But this all hinges on Scott Cawthon having known the difference between being convicted of a crime and being charged with one, which we can't be sure of because the article weirdly only states the suspect was charged. But in either case, a misunderstanding or retcon, but it's saying suspect convicted, the suspect was not.
Unlike FNAF 1, we immediately knew this game took place in 1987. The paycheck even perfectly equaled the minimum wage in 1987 this time too, and it introduced us to the victim of the infamous Bite of 87 that we heard about in the first game. Everyone thought that FNAF 2 was going to be a sequel leading up to it, but it turned out to be a prequel instead. Phone Guy is still alive, and the Wizards end up becoming the original animatronics, getting transferred to a smaller location as Fazbear's is, after this game's events, on a much smaller budget. Despite Phone Guy starting his calls with "Welcome to your new summer job," the game actually takes place in November, so it's unknown why Scott has made this mistake twice in a row now. We learn in the mini-games that the purple guy is the murderer of the children in this story, and was actually the night guard before us in the FNAF 2 location. Note the security badge on him. Phone Guy tells us that he was complaining about how the animatronics are acting strangely and aggressively out of nowhere. This is because they're now possessed. It turns out that the purple guy used his position to easily be able to lure and then murder another 5 kids, with a yellow yellow suit that Phone Guy talks about, which all go on to possess the toy animatronics, as hinted with Mangle beginning to move on its own. This time though, he's able to clean any messes left through his night shift. However, we're still missing one child's death, as there's 6 new toy animatronics, which we learn about in the Take Cake to the Children minigame, where a child gets murdered outside of either Freddys or Fredbear's by the purple guy himself, and later goes on to possess the puppet, symbolized by its jump scare occurring right after. After the purple guy leaves the night guard job when the toys rightfully get aggressive towards him, and he transfers to the day shift guard instead, we, Jeremy Fitzgerald, become the new night guard. However, when police investigations start, purple guy makes a run for it, and Jeremy ends up being transferred to the day shift, namely for the location's final birthday party occurring the next day. Jeremy is told by Phone Guy to stay close to the animatronics to ensure that they don't hurt anyone at a party, and to make sure that nothing goes wrong, which is most likely hinting that Jeremy becomes the victim of the bite of 87, being bit by one of the animatronics he was ordered to stay close to. Then during the 7th custom night, we play as a brand new night guard, Britt Smith, who happens to get fired on his first night, and interestingly enough for the exact same reasons as FNAF 1's guard does, which might be implying that they're possibly the same person, going under an alias for an unknown reason. We also hear about an older location, Fredbear's Family Diner, from Phone Guy, seemingly Fazbear Entertainment's first ever location. In Give Gifts, Give Life, we also see that although the purple guy stuffs the original 5 children into the suits, as we learned about in the first game, the puppet was seemingly the one to actually guide their spirits to then possess the main animatronics, giving the kids the gift of new life. The main debated theory at the time, and still to this day, was who caused the bite of 87. The main candidates by the time of this game were Withered Foxy, as he's shown to jump directly at you in his jump scare, and once again, him being out of order in FNAF 1 makes a lot of sense, when taking into consideration that he caused a major incident for the company. Mangle, as it comes down from the roof to seemingly bite the top of your head, and Toy Chica, whose beak mysteriously goes missing throughout the game, as possibly a hint towards her being the one to do it. Another big theory that spawned from this game is about the identity of the new Shadow animatronics. Shadow Freddy, modeled after Withered Golden Freddy, and Shadow Bonnie, modeled after Toy Bonnie. These two don't get explained in any of the minigames, and are limited to their secret random chance appearances, meaning any information about them is very limited. Although due to them being modeled after both eras of the animatronics, it could be assumed that they may have come from the 2 incidents somehow, and years later we'd assumedly get the answer being a thing called agony. Basically, the amount of negative emotion from events of pure tragedy is so powerful that it can create an entity and or make something appear haunted despite not having an actual soul within it. So in this case, Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie are basically the manifestation of and born from William's evil. Shadow Freddy likely being created from the agony of the original 5 missing children, explaining why it looks like Golden Freddy, with Shadow Bonnie possibly coming from the agony of the new missing children that we learn about in this game, explaining why it looks like Toy Bonnie. This is all very easily explained by Shadow Freddy himself with his later form Nightmare, with the quote, "I am your wickedness, made of flesh." A small theory that returned from the previous game was that the phone guy is actually the purple guy and was the murderer of the story, and that the item in his hand in the minigames was actually a phone, although I need to mention this was later disproven and debunked by Scott himself. Another theory about Phone Guy is that he might actually be Fritz Smith, who takes over for Jeremy on the final night, although this theory wasn't agreed upon too much because, well, he gets fired, and the fired note claims that this is his first day Fritz has a job with him, and it'll also mean that he gets fired in this location but is in the same position working in the next location. A smaller theory that came from this game was the fact that the puppet was actually either in the FNAF 1 location or a previous Freddy location due to the dream cutscenes between nights, showing the main FNAF 1 animatronics and eventually the puppet all in what appears to be the FNAF 1 location. Even in the future, it's still unknown what these dream cutscenes were meant to be telling us, if anything. Although some may say this is showing us that the FNAF 1 animatronics are actually what the animatronics look like in the original Freddys too. Another smaller theory was whether the purple guy was actually purple or not, which later on it would actually get confirmed that it's simply meant to be representing him in the shadows, and that, surprise surprise, he's not actually a literal purple guy.
FNAF is almost 10 years old, and when I think about some of the most interesting theories, I have to mention the debate on Purple Guy and the potential of a pink guy. In Foxy Go Go Go, some theorists thought that the purple guy in the corner was actually pink, and therefore a different character altogether. This opened the door to so many different theories, from maybe purple guy was innocent, which was a theory that I really found interesting back in the day, to maybe purple guy was the phone guy and pink guy was the killer, to maybe these two were the owners of the restaurant together and they had like conflicting interests in the restaurant. If you were a FNAF fan back in 2014 to 2015, you'll surely feel nostalgic about this one because it was very prolific back in the day. And while I never personally believed this theory, I thought the potential to have two killers, or even one killer and one good guy, would have been a very interesting aspect for the series. So you can give this theory a psychic approved stamp or something. I don't know. Moving on.
This game is quite straightforward with most of its story. The game takes place 30 years after FNAF 1, and so FNAF 1 is in 1993 in 2023, with a Steam description saying it's 30 years after Freddys closed its doors, meaning the most recent Freddys, not the other 2 times they closed and then reopened afterwards. Also the fact that in a game described as taking place after Freddys closed its doors, we just happen to play minigames in a Freddys that's closed its doors. The source code teasing the game outright stating Five Nights at Freddy's 30 years later, which very simply means 30 years after the first Five Nights at Freddy's game takes place. In the future with the audio log HRY223 where Henry starts planning FNAF 6, later by coding the survival logbook proving that FNAF 3 takes place in modern times, the code itself making it any earlier than 2017 seemingly incorrect, and the fact that we didn't have the 1985 date for the missing children's incident by FNAF 3 for 2015 to even be a possibility, which would mean that the game's year would have been impossible to solve despite Scott saying that FNAF 3's story was solved, and more. 2023 timeline debates aside, some vague time after FNAF 1, William eventually sneaks back into the pizzeria, after being MIA for years, and destroys the FNAF 1 animatronics, which are the only ones who still have spirits within them at this point. Note for later that the endoskeletons are missing from the pile of parts. Back to the story though, and the spirits are then seemingly loose and are able to scare William briefly before he runs directly into the Spring Bunny suit, feeling powerful and mighty once more before the suit malfunctions and imprisons him within it. Then skip forward to 2023. Phone Dude and co decide to create a location purely based around the myths and rumors of Freddy's past, Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction. They go to the old locations looking for anything they can use, and one day are informed of safe rooms in the locations. Phone Dude and whoever else is running Fazbear's Fright eventually go there and find the Springtrap purple guy in the Freddy safe room, along with some more FNAF 1 animatronic parts, and they then put him in the location as an attraction. Springtrap is then loose within Fazbear's Fright until the unnamed player, I'll get into this in a second, works his nights and seemingly sets the location ablaze, ending the FNAF story in the purple guy's terror, or so it would seem. That's not at all though, as this game also features minigames throughout where you're seemingly revisiting old memories to eventually put together a final birthday memory, the spirit's happiest day, allowing the spirits to be seemingly set free and finally rest once and for all. The main mystery from this game continued from the last game: who are the shadow animatronics? While I did give an answer in the FNAF 2 theory section, I should mention the most popular theory that started from this game was that the shadows are the ghosts of the previous Freddy employees that were possibly killed due to the multiple Springlock failures that we hear about. Although something that has kind of stopped this theory, at least now due to us knowing the first Freddy's closed in 1985, is Shadow Bunny, who is directly modelled after Toy Bunny, which the Springlock suits were stopped after the first Freddy's closed, and so their ghost coming back as Toy Bunny, who they would have never seen before, nor even had the chance to see for years to come, wouldn't make too much sense. More theories that arose from this game is that Golden Freddy was actually originally a Springlock suit, based on the fact that Spring Bunny looks to be in the same slumped over position that Golden Freddy is usually in, and so it could possibly mean that Fredbear and Golden Freddy are actually the same, coming from Fredbear's family diner just like Spring Bunny did. Of course though, we cannot continue without talking about the unnamed player of FNAF 3. There are two main theories on who we play as. The first, and most likely, is that we play as the same guard who was connected between FNAF 1 and 2, Mike Schmidt. At the time, the main point of evidence was the fact that the hallucinations, aka phantoms, were the FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 characters, and so the guard likely would have had to see them at some point. Once again, I need to mention Scott has actually told us that the story of the first 3 games was practically uncovered and solved quickly, even stating that there was seemingly nothing he could hide, all the way back in 2015. But the other option that I'm going to get into in a second didn't even exist until 2021. Years later, Scott would state that Mike's speech in Sister Location seemingly leads to FNAF 3 as it apparently helps complete the story, at least complete before FNAF 6 came into existence, due to, quote, there were a few plot points that were really bothering people, and that it would tell us what becomes of Mike, ex-Benedict, after Sister Location. Some have said it was clearly meant to be a FNAF 6 teaser, although I don't actually believe this, due to Springtrap being shown to survive in FNAF 3 itself, so it's not new just for this cutscene, and it'd be pretty odd to release a huge climactic teaser for the game that you didn't actually want anyone knowing you were making, which he has mentioned multiple times. And the fact that prior to it even releasing, he said that the story would be complete with it, not continued with it. Years later, the survival logbook, owned by Mike, would also seemingly give us the direct answer by featuring a foxy night guard in the FNAF 3 office, which, as we all know, Mike's character is heavily associated with the foxy mask, and he just happens to also be a night guard who also just happens to be theorized to be the night guard in the FNAF 3 office. Mike's logbook also features numerous references to FNAF 3 as well. Also, something smaller is that years later we would then get the FNAF movie, where the big showdown is quite literally Mike vs Spring Bunny, which eventually results in the entire building crumbling down with electrical faults everywhere. However, there's then the second theory. A few others saying it might just be a random person, due to the fact that we never actually get the paycheck or anything else, which would have easily connected it to Mike. And some believe this random to be named Hudson, due to the Fazbear Fright series featuring a story titled What We Found, which features what's practically a stretched out night of FNAF 3 where Hudson is the guard at that very location, and eventually dies in a burning oven. The story itself is practically impossible to be canon in the game timeline, as it swaps around a lot of details, but Hudson being the guard, if it's an unnamed random, is admittedly still a possibility. Although, like I said before, I do personally and heavily believe that it's Mike, and think that the survival logbook directly answers the question for us.
My favorite kinds of FNAF theories are ones that take one weird detail and just run with it. One of those details comes back in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Besides the first 1.5 nights, the phone calls in this game are replaced with tape recordings of a Fazbear employee that worked at a location with springlock suits. The very same employee is FNAF 1 and 2. Well, that or Scott just is bad at doing multiple voices. One of the tapes gives us a lot to theorize about, talking about how, due to multiple springlock failures, the springlock suits have to be shut down and sent to a sister location. That's great information to work with, but I feel like it overshadows the very next sentence in the tape. Quote,
"Until replacements arrive, you will be expected to wear the temporary costumes provided to you. Keep in mind that they were found on very short notice, so questions about appropriateness/relevance should be deflected."
Now this could just be a throwaway line, but what if it isn't? What suits would be irrelevant to the Fazbear brand? There are so many options for this, and some of the common theories I've heard is that this could be an explanation for Shadow Bonnie and Shadow Freddy. They're the right suits, but they're the wrong color. Another theory is that this explains the non-FNAF character masks we see in Happiest Day, like this alligator who came out way before Montgomery. But 8 years later, Ruin gave us another possibility. In the room we encounter the Mimic in, we also see felt costumes of an elephant, a non-Chica bird, and presumably a lion costume that the Mimic has commandeered once we encounter him. If these suits were in the basement of the FNAF 6 location, then it could be implied that Fazbear owned them in general and they were lying around. But we've never seen these characters. Maybe these felt suits are the replacements that we heard about all the way back in 2015.
This game is where it starts to get a little difficult, to the point that once saying we had practically solved FNAF 1 to 3 back in 2015, he then said that FNAF 4 was the one no one got. This one caused a lot of confusion in the community for a long time, some of which still remains today. At the time, all we knew for certain was that back in 1983, the crying child was bullied by his brother, who we now know is Mike, for multiple days straight while gearing up for his big birthday party. Not at Freddys, but at Fredbear's Family Diner, the first location in the entire timeline. This location featured Fredbear and Spring Bonnie both in their prime, with a secret showing that the Freddy's animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy, also existed at this point too, meaning the first ever Freddy's was probably open at the same time. Interestingly enough, in that secret, Fredbear is also grouped up with these 4, a hint at what would later become of Fredbear, becoming just a golden Freddy, being grouped up with the other 4. Throughout each of the days, we see a Fredbear plush monitor his every move, even talking to him from time to time. Eventually, on the crying child's birthday, he would get bullied once again by Mike and his friends, being lifted and put inside of Fredbear's mouth, Fredbear malfunctioning and crushing the crying child. The crying child is then sent to the hospital, and after Mike apologizes, someone speaking out of the Fredbear plush states that they'll put him back together, and then we hear the heartbeat flatline as he dies. Then we come to the gameplay part of the story. For a while, the biggest and most popular theory was the infamous dream theory by Game Theory. The theory states that everything in FNAF was just a dream by the crying child on his deathbed. The original gang in the TV show, the FNAF 1 phone call, Toy Chica's missing beak on the toy, plush shop existing so early, etc. were apparently showing us that each game was a dream, mostly inspired by those things. This turned out to be false, and in retrospect, most of those Easter eggs have an answer that doesn't actually equal to dream theory. The TV show simply showing that the first Freddys existed alongside Fredbears in 1983, the FNAF 1 phone call instead revealing that we play as Mike, the older brother in this game, sometime after FNAF 1, having nightmares about his experience at Freddy's, with a similar gameplay mechanics and everything, and what happened to his brother, with the pills and hospital equipment randomly flashing in and out, Toy Chica's missing beak possibly being in reference to her being the cause of the infamous bite of 87, which to be fair we did think this game was originally going to solve, as Scott trolled us leading up to the game by replacing the 87 in the source code with the 83, only in the last day or so, which most missed. And the minigame plush trap toy was more so likely just a Spring Bunny plushie, and nothing to do with Springtrap. Like I said in passing just then, we did eventually figure out that we were instead playing as Mike, after FNAF 1 takes place, having these nightmares of his recent experience at Freddy's due to the phone guy call playing throughout. And I personally believe that the hospital equipment and nightmare slash Fredbear stuff appears in his dreams because the crying child is possibly haunting Mike, and is hijacking those nightmares. Similar to how in the FNAF movie, Mike's dreams are all focused on what happened to his brother, with the other animatronic spirits able to hijack and change things in the dream. It's just reversed for the games, where his nightmares are focused on what happened with the animatronics, with his brother's spirit able to hijack and change things in the nightmare. This would also align with the survival logbook, where around the time the FNAF 4 dreams are still considered recent, the crying child is still by his side. Although Sister Location did show something that I must mention, that the FNAF 4 house is titled Observation, and so it's likely an experimental place. Doubled down with the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Didophobia, which explained that the nightmare animatronics are fabricated by hallucinogenic gas, which to me honestly makes me believe that the purple guy, William Afton, made the crying child actually experience the experiment nightmares, making him afraid of the animatronics. So basically now these are the main slash common 3 options with what's going on with the FNAF 4 gameplay nights. 1. Mike has these nightmares because of his experience at Freddy's, his brother interfering every now and then causing the random hospital equipment etc. to appear. 2. Mike has these nightmares only because of his brother hijacking his dreams, and trying to show Mike what these experiences are what he went through. Or maybe even a mix of both the first option 2 with Mike's own recent experiences at Freddy's, causing the nightmares to follow the same patterns as the FNAF 1 animatronics. Or 3, Mike doesn't have these as actual nightmares in his sleep, and is instead actually in the experimental location in FNAF 4, the crying child interacting with him and his hallucinations in the real world instead. Something I should mention now is that I keep calling this guy the crying child, and that's the most common name for him right now. Although during the making of this video, I do believe I have actually discovered the real name for him within the survival logbook, much like how we got the name for the 5th missing child, Cassidy, within it too. I'll get into all of that and more in depth later on though. Alongside those main theories, there were also countless, endless theories all about what was inside FNAF 4's box. But Scott has since mentioned how the contents of the box have actually been changed, and corrected multiple times in fear of how the fans would accept the answer. And so honestly, there's no real point in actually trying to figure out what's inside the box, as the correct answer figured out today may not actually be the correct answer figured out years later. He would later talk about the box in Dorko's second interview with him. Despite not being satisfying, whenever he's making these games, there's a lot of things in his head that are just flowing ideas, and they're just the first half or something. What's there on the other end is definitely there, but he must progress to it. He knows something is there, and he makes the roads to get there for that to be revealed, but sometimes when he progresses, the roads aren't the same as the ones that were planned before. Even though at the time something was definitely there, the progression of the story didn't actually go there, and so the strings never got pulled, and the other half of the idea remained in the ether. There is something in the box, but he never pursued it, and so he doesn't know if he can find it again.
We all know Nightmare from FNAF 4. A decent amount of us also know that Nightmare is referred to as Shadow Freddy in the FNAF 4 files. Those who know this accepted that and went on their way. But how? How can these two characters be the same? To that, we have to go to the books. We specifically have to look at the hide-and-seek story. In the story, Shadow Bonnie gains more power and agony from Tobias's emotions and grows stronger, and Shadow Bonnie's form becomes more nightmarish. It gets bigger, grows sharper claws, and gains teeth. I think that this is trying to show us that when empowered with enough agony, or more specifically, emotional energy, the shadows can grow into more nightmare-like creatures. So let's look at Nightmare, and his particular voice line that he says to William. What this means is that Shadow Freddy is made more powerful from the actions and grief surrounding William's misdeeds, which was killing and torturing children, eventually becoming the freak of nature we see in FNAF 4. In Hide and Seek, as Shadow Bonnie grows in power, he gets closer to Tobias. In FNAF 2, Shadow Freddy is in the back room. In FNAF 3, he's right next to Michael. In the FNAF 4 gameplay, he's actually able to attack in his upgraded form, Nightmare. I think Hide and Seek was trying to reveal to us the nature of agony entities in this way.
Plush Victim is built of the idea that the Bite Victim we play as in Five Nights at Freddy's 4's minigames doesn't possess an animatronic, but rather the plushies he was holding in the hospital, which during the events of FNAF World are placed inside of the MCI, making his memories shattered amongst them, and why Happiest Day was his birthday yet set the other 5 kids free. An alternative would include Michael Afton as the 6th piece of the Bite Victim, explaining why he seems to have Bite Victim's memories during the events of FNAF 4, why he can manipulate Mike's logbook, and gives a potential answer as to what Midnight Motorist was about.
One of FNAF's most mysterious games has to be FNAF 4, with everything we know from before coming now directly to our own home. Whilst I'd love to sit here pondering who might be in that stupid box, Hyperdroid has asked me for around a minute-long summary, not a 12-hour essay. So whilst we have Dream Theory, some things being real, some things being only in the mind, and these things in the franchise, let's talk about the belief surrounding the Nightmare animatronics. The nightmares are big, and to be honest, terrifying, giving little me nightmares. But are they real? With FNAF 4 supposedly taking place above FNAF's sister location, the FNAF 4 protagonist was the perfect lab rat to test out William's tech. But why would he do that to his own child? It's almost like he's insane or something. The story once went that William was using illusion disc tech, showcased in the Twisted Ones novel, to make the nightmares look like nightmare fuel. Whether the nightmares are real or not is always up for interpretation, but with characters like the Freddys being straight up hallucinations, and Nightmare Freddy explaining that he was remade by Cassidy, topping it all off with Nightmare Fredbear supposedly in Afton Purgatory during UCN, saying,
"This time, there is more than an illusion to fear."
Hinting that previously they were nothing more than an illusion, it is heavily suggested that they were real, just hallucinations within the mind, rather than having any physical presence. This game obviously didn't have much lore that came from it, but the most common theory from it was that it had some connections to FNAF 3 and maybe even the FNAF 4 box. The theory goes that things in FNAF World such as how to achieve the clock ending, and all the references to finding pieces and putting them back together, are all parallels to how the FNAF 3 minigames are completed, in this case put together to create Happiest Day, and that since the FNAF 4 box is open in the FNAF World's files, maybe Happiest Day, or what it represents, is actually what's in the box. So basically, with the intro including a spirit saying "I'll put you back together," FNAF World is a handcrafted experience for the crying child, likely by Charlie, helping put the memories all together in order to create Happiest Day for all the spirits. Basically think Ultimate Custom Night for Afton, but FNAF World for the crying child. A theory alongside that is that while the crying child helps create the Happiest Day that we see in FNAF 3 in some way, he himself isn't actually there, and instead has his Happiest Day with his family here, with this scene of 3 people in front of a TV of sorts, which is titled Happiest Day in the files, and it would make a lot of sense as being the crying child, Mike, and Elizabeth watching TV together. Another theory is that FNAF World itself is instead a haven of sorts for the spirits after being freed, and that's why all the characters are here. However, despite these theories, the game has admittedly been disowned by Scott since its release, and he has gone on record to say that he regrets tying FNAF World into the lore, so it's safe to say it doesn't have much importance in the greater scheme of things, and that appears to be true because even if this theory is taken away, we know that Happiest Day still happens regardless.
FNAF World could be a trap set by William to create a false happiest day. Whoever Glitchbear is in World is meant to be the same person as the Fredbear plushie's final speaker in FNAF 4. If William is the final speaker, then that means he would also be Glitchbear. So how does this work? Rather than helping his son, I propose that William knows his soul was shattered after the bite of 83. He uses his shattered soul to learn how to break and mend souls by using Cassidy to help him find his way by leaving breadcrumbs for him, leading him to put himself back together by intertwining his soul with the MCI kids, as evidenced by the same clues in FNAF 3 to complete that happiest day. In doing so, William created a false happiest day for the MCI and CC to maintain their trust and for him to effortlessly control the spirits to do his bidding, like in the novels and the movie. If you would like to learn more about this theory, feel free to check out the video I made on the subject.
This game immediately tells us that we're playing as Michael, Mike for short, which fans immediately connected to FNAF 1's Mike Schmidt. For some, this even further proved that we play as this Mike character in every single game, as the pattern seemed to continue. Sister Location itself was the game that seemed to point the story of FNAF to be a story about the William Afton family, a family tainted by their father's evil, featuring the youngest son who got killed by Fredbear as shown in the FNAF 4 minigames, similar to his sister who we'd later learn is named Elizabeth, who got killed by Circus Baby as shown in a secret minigame here. Then finally there's Michael, the older son and brother to both, who we play as in this game and who seemingly works against his father throughout the story. The story of this game features two locations, Circus Baby's Pizza World and Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals. The former seem to have existed and then obviously had been cancelled as shown in the teasers leading up to the game around the same time as Fredbear's Family Diner was operating in 1983, as the latter location, Entertainment and Rentals, was shown in the Breaker Room map to have existed in full at the same time as Fredbear's was operational, when Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were both there, which we know both were moved away into a Freddy's location after Fredbear's shut. However, we hear that Entertainment and Rentals only existed as William's private workshop until the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed from the missing children's incident, as Hand Unit mentions how this location only opened after the closure of a Freddy's location. After working on the job for 5 nights, the Fun Times eventually enact their plan and scoop themselves in order to come together and form the animatronic amalgamation that is Ennard, eventually tricking Mike to go into the scooping room scooping side and, well, getting scooped. This causes Ennard to go into Mike's body and puppeteer it for the time being. Eventually, with the Custom Night DLC, we got more cutscenes where we see Mike's body slowly start to rot more and more, to the point that Ennard eventually has to leave it since it's simply unusable now, causing Ennard to enter the sores, but Mike, with some encouragement from his sister, continues to live. Eventually, he promises William that he's gonna come find him, and judging by the visuals on screen, he successfully did just that. Timeline-wise, some suggest Sister Location actually comes before FNAF 2, meaning the older reason Mike gets fired isn't just a joke anymore and is now actually given some proper lore importance, while others like me suggest the game goes in between FNAF 1 and FNAF 3, that Mike's speech at the end of the custom night mode is the lead up into the story of FNAF 3, which makes sense considering this Steam post from Scott states that the cutscene helps complete the story at the time by telling us where Mike goes after his journey as ex-Benedict, and that the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Dittophobia shows the fun times are all still intact 20 years after the Nightmare experiments start, which we know exists back in 1983, making the fun times still intact in the 2000s, after FNAF 1. A theory that goes hand in hand with the latter option is that the funtime animatronics actually contain the spirits of the original missing children, which is seemingly hinted at in the trailer as well, with the quotes, "You don't know what we've been through, where memories sleep, etc." And this theory was later given a lot more evidence and explained in multiple sources, which we'll get into further in the next game, but all in all, it seems pretty solidified that the fun times contain Remnant thanks to the Scooper, and the specific Remnant that they have is from the original FNAF 1 animatronics after the Follow Me minigames, when William destroys them and takes their endoskeleton parts. A theory that arose from this game comes from the Ennard boss battle featuring a familiar Fredbear plush, with what looks to be a remote or maybe even a walkie-talkie. This does confirm that William Afton was definitely the one spying on the crying child, even having cameras set up in his room, which at this point in time does seem pretty obvious. One question that did arise from this game was how on earth did Mike survive this? He even says in his speech that he should be dead, so how? Well, like I mentioned previously, the scooper is later revealed to have Remnant within it, meaning that when he was scooped with it, he was likely actually injected with it. This may mean that Remnant has some sort of healing ability. Also, a theory that was born from this game was that Mike was actually a robot the entire time, and that's how he survived. Although Scott has gone on to mention how the scooper worked and confirmed he is, in fact, human with human organs. Although this shouldn't have ever been questioned in the first place, let's be real.
Now, I'd like to flex my massive brain with a theory laying out every way the books are and aren't canon, but I 1. Value my life, and 2. Haven't touched either Tales or Frights. What can I say? I was never book smart. Rather, I'd like to take this chance to touch on a theory that I'm sure we've all heard of. Sister Location Adult Theory. The story goes, in the early run of Sister Location, Kane Carter speculated that this next installment would go in a much more mature direction, and could be focused on a Fazbear's location with adult entertainment. The story following the animatronics' trauma from such a place. Now, did he end up being wrong? But, I mean, at least for the sake of a theory, was he wrong for thinking that it could be possible? Look, I joke, but he did map out his thought process and evidence. I can see where those connections were made, if you squint a little. All in all, a classic example of overthinking in FNAF theories. It's a bit of a dead horse. I think people are especially harsh on Kane nowadays, but a piece of FNAF history that I was happy to talk about.
Okay, bye.
When was Sister Location? Arguably one of the toughest questions going around the fandom, and for good reason. Was it before FNAF 1? After FNAF 1? Before FNAF 2? After FNAF 4? Many questions, but I think that I've got an answer that makes both narrative and thematic sense to the story. It gets confusing keeping track of who the fun times are and where they came from, but given what Hand Unit says in the opening for Night 1, we can confirm that the events of this game take place after a Freddy Fazbear's has shut down. So let's think about this. Michael has gone down to the bunker, presumably because his father is doing something else. Okay, let's note that down. We have a story about an Afton going into an old location with abandoned animatronics that eventually get dismantled, ultimately resulting in him meeting a sticky end where, despite sustaining injuries that one could have no hope of surviving, inexplicably does so. Wait a second, this is sounding kind of familiar. The Follow Me minigames and Sister Location happen at the same time, but that's just a theory.
In a game that was, and to some seemingly still is, the game to end the original story for good, the game is actually quite straightforward with its story. This game almost, very likely, I want to say definitely, takes place in 2023, soon after FNAF 3 was theorized to take place. As Henry, HRY223, the co-owner of Fazbear Entertainment in its heydays, and business partner to William Afton, lures all the leftover animatronics into a pizzeria that Mike manages and works at, being the brave volunteer. The animatronics that are actually possessed and lured are Lefty, who itself was built to go and actually lure and capture the puppet, who still has Charlie, Henry's daughter, within. Scrap Trap, who is simply just the post-fire Springtrap with some new changes to his body. Scrap Baby, still possessed by Elizabeth, but who was kicked out of Enid after an argument about her taking too much control, who itself is now Molten Freddy, now with a molten mask shaped after Funtime Freddy. And once they're all in the location and Henry is sure there's no other animatronics left, he finally burns the place to the ground, allowing himself and all of the other spirits to rest for, at this point, good, while wishing William to quite frankly go to hell. Fazbear Entertainment is then no longer a corporate entity, and the original FNAF story comes to a close. The final gravestones we see contains the name of the 5 missing children, as well as Charlie's, Charlotte likely since it's a longer name, in the background, which cross-referencing with the FNAF 3 ending makes Gabriel within Freddy, Fritz within Foxy, Susie within Chica, Jeremy within Bonnie, and Unnamed within Gone Freddy, being seemingly revealed in the survival logbook to be Cassidy. Also, just for fun, in-depth analysis reasons, canonically, as seen in Security Breach, Ruin, and Help Wanted 2, Mike purchases Max Upgraded Floor Plan, Carnival Hoops, Colorful Cups and Plates, Star Curtain Stage, Deluxe Curtain Stage, Candy Cadet, Discount Ball Pit, First Aid Station, Paper Pals, Trash in the Gang, Gumball Swivel Hands, Lemonade Clown, Fruit Punch Clown, and Marty's Plungers sponsorship. As mentioned in the Sister Location lore section, this game gave us more details on the fun times, specifically that they are filled with the remnant, in simple terms soul juice, that was originally within the scooper. Whose remnant specifically though? Well, Henry seemingly answers that for us, talking about how William lured the same set of spirits to the same place to take everything that they have again, which is most likely talking about the Follow Me minigames, where the original 5 spirits are lured by William again, as there's no other event in the franchise where a set of spirits are lured to the same place by William and attacked in some form again, and how William will somehow set them to new purpose. So with nothing else timeline-wise being been possible to be the new purpose the spirits are set to past this date, it seems that the scooper contained the remnant of the original missing children, which was then injected into the fun times by the end of Sister Location, leading Henry to mention in his final speech that it's time for the spirits that the puppet helped guide to rest, which the only candidates for that statement are the original missing children as well. But why and how would they be in the FNAF 6 fire for Henry to even need to say that? And why do we see their gravestones? Because they're the remnant that's inside Molten Freddy. And so this theory is seemingly proven to be correct. Not only that, but there's a Candy Cadet story about putting 5 things into one, which would be the 5 missing children, and years later in Help Wanted within the Ended Vent repair levels, down in Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, it was discovered that you can actually find a bunch of FNAF 1 endoskeletons in a furnace, being burnt along with Enid. Another hint that they're all connected. Not only all of this, but the end of the whole game shows their gravestones, which doesn't really make much sense if they were supposedly freed back in FNAF 3 and apparently have nothing to do with this game, which coincidentally we have to cross-reference these graves with the FNAF 3 ending heads, which also coincidentally all have only one left eye activated, exactly like Molten Freddy only has his left eye activated. This actually implies something interesting for FNAF 3, which has 2 endings, one where the animatronics are all at rest and happiest day, and one where they're all still active. Scott has gone on record to say that the true answer to which ending happens is complicated, which makes me think it's actually both. The bad ending happens right after FNAF 3 as the spirits are still active and continue within the fun times and then Molten Freddy years later. But once FNAF 6 and the next game Ultimate Custom Night happen, then the spirits are officially able to rest, and I believe this is when Happiest Day occurs, and the good ending of FNAF 3 happens. Either way, and the main interpretation for Henry's speech stating, "Not until I undo what he has done and heal this wound. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this," seems to be that it's hinting that Charlie's death was possibly the first murder in the franchise, and was the event that caused the rest of the story to unfold, doubled down by getting us a whole new, clearer and more detailed angle of the death occurring similar to the Crying Child's death minigame, or Elizabeth's death minigame. Her dying before anyone else would also align with the theory that Charlie is the one speaking through the Fredbear plush to the Crying Child at the end of FNAF 4, and then in FNAF World to help guide his spirit just like she goes on to do for the others. And also the fact that Charlie died in 1982 in the Silver Eyes, a year before Crying Child's death, although this was changed in the 4th closet to be 1983 instead, so it's unclear if it changes the order of events, because I personally think the point still stands that she dies first, just that it's in 1983 as well, instead of being in 1982. Another theory suggests that instead it just means the first murder of Williams, and not the first death, as the Crying Child's death wasn't actually a murder, so there's nothing he directly did, although I still heavily believe that Charlie dies first. Also within this game, we see that at first the original puppet Charlie goes on to possess didn't actually have any tears, the security puppet. However, it's one of its main features in the future, so I personally believe that this was an intentional detail, and that William eventually noticed this change, and that's what caused him to learn about possession. This causes him to kill more to see if they also possess things, capture children to experiment, etc. Besides Charlie possibly being the first, the main theories that came from this game are about Midnight Motorist and Candy Cadet, what both are meant to be telling us. Neither have been solved 100% to this day, but the most common theories are Midnight Motorist. Due to the recent 5 laps at Freddy's revealing a car titled the Midnight Motor that's a purple car and contains a Spring Bunny item on it, it seems like the yellow guy is indeed William Afton, although this still leaves 2 possibilities to choose from. 1. Michael is the runaway child, possibly seeing a hallucination of his younger brother, represented by either Golden Freddy, Fredbear, or Shadow Freddy, and then running to and grieving at his younger brother's grave, being that place. While William is the yellow guy and so the drunk/abusive father, Junior's possibly being a bar of some kind. 2. The file name being later that night and the same rain being used between the 2 minigames, which also features a car, means that this minigame takes place after the night of Charlie's death, which we see in the other security puppet minigame. The mound possibly being where William hid Charlie's body, and the runaway being the Crying Child with the person watching TV possibly being Michael, just like he does in Sister Location. Originally there were more theories about Midnight Motorist, it being about one of the parents of the missing children, Andrew from the books, or anything else, but with the Spring Bunny item being literally on the Midnight Motor car, most have abandoned those theories. Candy Cadet. The main theory is that the stories are all further proof for William getting the remnant of all the missing children, and then combining them together, as most of the stories are basically about 5 things becoming one in one way or another. Another theory suggests that they all mean separate things, the key story being about Charlie and the missing children, the kitten story being about Michael and Baby, or William's creations in general, while the orphan story is still about the missing children and hinting at Molten Freddy's possession by them.
Molten Missing Children's Incident, also known as Molten MCI, is a very well-known theory. Slightly less well-known is Molten MCI Alter-S, a side grade of the theory that proposes that Cassidy has been following around Springtrap ever since the events of Follow Me. There's a few possible proposed reasons for this, one idea being that they are the vengeful spirit biding their time for William to be weak enough to start UCN, or an alternative perspective that they are just looking for what happened to their friend, who had been dismantled and injected into the Funtime animatronics, ultimately becoming Molten Freddy. With William being the person who dismantled them and took them away, he is the only lead that Cassidy would have to their whereabouts. Some evidence for this theory includes a furnace in Help Wanted that shows forward, classic, normal FNAF 1 style endos, but lacks a fifth endo or a spring lock endo that represents Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy is also not dismantled on screen, and Golden Freddy is separate from Henry's depiction of the 4 kids when talking about them in Connection Terminated, as well as the fact that Cassidy and the bite victim appear in the logbook when no other spirits seem to be there, which may suggest there's something different about these 2 spirits from the others.
Have you ever wondered why Scraptrap kinda looks like a peanut? No, seriously, Afton's design in FNAF 6 doesn't really look like his old Springtrappy self, does it? Why? Was it a retcon or a design change? That'd be weird, considering all the other animatronics in this game have explanations for their design, yet the main antagonist of the entire series doesn't. But look closer at him. His nose and feet kinda look like they were copy-pasted from Golden Freddy, don't they? And the original Springlock suits are said to have been designed to follow sound, which probably caused Springtrap lots of problems in a certain haunted house. With that in mind, maybe, just maybe, Afton replaced his suit with parts of other existing animatronics, including Golden Freddy. This could explain how Cassidy was able to attach to his soul and eventually cause him plenty of terror and torment later in Ultimate Custom Night.
This game also had a straightforward story. It's basically just an epilogue to the ending of the original story, FNAF 6, where the self-proclaimed one you should not have killed is torturing William, not allowing him to go on to the afterlife, by making him face all of his demons from throughout the story. There are 4 main theories to who is actually the one you should not have killed. Only Cassidy, the possessor of Golden Freddy, seemingly hinted at through the Golden Freddy twitching away cutscene, Golden Freddy being one of the only 2 in the game who are unkillable to get a secret when they just happen to be put on the one you cannot kill again, which instead gets you killed with an angry roar, what seems to be the creator of Ultimate Custom Night being represented by a bear in the Oddman Consequences minigame, a set of cutscenes literally being called Bear of Vengeance, and Golden Freddy being everywhere in the ports. Cassidy and Andrew, where Cassidy is the host of Ultimate Custom Night, but Andrew, a character from the Fazbear Frights books, who some believe to be a parallel to Cassidy, who wears an alligator mask and so in this case being represented by the gator-looking Oddman Consequences, tells Cassidy to rest her soul and that he'll take over for her, and ensure that William stays with his demons while she can be free, leading to the man in room 1280 and the main Fazbear Fright stories where Cassidy is now gone and Andrew seemingly forgets most of what he was doing in the past, besides wanting William to suffer. This is basically the best of both worlds in my opinion and what I currently go with, mainly if the frights are in the game timeline. Only Andrew version 1, where Cassidy is never actually a part of it and that Andrew is actually possessing Golden Freddy with her throughout the story, and that in the Happiest Day minigame, Cassidy is set free while Ultimate Custom Night is showing Andrew unwilling to rest. Only Andrew version 2, where Andrew is never in Golden Freddy but still hosts Ultimate Custom Night after being attached to William the entire story after he dies. This basically means all the Golden Freddy stuff in the game just means she's just kinda there. Michael, a newer theory suggested by Dual Process Theory, who will talk about this more in a moment, with the theory that Golden Freddy is a part of Ultimate Custom Night in some way, and that the puppet seems to be active in this game as well as FNAF World, which is directly connected to this game via Old Man Consequences and a few Easter egg characters appearing. It seems that Happiest Day might actually take place after this game's events like I theorized previously, explaining why Golden Freddy is the last to receive their mask due to not resting after FNAF 6 and staying in Ultimate Custom Night, and why the puppet is the last mask to fall, being active here and also in FNAF World. The other main theories that came from this game are what the cutscenes are representing. Toy Chica the high school years very clearly representing William Afton, and possibly how his murders got more violent and deranged with each one. Some believing it gives a reason why Cassidy is the vengeful spirit, as she might have been killed last and therefore most violently, while Bear of Vengeance is representing the feud between William and either Henry or Michael. Another small theory from Twitter user Mr. Man Like Year 1 is that the reason Fredbear loses all of his purple accessories when becoming Golden Freddy later in the story is actually because of Cassidy's possession itself, in the same way that Circus Baby gains green eyes from Elizabeth's possession and the puppet gains its tears from Charlie's possession. Another short theory that came from this game was the theory that Cassidy was killed with the spring locks inside Fredbear, aka Golden Freddy, mainly because of the ending cutscene showing Golden Freddy twitching in the darkness, similar to how Springtrap twitches when he gets springlocked in both the minigame and the FNAF 3 trailer. Adding on to this, if the theory about Toy Chica the high school years showing William's progression in violence with his kills is true, William killing the final victim with springlocks would make a lot of sense. Not only that, but the Fazbear Fright story The New Kid directly shows us someone getting into Golden Freddy and dying inside due to the springlocks, which could be a direct hint at the same happening in the games but with Cassidy instead. Also, a smaller note is that it makes for a great narrative too, where after William causes Cassidy to get springlocked, years later, as seen in Follow Me, it's insane karma when Cassidy causes William to get springlocked. They both meet the exact same fate.
Hi, this is Connie from Dual Process Theory. Super excited to be here. Hyperdroid asked us to tell a quick theory. We've only just gotten started on YouTube, so I figured we should just summarize our big first video. Our theory is pretty different from the rest of the fanbase in that we think Cassidy and the crying child are the same character, and that Michael is the vengeful spirit. In essence, our idea is that William experimented with death and possessions after the bite of 83, and on the last night of the missing children's incident, shoved his son, Cassidy, into Fredbear in hopes of getting him to possess it. However, his big mistake was then moving and hiding Cassidy's body, so Cassidy's soul could never figure out what happened to it and fully possess the bear, resulting in the twitching, barely mobile Golden Freddy we see. William was then unsuspected in the murders due to his son being one of the victims, but Henry, who would have had access to the Springlock suits and knew where the Aftons lived, would have unwillingly taken the fall. Then, after all the games happened, instead of Cassidy being the vengeful spirit, it's instead Michael, who was already vengeful enough to spend years haunting his own corpse in order to track down his dad, and was the only person who would have been to all the locations utilized and seen all the animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night. You can check out our full video for more details and evidence. Hopefully by the time this video is out, our second FNAF theory will also be done, which involves Vanessa and her connections to the Afton family in the games. Thanks again to Hyperdroid for letting us be a part of this. We almost missed the deadline because I'm bad at scheduling. This fanbase has so many cool theories, and I hope you find one you like.
Dual protagonist theory is the theory that the core FNAF games are experienced by two different characters, Mike and Cassidy. Mike is usually the Night Guard. Cassidy, meanwhile, has her spirit somewhere in FNAF World's animatronica, on the flip side, in the spiritual land of video games. We know that Mangle's Quest, Fruity Maze, and Midnight Motorist are real arcade games in universe. So the idea is that all the 8-bit minigames are real games that Cassidy is playing through while Mike survives his nighttime ordeals. That is, of course, until UCN, when Cassidy is involved in the nighttime gameplay as the host of William's Torment, and the other content is experienced by Mike, which is why those cutscenes are now in the form of TV shows, Mike's favorite thing.
So, the theory that I want to submit for today is that of the Vengeful Spirit's identity, and why I don't think it's Cassidy. Personally, I think the Vengeful Spirit is Andrew from Fazbear Frights. Now, a lot of people are going to be turned off to that idea because most people don't really like the idea of the books being canon, which is fair enough. A lot of them do introduce some pretty weird things, Andrew included. Now, there's a lot of reasons why I believe that Andrew's the Vengeful Spirit. I have a thread on Twitter right now that goes over this in a lot more detail, but the main points you would want to focus in on for this theory would be like the Toy Chica cutscene that implies there's 7 victims, the vast differences in personality between Cassidy and the Vengeful Spirit, especially when you compare her relationship with the bite victim to that of Andrew's relationship with Jake, really damages the idea that Andrew is meant to just be a parallel to her. And other stuff like the Wither Chica dialogue and the Mangle dialogue implying that the Vengeful Spirit is male, whereas Cassidy has only ever been depicted as female, that sort of thing. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thank you to Hyperdroid for letting me submit this.
Hello everyone, I'm Loops, and I'm here to talk about who Old Man Consequences is. Well, to start things off, he's just a weird little alligator man that keeps fishing in this weird red forest. But wait, there's more to him than you think. So yeah, he did first appear in FNAF World, and then he appeared again in Ultimate Custom Night. And you can either talk to him or drown yourself in a lake, which will do different things in each game. In Ultimate Custom Night, your game will just crash, and that's it. But in FNAF World, drowning yourself in a lake will lead you to this screen. I'm sure this screen means something to do with Happiest Day, and the person we see standing here is the puppet with like missing children or something, but I don't really know for sure. But back to who Old Man Consequences is, I don't think he's like a specific person in the lore, but rather just like a moral figure to tell Cassidy to finally stop torturing Afton and finally leave him to his demons and rest your own soul. I say this because of the lines that he says in Ultimate Custom Night, and also with the distant screaming that you can hear in the background of presumably William Afton suffering in hell. But yeah, that's personally all I have to say about Old Man Consequences. There really isn't much to say about him. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the video. Bye.
This game introduces us to the new era of FNAF story. Fazbear Entertainment has been rebooted, and their first action is to hire an indie game developer to create video games about everything that's happened up until this point, and frame it all as just myths and rumors, which Fazbear Entertainment then create FNAF Help Wanted to seemingly stay on top of said rumors, and then make fun of them so it seems like it came from the mind of a complete lunatic. However, during development, they scan old circuit boards, and the code attached to speed up the process of coding the game by helping make the mechanics more authentic to the real things, which actually included an anomaly within the code that begins causing some issues. The anomaly then tried taking over QA tester Jeremy, leading to him being implied to take his own life to escape it, which is when who we'll call Tape Girl takes over. She picks up right where he left off, meaning right with the anomaly. Over time, she's able to take the anomaly's code apart and hides it randomly throughout the game, in hopes that it's never put back together. However, she then seemingly switches her decision and asks the player of this game, who is actually Vanessa from the next game, to hunt the tapes and put the code back together. Vanessa does this, unknowing that it's not the real Tape Girl saying this and is actually the anomaly mimicking her voice to trick Vanessa to follow the instructions, creating the anomaly once more, who now takes the form of a mascot-looking spring bunny who most call Glitchtrap, who is then able to infect her through the VR and is seemingly able to infect her mind. The single biggest question that came from this game is whether the anomaly / Glitchtrap is an AI mimicking William, namely the AI we learn about in the books who later shows up in the games, the Mimic, or actually the real original William. This debate has continued to this very day, although I personally heavily believe that it's just the Mimic virus mimicking William Afton. I have a plan for my next video to go into exactly this topic, present both sides, and finally come to a conclusion with all the mountains of evidence in mind, so subscribe for that. But let me give a quick rundown of both sides. The first ever things that Glitchtrap does in this game is mimic Tape Girl's voice to get you to collect all the tapes. Its entire voice lines in this game being a slowed down version of the Hi Hello from Tape Girl, and stealing the Spring Bunny costume from the Pizza Party game mode to represent itself. Not only this, but the books tell us that the Mimic was meant to observe and then mimic the animatronic show routines to speed up the process for making copies of the animatronics, which is basically just another way to say and directly mirrors how the circuit boards for Glitchtrap were used to accurately recreate the original performances to speed up the process for them, well, making copies of the animatronics. Not only that, but it's then mentioned shortly after that the Mimic began mimicking humans in a Fazbear location in ways unintended, which to me screams Afton. In the next FNAF game, FNAF AR, we also learn that Glitchtrap uses Vanessa to search up how to induce compliance in human subjects, and similar searches which make little sense if it's William himself, because why would the experimenting William Afton that we all know need to search this, and why specify human subjects if he's also still a human spirit? Although I should mention that some of the community still believe that instead of coming from the Mimic and its code, Glitchtrap is instead the real William Afton, somehow transferring his soul or consciousness from Scraptrap's animatronic code. Just to keep it a little more fair, and instead of being extremely biased, which I definitely am about this topic, a few evidence pieces used for this theory from this game / Glitchtrap alone are Glitchtrap is, well, Glitchtrap. It should be no surprise that this is assumed to be William Afton from just looks alone. Let's be completely fair here. That's the main issue with this debate. Even if it's an AI mimicking William, it will still obviously look and act like William, because it's trying to be him. So either way, it's William in some way. Glitchtrap is also always associated with the color purple throughout the games, which is on par with Glitchtrap looking like Spring Bunny, considering William's entire character in the original story was being the purple guy. In Princess Quest on the mobile port of Help Wanted, the anomaly says I always come back, which is a catchphrase of William's. While this could just be a reference to the catchphrase, it should be noted that, to our knowledge at least, the movie does put a spanner in the works. This isn't ever said outside of Scraptrap himself saying it in FNAF 6, who under this theory just happens to be where it's theorized William's possession comes from, and more. Either way, those are the two options that you can make your own mind up on. And there are admittedly a lot more pieces of evidence for both sides from the future games, but also that I just cannot get into, because I will clearly seem biased when there's like 50 pieces of evidence for the Mimic and like 5 for William. But I'm gonna make it clear that after reviewing all the evidence for both sides, listening to and analyzing Scott's own comments about the story and Glitchtrap specifically, I personally and heavily believe that Glitchtrap is the Mimic code, more so a branch / subroutine of it focused on mimicking William Afton, and that while William himself is gone for good, his evil continues to live on in ways unimaginable. Either way, like I mentioned earlier, a video covering this topic will be releasing very soon, so if you would like to see truly all the evidence, make sure to check that out.
Hello, I am Mr. HQ. Here's my theory. Is FNAF 1 through UCN canon to the games? As we learned from Help Wanted, Fazbear Entertainment has actually hired an indie developer to make light of their tragic past by creating some games that they later recreate in this in-universe VR game. So did this story that we've been following for years just get thrown out? Well, maybe not entirely. As in a Tales from the Pizzaplex book, we're told a really similar story to this one, but the indie developer actually ends up making 4 games with a 4th one not being completed. So 1 through 4 are the only non-canon ones? Seems like a lot of theorizers haven't formed a concrete answer to this, and we've just moved on.
Usually I let the theorists speak for themselves, but I think I can actually quickly give you a concrete answer to this question. This game posed the big question of whether FNAF got rebooted mainly by using an image of Scott Cawthon himself as the game developer. So doesn't this mean that Scott is now canon in universe? Meaning that all the FNAF games we've played up until this point actually never happened, and that this game is the start of a FNAF reboot. Well, that was the most popular theory 5 years ago, until Scott himself stepped in and intervened, debunking that theory with the quote, "Yes, I use my own picture for this indie game developer because it's an obvious parallel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually me in universe. How do you take characters that are canon, along with characters that are questionably canon, and characters from every point of the timeline, and throw them all together in one game that is canon?" That's quite the problem when you think about it, but it was important for me that Help Wanted means something. I didn't want just a meaningless collection of minigames, although I'm sure most people would have been okay with that. I wanted it to be canon, and that meant that I needed to solve the substantial puzzle of how. Meaning Scott made the indie game developer storyline to specifically make this game canon to the rest of the story that we already had, while featuring characters such as the Phantoms, Nightmares, and Easter egg characters that realistically no one in Fazbear Entertainment would or should know about, and some that might not even exist, and are simply just there for fun.
Okay, thank you. Subscribe to Hyperdroid. I'm Mr. HQ. Huge honor. Bye bye.
This DLC continues the story from the main game, where the now infected Vanessa, aka Vanny, is a full reluctant follower of Glitchtrap, seemingly creating a mask for it that she's going to continue to use to follow Glitchtrap's instructions in the next installments, and as her story continues. Fazbear Entertainment, on the other hand, are seemingly constructing a mole. The public seem to have believed their corporate lie, and the business is now alive and well. Also, a small side note here is that in this DLC, when you die, you get taken to this place where a giant dread bear looms over you and holds onto graves, which I personally think is what's meant to be representing FNAF 6. The 5 missing children, Molten Freddy, Charlie, Lefty, Elizabeth, Scrap Baby, and Michael, with William being the middle glitchy one, possibly showing how even dead, Gravestone, the curse of Afton lives on. There's also a chance that means Dreadbear in this shot is meant to represent Henry, mirroring Bear of Vengeance possibly referring to Henry vs. William, having control over everyone and setting them all ablaze. This game also started the theories about Fall Fest 83, leading some to believe the Bite of 83 possibly took place around Halloween, with what appears to be William's car in the back, the Afton house in the hills, and the Dread Bear possibly being a reference to Fredbear itself. This can still be true, however in the future games it seems like these Fall Fests were actually an annual thing for Fazbear Entertainment, and possibly where the company all started, mainly due to the reveal that there was a Fall Fest in 1970. We also seemingly got the mask that the FNAF 4 bullies would have worn in 1983 too, which is more of just a cool detail. This game contains a bunch of emails that I'll show up next, and a select few further tell the story of how the outside perceived Vanessa as she was falling to the corruption of the virus, and how she was slowly creating her Vanny costume. It's unclear how much of this game is actually canon to FNAF right now, as security breaches files skip it, calling itself FNAF 9, which FNAF AR would be if it's canon, and the game is also now discontinued. However, it being canon doesn't really break the law or anything, it just helps us understand how others saw Vanessa during this time, and that the whole Fazbear Funtime service also helped fund the upcoming Pizzaplex. In order for the game to be canon, the actual animatronics being sent out to the public are most likely just endoskeletons with some sort of illusion disc-esque technology to create each character and/or skin for each holiday. A theory that came from this game is that the bright remnant that you collect in FNAF AR forms from positive emotion, while the dark remnant forms from negative emotion, or agony for a better word, which collecting too much of it creates Shadow Bonnie, possibly hinting that the shadows from the original story were actually created by a large amount of agony, like I theorized, possibly from a specific event such as the missing children's incident and the FNAF 2 murders. Another theory that mainly started from this game was the fact that an email contains the name Vanessa A, which some theorized could mean that Vanessa might actually be an Afton.
So, you know how in FNAF AR's Dark Circus DLC, we find an old circus area with a bunch of broken down animatronics, right? And what are the new Steelwool games teasing? A little something called Fall Fest, in both Ruin as well as Help Wanted 2. Not to mention, it was teased as early back as even Curse of Dreadbear, which released before FNAF AR by the way. So, I think it could be a possibility that this area from the Dark Circus is where Fall Fest took place. Or, if we were to take a more loose interpretation, this area could be a representation of where Fall Fest takes place, which I think fits really well considering its broken down aesthetic, which could signify it being an old place. And we know that Fall Fest was both a thing in the 70s thanks to Help Wanted 2 as well as 1983 thanks to Dreadbear. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
This game spawned so many theories from the community with the pros and cons listed, such as Gregory is a robot, a theory spawned mostly from the weird visual mechanics that occur when Vanny is near us, that Glamrock Freddy calls Gregory broken instead of the cut dialogue just saying that he's bleeding, as well as Gregory seemingly being homeless, possibly hinting towards him being a broken robot that after escaping the Pizzaplex has nowhere else to go because he doesn't know any actual humans. This theory mainly comes from the fact that we didn't know too much about Gregory, however later we learned that he actually consistently went to school and had a good childhood, as the therapists confirm. So the likelihood of Gregory being a robot is lowered quite a lot. Also, the fact that Burntrap didn't try and control Gregory and instead controlled Glamrock Freddy to turn against Gregory is quite telling too. Think of it, if Gregory was a robot, why not take him over instead, and just get him to stop his mission of stopping you? Just food for thought. Vanny and Vanessa are different people. A theory that spawned from the rooftop ending showing Vanny dying, revealing Vanessa underneath, but then later showing Vanessa on top of the roof looking down at her body. Another point was the VR sisters in Fury's Rage. Apparently new characters never seen before that's foreshadowing the twist that they're separate. This has multiple cons however, as not only did the ending get confirmed to be a fake ending in Ruin, but the VR sisters aren't actually new characters and instead variants of the Arcade Mayhem Chica skins. Look closely, they have beaks, much like how the other characters are just variants of characters/skins from past games. The Afton family rebuilt, a theory that the Afton family has basically returned in this game. William as Glitchtrap and Burntrap, Crying Child rebuilt as Gregory with his visual similarities, Elizabeth rebuilt as Vanessa, siding with their father and having a bad childhood etc, and possibly Michael possessing Glamrock Freddy, as it would fit the pattern, and would mean that he's basically protecting his brother, which would make sense considering he's the only Glamrock helping Gregory. Although as I mentioned earlier, Gregory had a good childhood, which William Afton would not provide judging by every other child of his, and every other continuity showcasing that he wouldn't. Then Vanessa, whose connections to Elizabeth seem to be answered in the FNAF movie, with it being revealed that Vanessa is literally just an Afton, and William's daughter, which is actually possible to fit into the game's timeline too. Then there's Michael possessing Glamrock Freddy, which mainly comes from the quote "I am not me," although "I am not quite myself" at a moment is also said in both this game in the parts and services section and Help Wanted 2 in the freezer section, making the quote seemingly only about when he's able to kill you and or out of whatever safe mode he's under. Not only that, but in the next games, Glamrock Freddy is simply just an AI too, with no real hint at any possession. William or the Mimic being Burntrap is the same as him being Glitchtrap, heavily debated. However, this one is actually more easy to solve as the Burntrap ending was confirmed to no longer be canon in Ruin, with it seemingly just being Gregory's drawing, proven further by all the damage from the ending being completely reversed. Not only that, but the Burntrap side of the office went from being purple to orange to match the Mimic instead in Ruin, and a new claw mark in both the vent that leads to the Mimic's lair and also in the vent that leads to Burntrap's lair, connecting the two as the same. Not only that, but in the Tales from the Pizzaplex epilogues, the Mimic happens to look burnt and be wearing bunny ears, to the point it gets confused as the guitarist Bonnie. Burntrap was also directly visually connected to the Mimic in Ruin, with the Mimic being taken by the Scooper looking identical to Burntrap being taken by the Tangle. Most importantly, Scott himself stated that Burntrap was never meant to move in the game and was meant to just appear in the shadows, meaning he was never meant to have a big reveal nor boss fight. So with all of that and more, this theory of the entire family coming back seems unlikely. Since this is still believed by many, I am going to mention again though that this section is biased, and it's up to you whether my rebuttal swayed your opinion or not. The identity of Patient 46 spawned a lot of theories, but was actually answered in the Tales from the Pizzaplex story GGY, which confirms Gregory is Patient 46 and basically retells the same story, a future game even having Gregory shoot the CDs. The true ending was also heavily debated, but we actually got an answer for it in the Ruin DLC and doubled down in Help Wanted 2, the canon ending being the Princess Quest ending. Also, a neat seemingly confirmed lore detail is the order of the original missing children, as there's a board with some balloons on it that are specifically coloured the same as the original animatronics, and the previous games give us some more definitive proof, with Chica being the first, confirmed in Ultimate Custom Night, Bonnie the purple 2, Freddy as seen in Help Wanted as being the third to be stuffed, Foxy the red 4, and Golden Freddy the gold 5.
While Security Breach's fire escape ending shows Vanessa in the Vanny costume on the ground, it also shows a seemingly alive Vanessa on the roof. While some argue this could be Vanessa's spirit, her appearing where the fire escape lets out and the fact that Steelwool bothered to include this shot rather than just leaving it as the Vanny being Vanessa reveal raises an eyebrow from me, especially since earlier in the game, we see the camera feed in Lost and Found switch from Vanessa to Vanny with no time for a costume change, and Vanny and Vanessa have separate voice actresses. Additionally, in Vanessa's therapy sessions, her records were tampered with, and she seems to view Glitchtrap and her father, Bill, as the same person, something that stands out with Bill being a nickname for William, Vanessa having parallels to Elizabeth as shown by her holding an ice cream cone in the Princess Quest ending, her fear of dark basements, and her green eyes. And on top of this, in Help Wanted, Vanny says that no one suspects anything. Meanwhile, Vanessa is in company-mandated therapy because she was being suspicious. Because of all this, how robot people are a canonical thing in this franchise, and Elizabeth Afton pretending to be someone else was one of said robot people in the novel trilogy, it's possible that the reason there are two Vanessas who look the same is because the human one is Vanny, and the other is a replacement controlled by Elizabeth to divert suspicion.
You know, it's very likely the staff bots are actually possessed. In Security Breach, you read about all staff meeting, which is mandatory, and there will be cake. And when you go to the place where the party took place, everything is wrecked. And I mean it. You find a duffel bag named Pink Slip in the middle of it, and read that the staff project was a success. It's ironic as hell, as in the franchise, birthdays are almost like bad omen. Think about it. Charlie's death, the bite of 83, Elizabeth getting scooped, the bite of 87, DMCI, and so much more. Which still in Security Breach, you can see that there's a decapitated staff bot with its head shoved on a cake. The Nightmare staff bots could just be the soul of the employees acting up, just like we have seen with the classic and the toys. Also, in Help Wanted 2, do you really think that the company would just allow their program to do strikes?
During a look through of Security Breach, Reddit user Immense Cassing made a discovery in one of the party rooms of the daycare, in which they discovered a recreation of Happiest Day, along with the constant mentions of 40, which instantly clicked into our mind that this is specifically talking about 40 years after the bite of 83, showing the Happiest Day did happen in 2023. However, one thing I noticed that they didn't elaborate on was that while most of the characters were represented, Bonnie and Golden Freddy were missing from their chairs, which led me to come to the conclusion that Happiest Day actually failed. And the reason why was because Jeremy, the child's soul, was never found and is the reason the MCI are still around in the series. This explains Withered Bonnie's odd line in UCN about being trapped alongside the player, and it explains Bonnie's importance in more recent lore. It also explains the line, "Remember Jeremy," because he was forgotten all those years ago during FNAF 3, leaving Crying Child's birthday incomplete for now.
The story of this game was actually quite straightforward. Sometime after the Tales from the Pizzaplex epilogues, whether you consider them completely within the game timeline or just paralleling events, Security Breach takes place. And then after the Princess Quest ending, Gregory and the newly freed Vanessa work together to program Nexus up to the Pizzaplex systems. Whether they made the actual machine or not, they definitely have been down there and helped reactivate it due to Gregory's backpack being down there, and Nexus being designed after a rabbit, possibly Vanessa taking back the rabbit persona she's had to live with for the past few years. This is doubled down in Help Wanted 2. Nexus being a program designed to keep the Mimic underground, also spawning the Nexus entity whenever someone starts messing with the security. Then an earthquake, aka most likely just the blob/tangle, destroys the Pizzaplex and causes it to close for seemingly good. The main theory surrounding this game is which ending is truly canon and what may have happened to Cassie's father. But with the little information we got and all endings basically concluding at the same spot, Cassie still underground with a newly freed Mimic, that's about it for fully fledged theories just about the DLC itself, as the story provided to us was quite simple and basically just an epilogue to Security Breach. Although somehow the most YouTubers wanted to cover Ruin over the other games, so...
In the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Pressure, it stated that Springlock suits were decommissioned not long after they were made, and in Security Breach's Ruin DLC there's a cutout of Freddy called 70s Freddy in the files, which indicates Fredbear's opened in the 70s. Since Springlocks were decommissioned in 1983 or later, as we know from FNAF 3, they probably didn't exist in the 70s. In the Tales story The Mimic, Edwin is seen turning costumes of the original Freddy's gang into animatronics. What this implies is that the costumes the Mimic wears and the costumes turned into the original gang were used for Fredbears before Springlocks were introduced. This explains why the the Fredbear's posters from Security Breach have Fredbear and Spring Bonnie look like Freddy and Glitchtrap, because those were the designs of the characters before the Springlocks were introduced, and Fredbear was originally Freddy before Freddy became his own character. An animatronic version of Glitchtrap, possibly even what Scraptrap is made from, is what Spring Bonnie looked like at Fredbear's, while the one at Freddy's looks different and is the one that became Springtrap. This theory also explains why Phone Guy mentions that the animatronics haven't been clean in 20 years. The animatronics may not have existed that long, but the costumes they were made from probably did.
Some theorize that it isn't just the Princess Quest ending that's canon, and that it's a possibility the Burn Trap ending is also canon, explaining why we still see the Tangle in Ruin, and why Gregory is able to draw Burn Trap accurately as if he's seen him. The theory suggests that Gregory completed the Princess Quest ending first, freeing Vanny from the virus, and then completed the Burn Trap ending, which is why Vanny is completely absent from that ending. This theory is possible, however, due to the damage within Burn Trap's room itself being reverted back, and the Burn Trap ending being revealed to be drawn by Gregory. It seems more likely that only the Princess Quest ending happened.
For the ultimate big bad of this most recent era of FNAF, the Mimic seems to have sort of come out of nowhere, only appearing in a couple of books and one DLC. But if you look closely, the technology behind the Mimic has actually slowly been teased for the past 10 years of FNAF media. The Mimic is based on a real-world technology called machine learning algorithms. These programs are very complicated, but at their core, they allow a computer to recognize patterns and make decisions based on those patterns. It fuels all sorts of technology in our real world, from ChatGPT to the Face ID on your phone. In FNAF, it's this same technology that could give rise to the incredibly lifelike Glamrock animatronics or the rogue virus Glitchtrap. It's this same technology that Henry would have had to use to create the robot version of his daughter Charlie in the Fourth Closet novel. It's also the same technology that would allow the security puppet to recognize specific colored armbands like we see in the FNAF 6 minigame, and even the facial recognition software that we learned the toy animatronics were equipped with all the way back in FNAF 2 in 2014. That's right, you can draw a direct line of technological progression from the toy animatronics to the security puppet to Robo Charlie to Glitchtrap to the Mimic to the Glamrock animatronics.
So a strong theory of mine has to do with Roxanne Wolf. I've said this on my channel many times in reference to which animatronics throughout the Pizzaplex may or may not be possessed. And I believe that Roxanne Wolf is possessed. Reason being, after being deactivated, she suddenly comes back to life to save Cassie and fight the Mimic. RyeToast does not have an answer for this, ID's Fantasy does not have an answer for this, and I don't believe even MatPat has an answer for this. Because like with Glamrock Bonnie and all of the wet floor signs and everything that we deactivate throughout Ruin, nothing comes back to life. However, when she is needed the most, Roxanne suddenly turns back on and comes back to life after being deactivated. I believe she is possessed.
Hey, I'm Terminal Error, and the FNAF 1 animatronics aren't just refurbished from the withered models in FNAF 2. Let me explain. Besides the animatronics having huge differences between their FNAF 1 and withered counterparts, Chica, I'm mainly looking at you, we see Afton rip the animatronics apart in the Follow Me minigames to presumably melt down the animatronic components and inject the remnant that he gets into the Funtime animatronics. And since he melts down the animatronics, then the withereds shouldn't exist in the FNAF 1 location. But Freddy and the gang are still attacking us in FNAF 1, so how can that be? Well, these animatronics were made to replace the ones that Afton had melted, with one main difference: they run off of the Mimic program. Bone Guy says the animatronics can mistake people for endos, and that they're programmed to put any endos into a suit at night. This sounds a lot like the Mimic from the books, who mistakes the workers for animatronics and begins ripping their limbs off. If you still don't believe me, take a look at the Blob and Rockstar Row in Security Breach. They both contain FNAF 1 animatronic components that shouldn't exist if they were melted down for the fun times.
The
The story of this game is quite self-explanatory. It most likely takes place right before the Ruin DLC happens, and one of the endings even carries on directly to Ruin. We know this due to the shadowed characters showing up, such as Roxy, but also the animatronics have gotten their ruined prefixes by this point. We play as Cassie's father, as proven by the bunny mask being familiar to the player, much like the Faz wrench, plus the Faz wrench has the exact same numbers on the back like Ruin, us collecting Faz Force figures, as Cassie's father is a collector, and more. Plus, Cassie's father is actually most likely the bunny bully from FNAF 4, because of Cassie's father continuously having something to do with Bunny. The achievement for collecting the bunny mask itself being literally called Lost Luggage. The numbers on the back of Cassie's father's Faz wrench is the same hint that leads to the minigame that takes place in none other than Fredbear's Family Diner. And in Ruin, the Foxy and Bunny masks are actually in the same order that they are in the FNAF 4 minigames. It's unclear why he would be down here after security breach. Perhaps he actually knew about the Mimic somehow, leading to him telling Cassie he has to go somewhere and seemingly quickly, but we know that it's happened either way. Before we get into any of the theories, within the FNAF interview it was actually confirmed by J-Top from Stillwell Studios themselves that this game is the definitive end of Glitchtrap. I think this is very important to mention. This cutscene of Vanny destroying Glitchtrap is the confirmed end of Glitchtrap. Both of the endings of this game provide more evidence towards the theory of the Mimic family tree, where basically the Mimic 1 code, its name in the books, is the main and overall code, while everything else we see is simply a branch of it. Glitchtrap is just a branch focused on mimicking Afton, which does make sense when we see it's in control of the Vanny mask in Ruin, despite later being completely dead/defeated, showing that Glitchtrap likely isn't an independent code, as then the mask wouldn't still be infected by the Mimic in Ruin, if it was indeed independent. The other branches as an example would be focusing on stuff like infecting the Glamrock animatronics, monitoring the cameras, infecting the Mimic robot itself, which I think would mix with the Glitchtrap branch likely creates Burntrap, etc. With a file name for the Ruin lead-in ending being called Helptrap, that seems to double down on it too, telling us that by helping the Mimic, by giving the mask to Cassie to free it, is actually helping Glitchtrap too. The second ending shows us Vanessa under her Vanny persona getting rid of the Glitchtrap branch for good, ensuring none of it remains this time, as she now works against it with her own free will after being freed through Princess Quest. Besides this, the only other mystery is surrounding Candy Cadet's new stories, which no one can really pinpoint exactly what it's talking about, but one theory states that the story is about Vanessa, Gregory, and Mimic/Glitchtrap, her being taken over earlier in her life, and almost dying, but coming back later to fight it and joining forces with a young boy. However, there is a hole in that theory, as within the story the girl gets killed by the Mimic at the end, and it turns out the boy was actually just a facade the whole time, which seems to align more with Cassie and her being tricked by the Mimic's Gregory, but again, there's the hole in the theory too, as Cassie wasn't affected by the Mimic in any way when she was younger, and so she isn't returning to fight it in any way in Ruin, although I personally believe it might be about the Glitchtrap branch itself, being almost defeated due to Princess Quest/Vanny, and later trying to return via Help Wanted 2, only to be led by the player right back to Princess Quest/Vanny, and be defeated for good. As you can probably tell, the answers to Candy Cadet's stories are always quite unclear. However, fellow FNAF YouTuber FNAF released a video that may have the answer. In his video, he speculates that the story may actually be about Cassie's dad instead, the Scar possibly being one of the technicians working during Sister Location, mainly because the entire climax of the game has Cassie's dad reach a Sister Location elevator, this being the entire first trailer for the game too, and more evidence he provides in his video, which this I actually agree with. Also, a smaller lore detail that Help Wanted 2 also confirms is that Charlie died in 1983 by having you actually type in 1983 to receive the puppet memory. In Dorko's charity stream, he was playing a newer version of 5 Laps at Freddy's, a game which previously revealed that William Afton was indeed the yellow guy in the near impossible to solve Midnight Motorist, and confirmed that for us 100%. This version of the game ended up revealing something huge in that very same level though, an advertisement for Hug, a robotic vacuum unit made by Murray Co. This is huge. Not only is this directly telling us that Edwin Murray is in the game timeline in some way, but in the Mimic story we learn that Edwin starts off his company making this very unit, to the point that people theorized that Edwin may have made the iconic trash in the game, which this advertisement basically confirms, calling the vacuum Hug now, and therefore it's seemingly the precursor to the larger robotic vacuum Mr. Hugs. This is a huge deal to learn that Edwin and his origins definitely happen in the game timeline, but the surprises didn't stop there. We of course then got the announcement and then eventual drop of the surprise Help Wanted 2 update, immediately showing us the Tiger plush itself from the Mimic's book Origins, that is directly based off Tiger Rock, also pulling from his book Origins. It should not be understated how huge this is. These two things directly tell us that the book Edwin, his his book origins, including his son David with his tiger plush, and the Mimic's book origins are all indeed within the game timeline, just like Ruin teased by showing us the Mimic itself. If you weren't ever convinced by all the evidence before, these two things in themselves seem to tell us that the Tales from the Pizzaplex books are indeed within the game timeline, and what happens there happens here. This is huge. We now know the Mimic's story from basically beginning with the books all the way to its current end with Ruin. In a time where the book's canonicity to the games is the single biggest and most heated debate in the entirety of the FNAF community right now, us getting these clues and direct pulls from said books multiple games in a row without fail should not be seen as a coincidence anymore, nor brushed off so easily. It's why you already have and will continue to see so many start to come around to the idea. I'm personally confused when it's mentioned how maybe it just means the same events happen in both timelines, because at that point you're splitting the timeline into two near identical timelines, which only continue to get even more identical with each new game. And as we continue to be shown how many events do actually overlap and follow the same exact path. That's the main thing here. It's not just this thing from the books is in the games. It's what those specific things actually mean for the story, and how they prove the exact same events occur in both timelines to a T. And therefore, it's very likely that it's very simply the same timeline. This isn't like the novel trilogy where Henry is dead before the first game even takes place, or the movie where the crying child stand-in is kidnapped from a camping trip, where it's blatantly clear that these are different timelines. These are timelines that share the exact same order of events, and continue to use each other as blueprints, as if they're expanding the exact same story in the exact same timeline. Like I just mentioned, it was confirmed that Glitchtrap is gone for good after this game, yet he's somehow still infecting the mask by the time of Ruin, despite us knowing that's the Mimic, showing that Glitchtrap wasn't actually an independent code, and is instead a branch or form of the Mimic's code. This new update then doubled down on this and seemingly confirmed the theory for good, with us receiving the Tiger Rock plush that's personal to the Mimic, and the Mimic himself showing up in his own costume. Now that the Glitchtrap branch is cut off and gone for good, the Mimic has basically reverted back to his default settings, and it's just the plain Mimic with no more Afton influence. No more plushies of Afton's past. Now it's a plushie based on his own past. No more Glitchtrap costume. Now he's just himself. It's the exact same thing as the mask. Once Glitchtrap is removed, the Mimic is all that remains in its place. Not only this, but the game mode where we collect said Tiger Rock plush is actually called Puppet Master, a hint that the true Puppet Master behind everything in this game was actually the Mimic all along. I find it quite funny in the way that they delivered us this answer too, as they quite literally handed us the answer, with Glitchtrap being the one to hand us the Tiger Rock plush, which in itself shows that they're directly connected to one another. Mystic Hippo says all of this best and more directly than anything else, with a quote about the Mimic. A hidden performer is ready to take a bow. The Mimic was the hidden performer this whole time, pretending to be Afton, and with this game being the end of Glitchtrap, he's officially taken his final bow with that role.
Hi, I'm Nervous, and I have a theory that the digital entity we know as Mixus contains the digital consciousness of Cassie's dad. Help Wanted 2 is swimming in clues, starting with the way Mixus moves. Mixus teleports the same way we do in Help Wanted 2. Not just this, but the Mystic Hippo asks us an interesting question. Do you ever look at your hands? I mean, really look at your hands. Our hands in VR are blue, digital, and disconnected at the wrist. Standard for VR, certainly, but unique to one other character in the series. Mixus. This paired with the way we swap out our Vanny mask for a Bonnie mask, Cassie's dad's favorite character, and then make a trade with Vanny herself in a scene that leaves us trapped within the digital world, suggests we agree to stay. Vanny crushing Glitchtrap symbolizes she is working against him and in turn would not want the Mimic free. And what does Mixus do? Guards the door to the Mimic. So in Ruin, we see Cassie's dad manifest as the blue rabbit entity, doing everything in his power to keep his own daughter from freeing the Mimic. At least, that's my theory. Okay, bye!
When I first saw the Fall Fest 1970 poster in Help Wanted 2, a few things came to mind. The big circus tent in the middle immediately made me think of Circus Baby, who also has a suspiciously significant role in the game, even making a speaking appearance in the Fazbear Blast level, one of the 2 levels in Help Wanted 2 with Fall Fest imagery. If Fazbear Entertainment was originally a carnival-focused company, as the Fall Fest poster and the mascot suits in Ruin seem to suggest, it would make sense for the only character with circus in their name to originate there. Maybe baby is a simpler doll animatronic like the one we see in the movie. I know the movie doll is almost a direct recreation of Ella, the doll from the books, which is a separate character, but in the game universe it could easily be the earliest version of Circus Baby. Maybe Henry made the original doll but gave the rights to William to turn it into a fully fledged animatronic. And if William only acquired the animatronic instead of creating it, it would explain why Vlad says the baby isn't mine in The Immortal and the Restless. Those last two things are pure speculation, but I really do feel like Baby will be connected to the carnival in some way, especially based on what we see in Help 1 and 2.
So around when the first Ruin teaser came out, me and my friends, we made a joke theory about Helpy being an evil businessman. We didn't believe it. It was just like Helpy showed up in like every single game since, and we didn't know who the leader of Fazbear Entertainment was, so we decided to make it. But now, with Helpy in Ruin and Helpy projected in Help 1 and 2, it seems clear that while Helpy himself is not pulling the strings, the Mimic or some other AI is using Helpy's image to pull the strings from behind all the stuff. I was not expecting this joke theory to turn out to be true, almost, but apparently it kind of is.
So something interesting that people noticed in Help 1 to 2 is that Helpy, with an I, disappears when we do the Princess Quest 4 ending first, and is replaced with FNAF 6 images. So that got me curious. Why does Helpy disappear if we kill Glitchtrap? Well, from what we know from the game, Helpy is helping Glitchtrap since he wants us to collect the Fast Force, and he gets annoyed if we don't. So Helpy is evil since the beginning, which we already knew, since in Ruin, Helpy wants to help the Mimic. And it's been found in the files that the Fast Force ending is called Help Trap in the files. This name is interesting, since the trap part of the name is tied to Afton and Glitchtrap. Spring Trap, Scrap Trap, Glitch Trap, Burn Trap. Now we have Help Trap. So what if the reason Helpy disappears when we kill Glitchtrap first is because they are the same entity? Helpy in Ruin does have purple veins after all, and both want to help the Mimic by giving Cassie the mask. So is Helpy Glitchtrap? Well, that's for you to decide.
The lore of this game is quite simple, as it's a linear story game, although a few theories still came from it that I want to discuss. Although, hang on, someone's calling me real quick, let me just, oh hey.
Hi Hyperdroid, this is Tom calling from Game Theory. After the release of Into the Pit, we actually had our own theory about whether Oswald's dad was really the Freddy bro from FNAF 4.
I actually heavily agreed with this theory after watching your video about it, so take it away.
Hello internet! Welcome to Tom's mini theory in this massive video. During a random night, a Freddy mask will fall from the attic in Oswald's house. Oswald has no idea who Freddy is, so this mask has to belong to someone else in the house. In the original Into the Pit story, Oswald's dad tells us that he spends a lot of time in arcades during 1985. He also seems to be familiar with the Freddy Fazbear arcade from that same year, implying that Freddy's was the arcade he spent his time in, just like Freddy Bro. Finally, there's the timeline. Oswald is 10 during this story, and Oswald's dad says that he was just a couple of years older than Oswald in 1985. That phrase, a couple of years, on average actually means 3 to 4 years. So, in 1985, he was likely 13 to 14, and therefore, during the bite of 83, he'd have been 11 to 12. In FNAF 4, Freddy Bro and the gang measure in at around 56 to 59 inches tall, the exact average height of an 11 to 12-year-old boy. So, there you have it. Oswald's dad is Freddy Bro, and now, all these years later, he took a job at a mill that was making Fazbear parts to try and atone for the mistake that he and his friends made on that fateful day in 1983. Just like Cassie's dad, Bonnie Bro, and good old Foxy Bro, Michael Afton. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory!
Thanks, Tom. Not only that, but there's a few moments within the game where we get small bits of lore dropped in about the past games in the franchise, such as 1985 being repeated once again as seemingly the exact year that the missing children's incident takes place, meaning June 26, 1985, thanks to FNAF 1. That Fredbear did indeed later turn into Golden Freddy, with all the Fredbear posters surrounding the Black Hat Golden Freddy. The real audio from Springtrap's death finally revealed that Dumpster Diver Weekly found the trash in the gang from the town's mill's dumpsters, that the wall is still sealed off in Freddys, meaning this game has to take place before FNAF 3 occurs, that Susie's dog may actually be possessing the cupcake, with the cupcake being noted as continuously biting people and growling, this explaining how Afton claimed he knew where it was, a photo of the game timeline William Afton and Henry Emily, and a clear example and explanation that in the games themselves the kids do actually slowly forget their memories after dying, showcased with us seeing Oswald forget his own name and who he is in real time. Something I should probably mention is the time travel in this game, and that it's not actually real time travel as you think it is, and instead it's traveling through memories, agony, whatever other supernatural stuff is causing this. We know this for a fact due to some of the kids from the very start randomly reappearing in later nights, when they're not meant to, as simply just visions of the past. Things in the past somehow affecting the present despite it being literal decades since those things would have happened, so things like a door breaking would have been fixed and repaired within those decades, which we do see in the previous days that it was indeed fixed in the present, and also due to Pitchtrap himself, which is clearly not William Afton, and it's just the manifestation of the monster that he truly is. Not only that, but in the game we also get to see the missing children incident itself. Only 5 children were killed, and that's a fact. But wait, now there's a 6th here? Most people theorize this to just be Charlie, as she's always been the 6th grouped up with the missing children. But others theorize it to be about Andrew, a book character who's basically the vengeful spirit there and whose origins are unknown. I personally think this is just grouping Charlie in with the others, which has happened since even FNAF 2, as all we really know about Andrew is that he died by Afton's hands, wanted revenge, and really nothing else. And since the MCI was reported as only 5 in the entire 10 years of FNAF, even as recently as the movie it's only 5, it seems that he wasn't killed with them, and Charlie is definitely more likely to be the 6th grouped up with them than Andrew is, which again, whose death and location is still a mystery to this day. Before the game came out, people, including me, thought this would solve the debate about whether the Fazbear Frights books, well, only the stories connected to the overarching Stitch Wraith plot, were in the game timeline or not. So, does this game mean the books are in the game timeline? Well, honestly, I can't tell what answer is trying to be provided here, if any. This game features a ton of Easter eggs, like I shared in the previous section, from across the franchise, but also has a lot of direct pulls from the games themselves, and specific things from the game timeline. Currently, I believe the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories are in the game timeline almost definitely, and that there's a moderate chance that the Fazbear Frights are too. But I also don't heavily wish the Fazbear Frights are or anything, so I'm actually being completely unbiased here. I believe that this game can be taken a few ways, with these as the options. 1. This is in the game timeline, and outright proves that all the Stitch Wraith connected stories are in the game timeline too. The new lore and confirmations for the game timeline, and the fact this is an official and fully fledged FNAF game, show that Into the Pit itself is in the game timeline, meaning the hidden minigames connecting the other stories to this game, Stitchline, mean they also carry over and in the game timeline too. The random Easter eggs are just that, Easter eggs and fun nods, while the things you have to actually do something for, such as the hidden minigames, are more important. 2. This is a soft reboot of the Fright stories, and this adaptation, with the future adaptations, Fetch is already noted by Scott to be the one he wants to make next, will be the actual game timeline versions of those stories, and the more cleanly fit version of Stitchline, basically a yes and a no. They are in the game timeline, but some things have been changed just to fit cleaner. Or 3. This game isn't proven to be in the game timeline and does not actually change anything in the debate, leaving the question still unanswered. I think if this game isn't in the game timeline, it simply just means the debate remains unanswered, as it can't both be a fun anniversary game so it's not canon, but then also be the canon version of Stitchline that debunks the books being canon, and we have the answer to the huge question. But personally, I think that this game shows us that the Stitchline from the books is indeed within the game timeline, and currently I will be moving forward with that in mind. Probably. I don't know, I guess we just have to wait for Scott to hopefully one day just give us a non-vague and no other way to interpret this answer, which, good luck to us. Although being in a separate continuity, the novels give great insight into the game's true story. For starters, the entirety of Remnant came into fruition here. TLDR, it's basically a word for the haunted metal itself, or soul energy, showing that William can use the endoskeletons from possessed animatronics, burn them down, and then isolate said energy into a single controllable substance if need be. In fact, almost an identical thing seems to happen in the games as the novels, where we learn that the scooper, instead of a basic syringe, contained Remnant that was injected into the Funtime animatronics at some point. Both Henry's completionist and insanity speeches signified that the remnant gathered by William was also from the first 5 children in the games too, and that he gathered their endoskeletons from the Follow Me minigames, quite literally being the exact same thing that happens in the novels. Some of the names came from the books too, such as William Afton himself, the murderer, Henry, the co-owner, and his daughter Charlie, the girl who possesses the puppet. The first book also gives some good insight into William and Henry themselves, such as stating that William was once fat and lively, who became sallow and thin after the murders, while Henry was withdrawn and shadowy. It's also noted how William had journals full of raving paranoia, passages about Henry that ranged from wild jealousy to near worship, showing that there was possibly already internal rivalry between the two before the murders even began. This would make sense with how, by the fourth closet, we learned that William outright stole the fourth Charlie from Henry, as he seemingly couldn't achieve creating that himself. In fact, some believe William killed Charlie in the games due to his insane jealousy that we hear about here, possibly toe-to-toe with Midnight Motorist, theorized to show him coming home completely drunk and abusive later that night of Charlie's murder. Throughout this logbook, we also learn of two other spirits inhabiting the book, whether literally or not. One writing in faded text to someone else altering the text. Writing multiple times throughout things like, do you remember your name, who are you, and what's your name? Hinting that we're meant to get the names of these two spirits within the logbook. Very quickly we discovered that one spirit is the crying child, hinted at via the does he still talk to you text next to the Fredbear plush, as well as other hints. And that the other was the fifth missing child who possesses Golden Freddy, hinted at via the gravestone drawing having my name written on it by Faded only a few weeks after we got the final FNAF game, with an ending literally containing a name hidden on a gravestone for the fifth missing child. Fast forward to June 4th, and MatPat released a game theory about the logbook, asking us to help him solve this thing after providing us with numbers that throughout the logbook are either in the wrong places or noted in red as important, those being 52, 39, 15, 7 and 2, grabbing the new numbers from the chalkboard 5 plus 4 for 9 and the 3, 10 and 11, and finally 811. Then later that same day on the Game Theory subreddit, user DPowerful1 figured out that you need to insert these numbers into the word search grid instead of the Foxy grid, giving us 5 across 2 down for C, 3 across 9 down for A, 1 across 5 down for S, 7 across 2 down for S, 9 across 3 down for I, 10 across 11 down for D, and finally 8 across 11 down for Y, to create the name Cassidy, the name of the Golden Freddy spirit. Finally, it was solved. However, that then left the Foxy grid unfinished, and there's clearly something there with the faded out ABC on the top left. Years later, the powerful duo on Reddit, Godzilla and Wolfie, shared their joint attempt at it. Some of Cassidy's questions to Crying Child were not responded to, but there were a few that actually were. Does he still talk to you was responded with, I can hear sounds. The party was for you was responded to with, it was for me. What do you see was responded to, I can't see, which using the page numbers for the questions got 75, 103 and 59, which in putting it into the Foxy grid gave us 7 across 5 down to get E, 10 across 3 down to get V, and 5 across 9 down to get A. Then finally they predicted that the random tally marks throughout were to be used to get the final letter, totaling to 47, and getting the letter 4 across and 7 down N to create the name Evan. However, just like MatPat said in his video, despite not being a bad theory or anything, the method does end up breaking on the 4th letter, and they end up using an entirely separate system to get it, which feels like the wrong thing to do, as for Cassidy it was using the specifically marked numbers throughout, aka only using one method. This then led the community to collectively wave the white flag, and quite honestly give up. A lot of people, like me, not even trying to go back at it in the future because we felt like everything was already tried. This has allowed the puzzle to remain unsolved for 6 years, and therefore the Crying Child has gone unnamed for 9 whole years. This is where I come in. Something Altered writes in the logbook is I'm scared, which in the past was linked to the tally marks for some reason, but what if instead it actually links back to Cassidy asking, do you still have dreams? Right above a picture of the nightmares. Stretch? Sure. But then notice how I can hear sounds, which link back to E, it was for me, which linked back to V, and I can't see, which linked back to A, which are also all answers to Cassidy's questions, all happen to come from the same end of night quizzes together, including I'm scared, also an answer to one of the questions. It would be weird for 3 of the only 4 answers to matter, right? So what happens when you use the page number of the question, 41, for 4 across on the first row in the Foxy grid? You get, oh, D. Well, great, another failed attempt that literally just says Evad, which isn't a real name, right? Yes, right, that's not a real name. So I went back through the book to look for any more hints, and I noticed that throughout the book a certain word keeps coming up. After each night's work, we ask that you take a moment for self-reflection. Reflect on the things in life that you are most thankful for. Reflect on the happiest day of your life. Reflect on the meaning of your dreams. And a bunch more activities all to do with reflecting on your life, looking back on things, a bunch of self-reflection quizzes, as well as a giant damn mirror, which is where Cassidy asks the Crying Child, what do you see? And is on the direct opposite opposite page of where we solved Cassidy's name. But why am I bringing this up? Well, it got me thinking about the solution I got, and what happens when you put a word in a mirror reflection. It goes back to front, and the word is reversed. So what would happen when you put EVAD into a mirror? It turns into DAVE, Dave, the crying child's real name. These two pages right next to each other give us the answers to both names and a full conversation. Who are you? It's me, Cassidy. What is your name? What do you see? Dave. All of the questions Crying Child later answers have bloodstains on them. All of the answers come from the same end of night quizzes. All of the reflection stuff hints at reflecting something, and the two names are both solved directly next to each other. To me, this seems pretty solid. Unlike Evan, this code doesn't break the method for the final letter, and actually remains consistent for each, making use of the final answer we get from the Crying Child that was seemingly responding to nothing, and it also makes use of the constant reminding to reflect throughout the book. I know some will have an issue with I'm scared being an answer for do you still have dreams, but the fact that it's specifically above the image of nightmare, which Mike himself categorizes here under a dream, and the fact that none of the other questions are even somewhat possible to be the question he's responding to, it seems to be the right one. Wait, haven't we heard the name Dave somewhere else before? Yes, we have. Multiple times, actually. Going release order and in the Silver Eyes, a book which was released directly after FNAF 4, and a single month before FNAF World, both about the Crying Child, William Afton uses a disguise to hide from the public that he's the same guy. This disguise being Dave Miller. But why did he pick Dave? Well, if the Crying Child's name is truly Dave, then that means Scott specifically picked Dave for William to be literally using his dead son's name to disguise himself. That's insane. If you believe that Mike is under the alias of Fritz in FNAF 2, then that's another Afton who uses a dead person's name as their alias. Like father, like son. But wait, what about the Miller part? Well, coincidentally, ever since the Silver Eyes, it literally never appears ever again, to the point that the fourth closet even calls him Dave/William Afton. In the week before, we even learn about Phone Guy's maintenance friend named Dave, who is a know-it-all, has personality flaws, and wants Phone Guy to fix the animatronics because there's no telling what will happen if they have too much or too little power. Which to me, this screams William Afton, and the way he warns the Phone Guy about fixing the animatronics makes it sound like he doesn't want them to shut off just in case something happens with the spirits. Which, along with the whole section ending with "you doubt Dave will tell you how to sabotage the animatronics," is extremely ironic with what we know William does in the FNAF 1 location to the animatronics after this, where he quite literally sabotages and destroys them, causing the spirits to come out, meaning this book seemingly doubles down that William's canon alter ego in the games is indeed Dave too, which once again happens to be missing the Miller part now. Also in the Tales from the Pizzaplex story The Mimic, there's a kid named David, the son of an animatronic engineer, who just so happens to be with his plush toy literally everywhere he goes, to the point that the Mimic continued to mimic it even after his death. Said plush was vital to his character's story, just like the Fredbear plush is to the Crying Child's. I'm not saying he's a Crying Child stand-in, but could possibly be a hint towards it. Also in the FNAF movie, there's a drawing of a kid named David whose mum is holding a party balloon, this being the only drawing on the entire wall to actually have a name for the child who drew it. Genuinely, how many coincidences until it's no longer a coincidence? The funny thing about this is that after I actually went ahead and did the simple thing of searching FNAF Logbook Dave, I found out that I'm not actually the first person to get this answer. I know, I'm shocked too. I 100% swear on everything that I got to the solution on my own, and literally up until this very point in the script I thought I was the only one who got Dave. But it turns out that it was pointed out as a possibility years ago, although after the Evan solution got debunked, for some reason those same people assumed that it meant the whole method was debunked, when no, it was just the final letter. Supplementary evidence time. Like Game Theory used to do, getting some real world facts into this, and Dave was actually quite a popular name back when he would have been born, being charted as the 3rd to 5th most popular male baby name between 1970 and 1980. The name Dave or David also means beloved, which considering most assume Mike's whole character arc starts from the regret of killing his brother in the games, and the movie goes out of its way to show how much he cares about his brother, it would make sense that he's beloved. Speaking of the movie, some people claim that the Crying Child's name is Garrett, which is his name in the movie. However, I don't think this is the case, mainly because Elizabeth's name was changed to Abby, which is just an anagram of and a reference to baby, and despite me saying it's a nickname for Elizabeth in my movie breakdown, it isn't actually a common nickname. And honestly, it's that uncommon that I'm almost certain Scott did not do that intentionally. The only reason I even thought Abby was a nickname for Elizabeth in the first place is literally because of a single website that comes up after a single Google search, saying that it's apparently true. Genuinely, that is the only reason I ever claimed that. Also in the same movie, William uses a different alias, Steve Raglan, instead of his pre-existing and canon alias, Dave Miller. Even in the novel trilogy, the name of Golden Freddy's spirit is a kid named Michael. Yes, Michael. And a kid named Jeremy doesn't even exist. These are different continuities. They have things all over the place, yes, even names. So I personally just do not think that Garrett is meant to be the crying child's real name, whether it's actually Dave like I'm suggesting or not. Now only one mystery remains: the tally marks. Seriously, what on earth are these for? Maybe it's a whole lot simpler than we all think. I remembered that all of the tallies put together equal to 39, and I've come to the conclusion, despite how it may be disappointing to some, that the whole point of them may have actually been to lead us back to page 39 itself, thinking we'll get a secret, which would then lead you to realize, oh wait, there's actually 2 page 39s here, and then you'd begin the Cassidy search. This seems like a cop-out though, right? Well, do remember that the search for Cassidy only started due to the ABC found on the Foxy grid, which also remember, didn't even end up being used for Cassidy's name at all anyways, meaning there'd have to be another way to get a hint that we're meant to investigate these random numbers to get a whole other name that's got nothing to do with the Foxy grid and the solution for that. Also notice how this page 39 happens to be the page which features the gravestone with my name on it, connecting to the 5th kid instead of the crying child, which also happens to be the first mention in the logbook that we're searching for their name too, and also happens to be about moving forward instead of reflecting back like we're told all throughout this book, further showing it's different to the other name. If the tally equaled to anything else but 39, I wouldn't believe this for a second, like you probably don't. But since literally all of the tallies are groups of 5 besides a single one just to make the number 39 instead of 40, honestly makes me think this conclusion isn't too far-fetched. Although after looking back through everything, I noticed something big. The puzzles for Cassidy and Dave are actually more connected than we realized, by being completely different. That may sound very confusing, so let me just explain. Cassidy's solution seems to be all about using numbers specifically, from the numbered tally marks to begin it like I've theorized, to how all the coordinates are obtained via the number connections throughout the logbook, such as the altered page numbers, the random numbers in the book itself, and numbers Mike's written in. Dave's solution, however, then happens to be all about using text, from the ABC to begin it, to how all the coordinates are obtained via words, using the questions and answers throughout. Both puzzles just happen to be the exact opposite of each other. Then remember that the way to solve Cassidy's name is by using an altered word search, while the way to solve Dave's name is by using the faded ABC grid, both the numbers fading out and the faded text on the grid itself, despite the fact that the entire logbook makes it clear as day that Cassidy was the faded text, while Dave, the crying child, was the altered text. They're helping the other remember their name, again using the exact opposite solutions to solve them both. Then also, something fellow YouTuber Ozone mentioned in his reaction to my video is that the tally marks happen to be 7 tallies of 5, while there's 1 tally of 4, which Cassidy's name happens to be 7 letters long, and she's the 5th of the missing children incident, while Dave's name happens to be 4 letters long and he's killed separately / ungrouped. But wait, you just swapped the methods for the two. Precisely my point. For the 3rd time, the exact opposite solution is used between the two, further proving the intentionality of it all. But now I would like to give quite a hot take to spice this video up that I noticed right after the video was out. Here we go. How we get Dave is actually more consistent and solid than how we get Cassidy. Seriously, let me explain. Dave is very simply the page number of the statement that's responded to for all 4 letters, which while yes, some use context clues, that doesn't change the fact that it uses the same exact method for all 4 letters, putting a statement to a response. Cassidy on the other hand uses altered page numbers for the first couple, but then suddenly it uses altered quiz numbers, random numbers on a chalkboard in the book itself that requires you to put 3 numbers together in order to get the final number to solve the letter, which none of the other letters require. Then there's random highlighted numbers, and finally numbers that Mike himself writes into the book that isn't even out of place or anything like the other letters were. Mike even writes other numbers throughout the logbook too that aren't even used for this solution. So in conclusion, conclusion, we have Dave, which has 4 letters using the exact same method. The only possible difference you could say is that the first and final letters both use a visual clue, sure. While Cassidy has 4 letters using the same method, but then the other 4 letters are using completely different methods. The only connection between them being numbers. This isn't to say Cassidy is wrong at all. In fact, I think Scott mentioning the name as the most accurate movie screenplay outright confirms that it's the right name, as well as using the name in the novel trilogy for one of the missing children. But my point is that Dave has actually gotten more consistently and solid than Cassidy is, despite the Dave solution being framed by some as more complicated, as having more problems in its solution, and as a code that doesn't work. I think in becoming so used to Cassidy being solved, we've forgotten what the mix and matching path to get to it actually was in the first place, as well as how some parts of it were literally just guessed after trying and failing multiple things, including the whole final put it into the word search grid solve itself, which had no hints towards it and was just tried since the Foxy grid was coming up with nothing. In fact, upon comparing the two and looking for any more connections, something that I noticed that I can't believe I missed the first time, which I just mentioned, is that both of these puzzles just happen to be completely fine for most of their solutions. But then suddenly, for both of their final letters, they suddenly and out of nowhere require Mike's input to help. For Cassidy's, it's Mike's 811 that he writes to get the final correct coordinate, while for Dave, it's Mike's nightmare drawing to get the correct answer for the correct coordinate. Both puzzles quite literally end in the exact same way, reflecting each other again. That's so important and everyone missed it, even I did. Both solutions for both names, Cassidy and Dave, both require Mike's input to get their final letter and to bring both puzzles to a close. I don't know how I missed this. But let's take a step back and review the biggest issue proposed with the Dave solution itself, before it's even solved into Dave, mainly about the responses to the questions themselves being a bit shaky. So let's actually go through them thoroughly one by one to ensure that these are likely the correct statements that the crying child is responding to. Although before any of this, why would we even assume that we're looking for the crying child's name? Well, very simply, the person we know as Cassidy is asking who we know as the crying child, do you remember your name? In the exact same book where a bunch of my names were a hint towards Cassidy's name being solvable. But how do we then assume that we get anything from attaching Cassidy's statements to the crying child's responses? Well, not only do we know that there's a puzzle focused on text thanks to the Foxy grid itself, unlike Cassidy's puzzle which is heavily focused on numbers, but it's also the fact that Cassidy makes 11 statements, most questions, yet the crying child only provides 4 responses, seemingly making these 4 responses important for some reason in some way. So we have only 4 mysteriously important responses to the countless statements made throughout the book, and also a puzzle that requires a focus on text specifically to solve and not numbers. So simply put 2 and 2 together to notice that we need to use the only 4 important conversations between the two to help get us our Foxy grid solved for the other conversator's name. But moving on to the statements and responses themselves. First is does he still talk to you, with the response I can hear sounds. Now this one already sounds a bit iffy. Although something a lot of people missed, even I did, is that this actually uses a context clue to figure out the correct response. With the process of elimination, we know that the auditory answer I can hear sounds would either be responding to the auditory questions does he still talk to you, or is this song familiar to you? But how do we choose which one is the correct one? Easy. One question is directly and undeniably linked with the crying child when it's matched together with the image right next to it, the infamous Fredbear plush. The other question, however, is asking whether the crying child has ever heard whatever song it is, and therefore has no feasible connection to him at all. He may have never even heard it. It's literally Occam's razor to a T. If you have 2 competing ideas to explain the same phenomenon, you should prefer the simpler one. So which one do we pick? The one that uses a visual clue to simply connect it back to the crying child. It also makes sense in general when we learn that in FNAF World, the same voice from the Fredbear plush at the end of FNAF 4 is still talking to the crying child, and so he would still be hearing it. The only other argument I've seen for this one specifically being wrong is that it just seems weird conversation-wise, which I personally don't see as a debunk, as to me it makes sense. Does he still talk to you? Refer to the Fredbear plush. I can hear sounds. Not only this, but the visual clue right next to it is also also used to directly answer who the he is in the question itself. Is it Afton, Michael, someone else? Who is the he that's apparently still talking to him? Cassidy's question is only made clearer with the image right next to it, which is very important to keep in mind for later. Next is the party was for you, with the response it was for me. This is quite a simple one, and I feel like I don't need to go too in depth into it. It's almost undeniable that those two connect directly. Then we get what do you see with the response I can't see. Again, another simple one that is almost undeniably connected, although this one actually also includes a context clue if you're somehow not sure, which, like the Fredbear plush, just happens to be right next to the question itself. Then finally we have do you have dreams, with the response I'm scared. This is the big one, and what this entire theory depends upon. Although I personally think it's actually quite easy. Just like the Fredbear plush, and I guess the mirror, in order to link it with the crying child and to get the correct question, you simply use the in-your-face image of Nightmare, which just happens to be right next to the question itself again, and just happens to be classified as a dream instead of a nightmare, just to get the point across even more. Under the perspective of a puzzle maker, that in itself is a very direct and clear visual clue provided for us to put the question together with the image, to get the final and seemingly correct corresponding answer, I'm scared. To me, this is actually very simple, with almost no complication needed. I get you may think it's weird to use a context clue, but the Fredbear plush actually does the same thing to ensure that you get the correct question, and this clue specifically had 2 entire pages to be drawn on. Yet it just happens to be drawn literally right underneath the question itself. If Nightmare was on the other page, sure, it's more stretchy, but it's right underneath it to put it all together. Do you have dreams? Refer to the nightmare imagery. I'm scared. Cassidy's question is only made clear and connected with the crying child by using the image right next to it again. The start and end of this solution both use a visual clue. Also, if you think it's odd because it uses Mike's input for the final letter, like I mentioned earlier, that just happens to be the exact same thing that happens for Cassidy's final letter too. The two puzzles mirror each other. Then finally, after you have all 4 letters in the order of crying child's answers, you use the countless mirror/reflection hints throughout with Evad to get a perfectly ordered and spelt out Dave. This is the biggest part of it to me. There's absolutely no brute forcing letters around required. I think everyone missed that. You literally don't have to force a single letter into place or switch anything up. It just perfectly becomes Dave in the correct order. Again, this mirror is right next to where we solve Cassidy, which I think is huge. Both names are solved right next to each other, making this, I think, the 5th example of these 2 puzzles being directly connected to each other in some way. Honestly, if there's 999 failed attempts at this puzzle, and 1 attempt actually works but just requires a little stretching, although when combined with the visual/context clues shown directly to us, it's actually no longer a stretch, it seems like that one working solution might just be the right one. Especially when there is literally no proposed alternative. I just feel like if you open your mind and go through the solution again, you might realize it's actually not as complicated as some are making it seem. It's quite simple. In fact, I just proved earlier that it's more simple than Cassidy's ever was. Either way, I believe Dave is the name of the crying child, and that the tally marks in the logbook specifically are to begin Cassidy's name hunt. Timeline-wise, the logbook itself is likely for the FNAF 3 location as a parody of a Freddys logbook, much like how the location itself is a parody on a Freddys location. Why isn't it just either meta or the logbook for FNAF 1's Freddys, with all the FNAF 1 imagery? Well, it simply can't be. First of all, we can immediately disprove it's during FNAF 1. Without even solving what the real value is, which I'll show later, this immediately tells us that the value of the 1993 Freddy coupons don't have the same value anymore. If the logbook is also June 1, their value would just be the same. Moving on, and we know that FNAF 4 and Sister Location's main gameplay, almost 99% sure, both take place after FNAF 1. So now let's go over why the logbook is after Sister Location occurs. Clara from The Immortal and the Restless is mentioned, Mike watches this show during Sister Location's gameplay, Casual Bongos is from Hand Unit during the elevator ride, same as the Screws, Bolts, and Hairpin's newspaper reference, and he also draws the fact that he wants actual money instead of the exotic buddies he got, which only happens in Sister Location. Then why it's after FNAF 4's night gameplay occurs, Mike literally draws Nightmare Fredbear under his recent dreams. In FNAF 4, Nightmare Fredbear doesn't even show up until night 5, meaning at this point Mike's already past that. Then why it's during FNAF 3, story, the only images of our security guard and their office is outright a foxy character in the FNAF 3 office. Mike's whole character in FNAF 4 is literally wearing a foxy mask, so him being a security guard in FNAF 1 and then suddenly the guard for FNAF 3 is being represented as foxy out of all characters seems pretty clear. Then the spring locks are mentioned again, and also the real value code, which is from a $16 voucher that says under it, for real value see page 61. Which on page 61 there's 5 plus 4 on the board as well as a 3, so 9 times 3, which easily equals 27. And guess what? $16 in 1993 was worth $27 when the logbook released, outright proving that Mike was writing in this logbook in modern times, and way past FNAF 1, which by the way, it uses 2017/18's value because Scott cannot predict how much money will inflate, so he used the most recent. If he guessed and said $40 or something ridiculous, that would have led theorists to eventually say that FNAF 3 takes place in like 2040. So the safe option is just using the most recent value that still gets the point across that it's in modern times. This was also likely given to us during the public auction of items recovered from the FNAF 3 fire. So after all of this theorizing about the logbook, my final answers to it all is that Cassidy is the name of the Golden Freddy spirit, the tally marks being the catalyst for the puzzle, Dave is the name of the crying child, the foxy grid being the catalyst for the puzzle, and Mike writes in the logbook during his shifts as the FNAF 3 guard. But what did the game theorists think?
If I were Tom and I was writing FNAF theories, I would probably at this point feel confident calling Crying Child Dave.
Wow.
That's how good this is. I'm not drop kicking this out of frustration. I'm drop kicking it because I think it's done now.
Oh, whoa!
This is it.
Whoa!
It's gone. Boom! Oh, jeez. I definitely shattered a light almost. Drop kick this. Ready? Boom!
Ooh! Oh, I should have doubled it. I could have.
There we go. Ready?
Oh, God!
Is Crying Child's name Dave? For me, after spending days going back and forth, looking at every side of the argument, I have to say that the answer is a resounding yes. I believe that Dave is the name of the Crying Child. So to Hyperdroid, Ecstatic Marzipan 7, and any other FNAF theorist that came up with this solution over the years, congratulations, you did it. You solved the Foxy Grid, and you got the theorist seal of approval.
This book series features a ton of lore details, hints, confirmations, whatever you'd like to call it, regardless of the story's continuity/canonicity to the games, such as the missing children's incident takes place in the year 1985. Plush Trap is indeed an actual toy in universe, which may have been part of Fredbear's, as a Spring Bunny plushie as seen in FNAF 4's minigames. While the Funtime animatronics left after sister location, it seems that all the Biddy Babs and Mini Arenas are still down there. Golden Freddy is indeed a physical Springlock suit, aka Fredbear. Some backstory behind Susie, the possessor of Chica. Jeremy is almost definitely dead and help wanted after his interactions with Glitchtrap, and the swift incident that occurred afterwards, judging by the male developer dying at the hands of Springtrap infecting him through VR, and an employee discovering his death in office. Ultimate Custom Night is likely just a continuous nightmare, held by the vengeful spirit, so either until Cassidy passes on in Happiest Day, or the ending of the Man in Room 128 happens. Shadow Bonnie is indeed an agony bean, becoming attached to Toby after he destroys the game with pure rage/agony, although this is already a fact by FNAF AI itself. Springtrap seems to be the one creating the phantoms for the FNAF 3 guard, the mediocre melodies possibly actually including Chica originally, hinted at by the weird bird grouped up with them. Multiple spirits can actually inhabit a single body at the same time. Remnant can actually be isolated and put into a certain object, which we did already learn in the fourth closet, and Remnant is indeed positive emotions, while agony would of course be the negative emotions. The main debate here though isn't whether the rules and mechanics of the stories carry over to the games, it's whether the Stitch Wraith connected stories themselves, Stitched Line, are in the game timeline or not. A reminder that those would only include Into the Pit, To Be Beautiful, Count the Ways, Fetch, Out of Stock, 1:35 AM, Step Closer, Dance With Me, The Man in Room 1280, Blackbird, The Real Jake, Hide and Seek, and of course all the epilogues/Stitch Wraith stingers. What changes if they are in the game timeline is that those 12 stories do actually happen. The Stitch Wraith stingers specifically happening after after Ultimate Custom Night and before Help Wanted, and it's basically just an extra epilogue to the original story. The main thing it changes for the game's story though is that Andrew is now a possibility to be the vengeful spirit. Although even then, while I think the Fazbear Frights are in the game timeline, I think both Cassidy and Andrew are in control, or at least they're in Ultimate Custom Night. My theory being that the man in room 1280 takes place after Cassidy decides to let go of her vengeance and have her happiest day, while Andrew takes over and begins inflicting his rage, being the old man consequences telling her to rest. It would also mean that happiest day can now be pushed after the Stitch Ray Stingers, as the puppet does appear, and it also means that there were other Freddy's locations that were opening/closing besides the one that we play through the games. Also, it should be noted that any and all parallel theories don't now cease to exist if they're in the same timeline. It's just that instead of being literal stand-ins and replacements for the characters, they're now just narrative parallels to them in the same timeline. Most of the debates basically just come from the inconsistencies with certain stuff, but this is all that actually changes to what we know. It should be noted though that it's almost impossible for all of the Fazbear Frights to be in the game timeline due to Scott himself very clearly stating that only some are connected to the games, meaning if you interpret that as they're in the game timeline, then only some can be, which would be Stitchline, not all of them. This book series features a ton of lore details, hints, confirmations, whatever you would like to call it, regardless of the story's continuity/canonicity to the games. Such as, Remnant has healing properties, which we've always theorized, but Frailty basically tells us this explicitly. The Pizzaplex undergoes so many changes throughout the years it's open. Entire attractions are built, taken down, or changed. This was later confirmed to happen in the games undeniably no matter what the continuity of the series is, but before that it was only from this series that we knew that. The Pizzaplex started as what most fans call the Circleplex due to its shape, eventually evolving into the Security Breach map. Fazbear Entertainment seems to use VR and AR interchangeably, or just these books do. There's a few stories here where characters think they've left VR, but are still actually in it. This is also seemingly shown in Ruin, where no matter if you leave the AR world, it turns out Helpy is still able to talk to you/appear in your vision. This is possibly explaining Gregory originally meaning to see Burntrap in the shadows. He was possibly infected with the virus while being GGY, and so seeing Burntrap may have been an after effect of his mask implant still affecting his mind. Instead of seeing Helpy like Cassie, he may have just seen Burntrap. The rogue indie game developer from Help Wanted is named Steve Snodgrass. He made 3 full games, with the 4th being incomplete before dying. We already knew similar things happen in the games, as only FNAF 1 to 3 exist and the 4th is mixed with sister location characters instead. Moondrop is the daycare attendant's evil persona's true name. The daycare attendant performed in the theater originally. Turning evil when the lights are off was actually, quote, part of its theatrical shtick. When it got put to the daycare, they couldn't get rid of the darkness trigger, which after a few times the lights were turned off, eventually created the moon personality. This is why the lights are always meant to stay on in the daycare. The generators are in the daycare playpen because, quote, the easiest and cheapest fix was to install backup generators. They decided on 5 of them to be sure the area got full coverage. By then, all the installations were in place, and the climbing structures were the only locations that would conceal the generators. DJ Music Man trying to grab Gregory in the toilets is due to his bouncer mode. Quote, rumor has it that DJ Music Man originally had an experimental bouncer mode. Supposedly that was removed, but apparently the programmer missed a few lines of code. The virus, here the Mimic One, infects the Pizzaplex and all the attractions as well as the animatronics, causing them to be amplified and worse versions of themselves. Glamrock Chica becoming obsessive for attention, Roxanne Wolf's teasing turns cruel, and Montgomery Gator turns incredibly violent and aggressive. GGY is confirmed to be patient 46 from the therapy tapes, and is able to access/hack the code of the Glamrock animatronics, putting G and Y's in their code. Quote, the new lines of code created additional conversations and behaviors in the Glamrock Freddy, Chica, Roxy, and Monty, stuff that wasn't in the legitimate coding. Embedded in those lines of code are seemingly random G's and Y's. This furthers my own theory that Gregory was indeed infected by a glitch trap under GGY. Here, possibly, this is just a theory, connecting everything back to the Mimic One program/one single system after the storyteller was taken down. The Mr. Hippo magnet from Security Breach were actually recalled due to them shorting out electronics. The Mimic was created for a child's entertainment, here it's for Edwin's kid David, and was later sought out to be captured by Fazbear Entertainment. There's apparently 5 stages to know if you're being haunted in the FNAF universe. 1, you start to have funny dreams and flashes of memories that are not yours. It's like they possess your thoughts when they're near. 2, you can feel chills or a tingle on your arm or back when they're around. 3, there could be a sudden movement of objects or sounds out of the blue. 4, if they really attach themselves to you, sometimes sometimes you can hear thoughts in your head as if the ghost is talking to you. And 5. If you really are gifted, and this is pretty rare, you might even see the ghost with your own eyes. The first and fourth ones seem to be about Mike and the Crying Child. Mainly Mike seeing Crying Child's memories throughout some of the games, with the constant hallucinations of crying children and It's Me, as well as also mixing with Mike's dreams that are literally flashes of the Crying Child's memories. William Afton's observations in this location were actually the place that William experimented on children with nightmarish animatronics with hallucinogenic gas. It's also directly connected with the ended boss battle room / William's office, aka Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, with fun times such as Ballora being down there. The experiments have apparently been abandoned for 10 years by this point, likely meaning 10 years after William gets springtrapped, meaning that if the fun times are still down there, sister location seems to take place over 10 years after William is springlocked, which since most assume it's after FNAF 1 anyways, would make sense. There was a line of mimic robots meant to observe show routines and mimic them, all getting discontinued and turned off after the mimics started mimicking humans in unintended ways. Once again, the main debate here though isn't whether the rules and mechanics of the stories carry over to the games, it's whether the tales from the Petaplex stories are in the game timeline or not. Unlike the Fazbear Frights, there is no set stitch line type thing, so it's assumed it's either all or none. What changes if they are in the timeline is that all those stories do actually happen. The overarching epilogue specifically happening after Help Wanted and before Security Breach, and it's basically just a prologue to the Petaplex story. The main thing it changes for the game story though, is that Edwin was actually the Mimic's creator 100% instead of us just guessing who it may have been, and that the Mimic short story is its true origins. It also means that the Mimic 1 program is almost 100% the glitch trap program that infects all the Glamrock animatronics in the Petaplex, instead of leaving that up to debate. Genuinely, besides all the stories now actually happening, those two things are really all that changes if all 25 stories are in the game timeline. This is why you'll probably notice that Tales from the Petaplex is way less debated than Fazbear Frights when it comes down to being in the game timeline, and why I personally feel like it's almost definite. Now, onto how to use these guides for lore and evidence. We honestly don't know how little or how much Scott has impacted these books, how much he fact-checked or proofread them, and how much was just done by his team. So I think instead of using any information's inclusion in a guidebook as the solid evidence itself, just take the information provided. For example, you can definitely use all the evidence provided for Molten MCI as evidence for Molten MCI, exactly like the Ultimate Guide does, but it actually being included in the Ultimate Guide isn't evidence itself. Another example for the character encyclopedia, you could say Burntrap is another incarnation of Springtrap animated by William Afton, who is the identity behind Glitchtrap, and that's fair to say and believe. But actually adding in the character encyclopedia it says is unnecessary, and it doesn't strengthen the argument. In fact, I actually think that including in the guidebook it says weakens the argument due to the errors within the guidebooks. And so people may treat the evidence you follow that statement with as less important, when instead you can just remove that statement entirely and still use the same evidence. This book series features a ton of lore details, hints, confirmations, whatever you'd like to call it, such as the Petaplex is again confirmed to have gone under expansions. The next expansion is set to include the Superstar Daycare, Monty's Maze being repurposed into Monty's Gator Golf, and theorized by Devon to include a Monty Green Room. Glamrock Bunny had his own main green room and statue like the other Glamrocks do in Security Breach. Glamrock Bunny also appears on a poster with Monty, again reaffirming that he and Monty were connected in the Petaplex lore, Monty as his understudy. It's seemingly confirmed that Maze's Eyes has shiftable walls / paths due to Monty's Maze being replaced because the attraction does not have much replay value. The Petaplex has the carousel that is the same one from Help Wanted 2. Phone Guy's real name is Ralph, with the Phone Guy being his real nickname given by others due to the messages that he leaves for new hires. Phone Guy has an 11-year-old daughter named Copelia. We hear the Bite of 83, canonically called in-universe the Big Bite, and there's a moment that can be interpreted as the crying child still being around in some way, as the crying from the phone continues after hanging up, and then the Phone Guy gets killed by a bite. We learn that the Bite of 87 victim doesn't speak much, nor do much else in general anymore due to the attack, and that no one knows what he did to provoke it. It's also basically confirmed it was Jeremy, a staff member, because after the bite, the staff themselves start joking about how instead of you can't spell team without ME, you can't spell team without MEAT. and it also caused the staff to give tips to each other on how to stop animatronics if they attack them again. Golden Freddy canonically kills the player by appearing in front of you and screaming, then forcing the thought "it's me" into your head, then putting both its hands on your ears, repeating "it's me," and then the end. "It's me" is also all throughout the book, and it turns out Phone Guy quite literally sees the words in his vision, and apparently they hurt. The animatronics are actually quite intelligent, going as far as to check the cameras while the Phone Guy is hiding in order to look for him. A reporter calls the Phone Guy and says her theory is that the animatronics are bored of being stuck there, seeing Phone Guy leave when they can't, testing their limits, etc., just so they can travel further. Since this is a reporter's theory, it's unclear if this is actually true or not, but since it's in the book at all, I'm going to assume it's meant to be canon, and that the animatronics do want to leave. The reporter also confirms that Bonnie is possessed by Jeremy, and elsewhere the book confirms Chica is possessed by Susie, so us lining up the graves in FNAF 6 with the heads in FNAF 3 was correct. Phone Guy also has a friend, Dave in Maintenance, who is apparently a know-it-all, who has personality flaws, warns Phone Guy about how he has to fix the animatronics because there's no telling what will happen if they get too much or too little power, and more. It's unclear, but to me I think this is meant to be Dave Miller, William Afton's canon alter ego from the Silver Eyes, once again shown as his canonical alter ego name. The way he warns the Phone Guy about fixing the animatronics makes it sound like he doesn't want them to shut off just in case something happens with the spirits, which along with the whole section ending with "you doubt Dave will tell you how to sabotage the animatronics" seems extremely ironic with what we know William does in the FNAF 1 location to the animatronics right after this, where he quite literally sabotages and destroys them, causing the spirits to come out. The thing about this book series and its canonicity is that it's confirmed the week before is officially within the game timeline, and is an official prequel to FNAF 1, while VIP connects to Tales from the Pizzaplex through the attractions and layout of the Pizzaplex itself. VIP, however, also connects to Security Breach by having the Tales from the Pizzaplex confirmed to be slowly becoming the Security Breach Pizzaplex, starting with the next expansion creating the daycare, Monty Golf, Monty's Green Room, Mesa Size, etc. There's also 2 upcoming books. Return to the Pit is all about Into the Pit, while the second titled Escape to the Pizzaplex is set in the setting of the Smash Security Breach game. To me personally, and some may disagree, which is perfectly fine, but I think this is Scott telling us what's in the game timeline, by giving us an official installment in the original story, FNAF 1, and connecting it to the new story, Security Breach, to the Fazbear Frights books, Stitch Lane specifically due to Into the Pit, and to the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, which also connect back to Security Breach, making those in the game timeline. Although that's based on the information I have at this point in time, as 2 of these 4 books are yet to even be released. A few theories that came from the movie are, is Garrett going to become the puppet in the second movie? This theory mainly comes from the message in the credits saying "come find me," and the only child in the movie that we know was taken yet didn't show up possessing an animatronic or anything like that is Garrett. That message also coincidentally playing while a remix of the Puppets music box was playing too. Fans also used a parallel to Charlie's, Puppets possessor in the game's, death. How she was killed on her own by Afton and having Afton's car heavily associated with the death. Similar to how Garrett was taken and then assumedly killed by Afton with his car, heavily associated with Garrett's death. Also, Abby is shown to be drawing Garrett with the other children as if, for some reason, Garrett is grouped in with the other children's spirits, despite being killed separately, which is similar to how Charlie is associated with the children's spirits despite being killed separately too, guiding their spirits or bringing them their happiest day, etc. Since the movie is in a different continuity/timeline, anything is possible. Does Henry exist in the movie universe? A question that mainly comes from the employee training tape stating that Freddys was made by seemingly a single person, the Genius. Initially, people thought the technician in the security training tape was Henry, but this was later confirmed to be an actual designer of the real animatronics. It's currently unclear how the movie universe will treat Henry, Charlie, and that side of the story, as both were completely absent from the first movie. Is Mike and Afton? A question that mainly stems from Steve Raglan's interesting response to Mike's last name, which, while the reaction could be noticing it's the brother of the kid he killed, there still must be a reason that William decided to go out of his way to kill Garrett out of nowhere and so specifically, and so Afton somehow being connected to the family in one way or another would make sense. His last name being Schmidt doesn't even break the theory either, as in the game timeline we know Mike's last name is only ever confirmed to be Schmidt too, but he also goes on to call William his father. It's unclear what William's reaction to his last name meant, I guess we'll learn in a future movie, but before anyone asks, yes, Mike is an Afton in the games 100% no matter what the movie does. Again, he explicitly calls William father. Is Vanessa an Afton in the games too? This question immediately came to my mind when I first heard that line in the movie. After some re-evaluating of the evidence, it's actually possible that's the case in the games too, with Vanessa's last name starting with an A and stating how manipulative her father Bill, which itself is a nickname for William, was to her, which is exactly how they treat Vanessa and William's relationship in the movie. Honestly, it could go either way. I just personally think it's funny that after Security Breach, everyone said Vanessa's backstory seemed like it's really close to or even copied from Elizabeth's, to the point it was used as evidence for Vanessa being a robot Elizabeth, but now that might just be because it's literally just the same father. Some claim the timeline doesn't work. However, it does when you consider there's a whole 30-year gap between FNAF 1 and FNAF 3, which while he gets springlocked, the exact date of that is unknown, and it's just vaguely before FNAF 3, which could be 30 years, 10 years, 1 year, or even 1 week before. So personally, I think Vanessa may just be enacted in the games too. It's kind of funny that for most of these questions I'm saying, I don't know, we'll see in the next movie, because we truly don't know much. All we really know about the second movie is that it will feature the FNAF 2 animatronics. That's it.
I might have solved the FNAF movie's big twist. In the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, a pretty important element to the story is the kid's drawing which William uses to control the haunted animatronics. Strangely though, many viewers may not have noticed that this picture doesn't depict the 5 missing children, but the main 4 victims and Garrett. For some reason, the Golden Freddy kid is completely missing. Something like this also happened in Help Wanted 2, where we combined the 4 soda ingredients representing the 4 missing kids and a random soda can off to the side representing Garrett to unlock Golden Freddy. Is it possible that the spirit of Golden Freddy was never a real kid in the first place, and was instead created from the agony or memories of the 4 missing children and Garrett? I guess we'll just have to wait and see till the next FNAF movie.
As a fan of the FNAF story of the games, books, and now the movie, I always like coming up with different theories. And the one that comes to mind is a theory I made right before the FNAF movie came out. In my theory, and for my video where I predicted 6 things that would happen in the movie, I predicted that we will get a secret character mentioned during the credits, which will lead to the second movie. And for that, I ended up being correct in some way. We did get a hint of the puppet with the grandfather's clock and the words, "Come find me," and with this, it can most likely happen that we will see the puppet in the next movie, which excites me.
Hello, I'm not one FNAF guy. So my theory is that this machine is a repurposed springlock suit. I think this because Ella has the same saws as the machine. You can tell the Freddy head is decommissioned, which shows it is old. It is also only held up by an arm, which shows it doesn't have a body. Although, maybe one of the vandals are stuffed inside of it. But anyways, maybe the suit could be a Fredbear suit. It does look somewhat similar in design to the UCN Fredbear. So who knows? Anyway, that's my theory. Over.
I wanted to add a section here that goes over all of Scott's clarifications he's made himself, or just anything he specifically revealed. Scott has clarified seeing multiple spring traps in FNAF 3 doesn't mean there are multiple spring traps. Simply stating, as long as the red light is flashing after a ventilation error, you may see multiple spring traps. These are hallucinations. On a post about FNAF 4's Halloween update, Scott mentioned this about the lore and namely the box. Quote, "You know, when I released the first game over a year ago, I was amazed at how quickly everyone found every bit of lore and story. Then the same happened with part 2. Fans and YouTubers dug in and found everything. Game Theory did an incredible video on part 2, getting almost everything right. Then part 3 came out and once again the story was uncovered by the community. It seemed that there was nothing I could hide. But then I released part 4 and somehow no one, not a single person, found the pieces. The story remains completely hidden. I guess most people assumed that I filled the game with random Easter eggs this time, but I didn't. What's in the box? It's the pieces put together. But the bigger question is, would the community accept it that way? The fact that the pieces have remained elusive this time strikes me as incredible and special and a fitting conclusion in some ways. And because of that, I've decided that maybe some things are best left forgotten forever." End quote. When someone asked if that meant Phone Guy was Purple Guy, as he just said that Matt Pat got almost everything right with FNAF 2, he simply replied almost everything right. When someone asked whether you can make a definitive conclusion to every question in FNAF, Scott simply replied yes. So as of FNAF 4, every single thing had an answer. When asked about Mangle's gender, he replied, "Okay, People have been asking me about Mangle's gender for almost a year now, and I think it's time that I finally answer the burning question about whether Mangle is a boy or girl, so that this community can finally put that behind them. The answer is yes. When asked if the Halloween update from FNAF 4 is canon, he simply replied no. The Halloween update is not canon. I will make a post about this shortly, and he later did mention it in a post. Quote, "This game is not canon and is only for fun for the holidays." When asked if the novel trilogy, Silver Eyes, Twisted Ones, Fourth Closet Only, was canon to the game, Scott said this: "The truth is that after a while, lore can become so dense that there isn't room for a story anymore. Another truth is that what makes for a good game doesn't necessarily make for a good book. Sometimes the timeline gets so full that the only way to tell a real story is have the story set in a different timeline, an alternate universe, a different location, or perhaps from a vantage point that isn't entirely what it appears to be." Following up on this, he would say, "A lot of effort went into the book, and while it's true that it doesn't follow the events of the games 100%, it's still good to see that most people have accepted it as part of the FNAF universe." When asked if Sister Location was canon, he simply replied yes, Sister Location is canon. Less lore heavy, but Scott mentioned this about merch and any possible canon details they include. Details like this are super important to me. I correct tons of mistakes during the approval process, but some inevitably slip through. He even clarified again years later about the Cassidy Kazoo. "I can't tell you how many designs I've rejected because companies randomly throw out names from the lore. I'm pretty confident that I rejected this as well, or I guess there is a chance that it slipped through the cracks. Either way, get it while you can, cause I'm pulling it." When asked how the scooping machine actually worked, Scott replied, "I don't think any kind of single scoop to the abdomen could pull out your whole skeleton, but just imagine your torso as a jack-o'-lantern, and you've got the right idea. And then if something is crawling inside of you, it could probably manually empty out the rest." Replying to someone's post about Matt Pat's The Killer's Promise episode of Game Theory, Scott replied, "Regardless of what people may agree or disagree with about the theory itself, I think this is one of his best videos. It was well made, it was entertaining, and he really did find some things that no one else had found yet." When Scott released the final update for Sister Location's Custom Night, he mentions that, by the way, cutscenes are canon. When talking about the upcoming Golden Freddy update, he stated, "I wanted to let everyone have a stab at it until I completed the final cutscene. When the final cutscene is complete, I will give very hard mode a little more juice to help dedicated players make it to 6 AM. Then we can finally see what becomes of Eggs Benedict. Then our story can be complete." When a Reddit user talked about the lore not being as infallible as it seems, Scott replied, "Hey guys, I wanted to take a moment to comment here. You're absolutely right that I'm only human, and despite the huge amount of thought and effort that I put into these games, I do make mistakes. However, please don't ever assume that I am just throwing these games together. I'm very careful and methodical when crafting my games and stories, and when I do feel like I've made a mistake, I try to repair things the best that I can. I do apologize to fans who may have felt that I was infallible, or that the lore was infallible. I work very hard to make this series enjoyable, and will continue to do so, but I am very, very human. All I can do is promise to take great care with what I make, to respect the foundation that has already been laid, and to respect the fanbase as well." Scott made a post on Reddit about retcons in FNAF, and as of a few months before FNAF 6's release, he states, "Hey guys, I wanted to quickly comment about the subject of retcons. I made a joke last night about retconning, and it became very obvious that it's a very important thing to a lot of people, and understandably so. I have a lot of respect for this community, and the last thing that I want is for anyone to think that I recklessly change details on a whim. I assure you, that's not the case. The truth is that I've done one actual retcon in the series, although I'm not going to say where it was. There have been other times, however, where my original intentions didn't come across clearly. In those instances, I make a point to clarify that in the next game. That's not really a retcon. It's simply an attempt to guide the story towards where it was originally intended to go. A quick and very minor example of this would be when Adult Theory happened. I could see why people were believing it, so I quickly dropped an additional teaser to clear it up. I have to do that with my games sometimes as well. I use Sister Location to clear up a misconception from FNAF 4. Currently there is a misconception from Sister Location that I may need to clear up someday as well, or maybe I'll just leave it to torment the fandom. So while it's true that the story has developed new details over time that may not have been planned from the beginning, that doesn't mean that the pieces don't fit together as a whole. There is a lot of information crammed into these games, and there will always be details that I don't convey 100% as intended. I try to clear those items, but I'm certainly not retconning things at will. I have more respect for the community than that. Edit. To be clear, the one retcon mentioned was integrated pretty seamlessly, and most people people didn't notice. If it had caused problems or confusion, then I would have addressed it here. In a stream, Scott commented Nightmare BB was originally just for the bonus game, before I decided to make a separate Halloween edition. However, Nightmare BB fits into the story and can be considered canon. Under the comments of a post for the second part of MatPat's The Final Theory timeline from 2017, Scott replied, "I don't usually comment on theories or timelines, but I want to this time. This was a very satisfying and important episode of game theory. There have been some points of contention in the community lately, especially since Sister Location Custom Night, that have caused members to leave, theorists to quit, and frustrated emails to be sent. Some of these issues were simple misunderstandings with the story, others were maybe just things that I didn't leave enough clues about. They became things that I felt I needed to answer with a new game. But now some of those things have been answered by MatPat. Obviously, it's not 100%, but he really came through for this community, I think, during a time when everyone needed him. I won't go through the video point by point, but I will say this. For those of you who were really upset about the idea of mic trap, or upset about the idea of Purple Guy being literally purple, or hung up on 1983 versus 1987, watch MatPat's video and breathe a sigh of relief. Like I said, it's obviously not 100%, but he really hit this video out of the park. Continuing on from the idea of mic trap, Scott would later comment, "I'll clear this up right now for you guys. The robotic sound in the voice was actually an unintended side effect of me slowing down the end of the line reading for dramatic effect. It wasn't intended to sound robotic. Unfortunately, this minor detail caused a lot of confusion. When talking about a future update for FNAF 6, Scott asked the fanbase, so on that note, what sounds like more fun for an update? An endless tycoon mode with new items and new day-to-day challenges, or some kind of ultimate custom night featuring lots of characters, leaving the choice up to the community, and obviously Ultimate Custom Night 1. When someone noticed some models were taken from fans for the Freddy files, Scott replied, I told Scholastic about it this morning. They are going to stop production and fix it ASAP. I'm not sure what else to say about it other than I'm sorry again. I need to disable Google search on the computers of everyone I work with. And the reason that I'm mentioning this here is because this is evidence that Scott does not write the guidebooks himself, and has a team working by him as well. So when something is quote unquote revealed in a guidebook, it isn't. In Dorko's interview, Scott said a lot of interesting things. When Dorko asks which ending really happens in FNAF 3, Scott replies,
I've given a lot of thought as to whether or not I should answer this question.
Okay.
And I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the answer is very interesting.
Okay.
You know? The answer is very interesting. The answer is complex.
Okay.
However, I'm not going to answer it because it's only going to cause strife.
When talking about the box and game theory videos, he stated this.
But I'll tell you, he did a video on that box, and he kind of said that he thinks the contents of the box changed over the years. You know, and I bet nobody gave that a whole lot of thought, but I saw that and I was like, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. The contents of that box have changed over the years because, you know, it's for that very reason. It's because, you know, of what I was intending the game to be when it happened, and then after the reaction of it, I was like, I need to craft this into something better for the people who see this as important, and that kind of indirectly does change the contents of the box, you know, because it changes the contents of everything that came before. Yeah, so I just thought that was an interesting observation on his part.
Talking about FNAF World, he stated,
I should have used that for a troll game, or I should have, you know, made something like, you know, Foxy Fighters. You know, I should have just done something that was obviously for fun and not tried to somehow tie it in to a canon game.
Outside of the Dorko interview, when asked whether he was a part of the lore, due to him appearing as a joke in Help Wanted, he replied with a large statement. Hey everyone, so I received an email from a Reddit member yesterday asking me to clarify something specific about the lore of Help Wanted. He was very polite and respectful with his question, which I appreciate, and I know it's something more than a few other users were confused about as well. So here I am to set the record straight, and probably create more confusion in the process. The question is this. Is Scott Cawthon now a part of FNAF Lore? The short answer is no. My name is never actually mentioned in the game. The game says that an indie developer was tarnishing the brand of Fazbear Entertainment by making video games about them, forcing them to rebrand and try to reclaim their good name by making a VR game that made light of those crazy stories. Or was it all part of the plan? Yes, I used my own picture for this game developer because it's an obvious parallel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually me in universe. On the surface, this might seem like an odd choice for a storyline in general, but there was a very, very specific challenge when making Help Wanted. The challenge was this. this. How do you take characters that are canon, along with characters that are questionably canon, and characters from every point of the timeline, and throw them all together in one game that is canon? That's quite the problem when you think about it, but it was important for me that Help Wanted means something. I didn't want just a meaningless collection of minigames, although I'm sure most people would have been okay with that. I wanted it to be canon, and that meant that I needed to solve the substantial puzzle of how. Now that you all know the problem, maybe you can understand my approach. That doesn't mean that you have to agree that it was a good idea. I keep a bowl of candy out for people who show up with torches and pitchforks at my front door, so no, I'm not canon. Freddy isn't canon. The fan games aren't canon. You aren't canon. Only the existence of a game developer that supposedly made video games based on actual events that may or may not have been a cover-up by Fazbear Entertainment is canon. Along those lines, keep in mind that I do tend to use pictures of me and my family in the games just because they are so readily available. My little boy Jason is the face of the one you should not have killed in Ultimate Custom Night. I'll share the original sometime. He looks sweet as an angel in the original picture and I turn him into a monster. In FNAF 4, I used a picture of a mountain range that I took while I was a truck driver in West Texas. I used a picture of a snowman that me and my older sons made together. I used a picture of a pet mockingbird that we nursed back to health one year. Do these have lore significance? Well, you probably already know the answer. Again, this doesn't mean you have to agree with any of it. I'm always available for a good roasting, and I sometimes deserve it, although I will say that I appreciate the fandom being polite about it, which everyone usually is. I hope this makes things clear as mud for everyone. Expect a new teaser shortly. Seeing people asking if the lore is solvable, Scott made a post. I've enjoyed the memes roasting me about the plotline lately, but it does have a serious underlying concern from many in the community, and I hear you. The question is this: is the lore solvable? Since that's kind of like asking is the story complete in an ongoing story, it's difficult to answer. So let me say this instead. Over the next few years there are a lot of projects planned, and most are very story driven. Lots of the later stories will answer some of the biggest questions from the fan base over this past year, in my opinion. Very few people will likely ever feel completely satisfied, as there are just way too many headcanons out there and so many great ideas on where the story could go. But I think there are good things to be found for people who are looking. All I can do is say that some questions will be answered, even if it may not be the answer that you wanted. Be patient. Let me at least say this: future games will look forward and look to the novels to fill in some of the blanks to the past. Everyone in the community has been really great, and I'm working hard to bring you some great things in 2020 and beyond. In a mega post about potential FNAF movie screenplays, there was one that I feel practically confirms Cassidy is the right name from the logbook. Him sharing this: the Cassidy screenplay. Basic setup, diving deep. This screenplay packed in a lot of lore, following the story of Cassidy. Problems: spanning multiple time periods, following multiple characters, and featuring lore from multiple games. This was pretty saturated to a fault. It may have been satisfying to the most hardcore fans, but it would have left the majority of people confused and lost. Hey wait, maybe this was the most accurate screenplay. Verdict: ultimately more of a visual encyclopedia than a movie. This just wasn't satisfying, even to me. Out. When someone faked an email from Scott, framing him as saying some of the Fazbear Fright stories and all of the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories were in the game canon, he replied, "I'm not sure if the email itself was fake or if someone posing as me sent it, but anyone who knows me after all these years should know that this isn't how I would address such a serious topic. So let me take this opportunity to be as clear as possible. Concerning what people were saying about the canonicity of the books, yes, that is correct. I hope that clears things up. Everyone have a great weekend." When people grew concerned over how Doug was treated in the FNAF movie novelization, he posted this: "Hey everyone, some issues are much easier to address than others. As many of you know, Doug does something in the novelization that seems out of character from the Doug we all knew and loved from the movie. This specific item was deleted from the official transcript months before the book was printed, but maybe I accidentally submitted the wrong version to Scholastic. I'm not sure. Either way though, just to clear this up, movie Doug is canon, book Doug is not canon. This is something I will change in future prints, meaning that within the movie timeline, only the movie version of Doug is canon." Making a FNAF timeline with only what we know for certain is a bit tricky, because at some point you need to add a little bias and make your own decision or two. But after trying as hard as possible, this is an unbiased FNAF timeline that majority of the community agreed with, verified through a bunch of polls on YouTube, Instagram, and even the platform that's always on fire, Twitter. Starting off, we know for certain that the story begins with William Afton and Henry Emily, at some point joining together and creating Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated. We know for certain that they made Fredbear's Family Diner China anytime before 1983, and then the first ever Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria opened in 1983. Then we know for certain that the flashback minigames of FNAF 4 take place in 1983. We see the crying child, who is deathly afraid of the animatronics for reasons unconfirmed, being bullied by his older brother Michael, and eventually the bullying goes too far to the point that Michael and his friends pick him up and throw him into Fredbear's mouth. Fredbear's mouth closes on him and he dies in the hospital, seemingly the next day. Here is where you can decide whether he goes on to possess Golden Freddy or simply passes on. However, here is where the biggest timeline debate happens. There are actually two more deaths around this: Henry's daughter Charlie and William's daughter Elizabeth. Charlie is basically drive-by murdered by William after she was locked outside of Fredbear's or Freddy's, that's another debate on where it happens, which causes Charlie to possess the security puppet animatronic, which will be important later. Then Elizabeth is also murdered by Circus Baby, one of the many Funtime animatronics at a subsidiary of Fazbear Entertainment named Circus Baby's Pizza World, which cancels its planned grand opening after her death, leading the Funtimes being put underground in William's bunker, which eventually turns into Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals. There are heavy debates on what the true death order is between the crying child, who we know for certain at least happens in the year 1983, Charlie, who judging by the books in Help Wanted 2 we know for certain happens in 1983 too, and Elizabeth, which we know Circus Baby's is connected to Fredbear's while it was open, so likely in 1983 too. With my own bias real quick, I personally say Charlie dies first, mainly due to a wound first inflicted on me, then Elizabeth due to the latter location being already linked to Fredbear's, and the location she dies at containing a springlock suit, and then finally the crying child. However, I know game theory for example says it's crying child, Charlie, and then Elizabeth. Totally different opinion. So I'd advise actually checking out some other theories too and or researching yourself to decide what seems like the strongest and most solid death order for you. Back to being unbiased, and we know for certain that Fredbear's shuts down sometime after, leading to Spring Bonnie and Fredbear to be thrown at the back of Freddy's. Judging by Into the Pit, Fredbear was put in the storage room. This comes into play on the 26th of June in the year 1985, when William uses the Spring Bonnie suit to lure and murder 5 children at Freddy's, causing the animatronics to get possessed by those children. This causes Freddy's to be closed down by the end of the year. We then have a jump to 1987 with FNAF 2, when a brand new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opens up, containing the new toy animatronics with facial recognition software, the puppet from earlier who looks a bit different, and the original animatronics now put into parts and services as the Withereds. Whether they're literally the withered 1985 animatronics or retrofitted versions that they then quickly scrapped after is another debate. Eventually William gets to this location, kills another 5 kids, and then disappears. This causing police to investigate the building and the place to have to shut down very quickly, the location only being open for about a week. Those 5 murdered kids then go on to possess the other toy animatronics, not counting the puppet who's already possessed, causing them to start malfunctioning and acting aggressive towards adults, leading to the infamous bite of 87 on presumably Jeremy Fitzgerald, who was told to stay close to them. After the bite, Jeremy doesn't speak to anyone about it and can hardly do anything at all, still surviving though even without his frontal lobe. Although this then means that the toy animatronics get scrapped and pulled apart, while the original animatronics get moved to a new Freddy's, which needs us to jump ahead a few more years to 1993, which, to my knowledge, almost the entire community agrees with the next Freddy's location opening up. The week before takes place here where the phone guy, Ralph, records his messages for the next guard and unfortunately dies. Then we have FNAF 1's main gameplay with the original animatronics back in shape. It's assumed that this Freddy's closed down in the same year too. Then, an unknown amount of time later, William goes back to the FNAF 1 location and breaks the animatronics up, taking their endoskeletons and burning them in, thanks to Help Wanted, supposedly this exact furnace, to create a substance containing the souls called Remnant. However, on one of his trips back to Freddy's, he gets cornered by the spirits and attempts to scare them away by putting on the old Spring Bonnie costume. This backfires, however, and the spring locks malfunction, causing the infamous spring locking incident. An unknown amount of time later, the Funtime animatronics, with Remnant now injected into them thanks to the scooper, begin tormenting Mike throughout the gameplay of FNAF's sister location. This eventually ends with the Funtime scooping themselves and joining together to create the amalgamation Ennard, and then scoop Michael, putting their innards into him and using his body as a suit to walk out in public. Over time, the sister location custom night cutscenes happen, where Michael's body slowly rots more and more until Ennard no longer sees Michael as a suitable body, leaving him. Eventually, a guy called Phone Dude and whoever he's with search through the old Freddy locations, and find stuff to put into a spooky attraction based on the myths of Freddy's past, called Fazbear's Fright. Then vaguely around the same time in 2023, the gameplay of both FNAF 4 and FNAF 3 happen. Phone Dude is guided to the hidden safe rooms and eventually finds William, still spring-trapped in Spring Bonnie, and puts him into the Fazbear's Fright location, which eventually gets burnt down to the ground. It's unclear whether FNAF 4 happens before, after, or even during the gameplay of FNAF 3, so I'm not 100%ing it into one place, but we know that it vaguely takes place around FNAF 3 due to it being called a recent dream in a logbook featuring Fazbear's Fright, and that being noted on the second night. Then an unknown amount of time later, Springtrap somehow dons the look of Scraptrap. The rest of Enid eventually kicks Circus Baby out due to her taking too much control, who turns into the form of Scrap Baby, while the others in Enid then become Molten Freddy, and the puppet is then captured by a machine called Lefty, who was specifically designed to capture the puppet, to be taken to a new location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place. This location is created by William's old business partner Henry, who wants to lure everyone remaining to one place and burn everything to ash, with no escape possible, freeing their souls and ending the misery of the past few decades in the process. This is FNAF 6, where Michael helps Henry complete this task, bringing everyone together by the time Henry burns it all down. Then immediately after this fire, Ultimate Custom Night happens. One of Afton's past and vengeful spirits, either Cassidy, Andrew, or both, torment Afton with a never-ending nightmare of his past, and he's subjected to face each and every animatronic at once. At the same time, whether time exists in this game, FNAF World presumably happens, mainly due to the trophies being achievable across both at the same time, Old Man Consequences, etc., where the crying child is supposedly helping the spirits put their memories together to be freed. If you believe the frights are in the game timeline, then the Stitch Wraith Stingers would then take place here. Either way, Happiest Day most likely takes place here after Ultimate Custom Night. FNAF World and possibly the frights all finish up due to everyone's story now being done. Although I will note that I have seen a few say Happiest Day may still take place after FNAF 3 anyways. The tapes collected in Help Wanted then take place next. An unknown amount of time after FNAF 6 burns down, Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated come back as Fazbear Entertainment LLC. They hire an indie game developer named Steve Snodgrass to create video games based on Freddy's past, so that they can make a virtual reality game parodying those games and treating them like complete insane jokes made by a lunatic. They hired a game company named Silver Parasol Games to create the game. While making the game, they receive circuit boards by an unknown person and are told to scan said circuit boards, including one with a virus, to speed up the development process. They do so, meaning they also scan the virus from the circuit boards into their system. Jeremy, a member of the team, began to experience weird things and claims that he's seeing an anomaly of some sort, the glitch in the game, coming to a climax with him cutting his face off with a guillotine paper slicer in order to stop the anomaly from taking control. This causes a lawsuit to arrive at the company and Tape Girl, another member of the team, to take over Jeremy's work from where he left off, meaning noticing the anomaly and trying to stop it, creating tapes along the way to document her progress and eventually to help split the code into pieces and stop it from being able to do anything. The game's development then transfers to another company, but then FNAF Help Wanted happens, where Vanessa, the player, is fooled by the virus mimicking Tape Girl's voice, tasking her to bring the tapes together again, which she does, forming the anomaly who we know as Glitchtrap, who invades her mind and takes her over. Then, all around the same time frame, the Curse of Dreadbear DLC and Christmas update for Help Wanted, FNAF AR Special Delivery, and the therapy CDs from Security Breach all take place. Vanessa creates her Vanny mask by Halloween, and the Pizzaplex begins construction above the FNAF 6 Pizza Place by Christmas. Vanessa begins acting weird and off-character to outsiders as her mind continues to be corrupted. This is talked about in therapy, but if the therapist gets too close to what's actually going on with her, a young boy named Gregory, who has somehow fallen to the virus too, helps kill them off and she gets transferred to another therapist. Eventually, Vanessa transfers jobs to the Pizzaplex as a security guard. It's unknown how long before Security Breach this happens, but whether you believe the Tales books are game canon or not, the Mimic robot is definitely delivered to the Pizzaplex and trapped underground, underneath the FNAF 6 location. If you believe the Tales from the Pizzaplex books are in the game timeline, they would most likely take place all around here, up until Security Breach. 4.75 years later, judging by the quarterly magazines, FNAF Security Breach then takes place. Somehow, Gregory has lost the virus, and upon likely sneaking into the Pizzaplex, he's spotted by Glamrock Freddy during a performance, who glitches out and malfunctions. He restarts in safe mode and notices that Gregory has crawled into his stomach hatch while he was down. Gregory has to stay alive until 6 AM to escape. However, he decides to play through the 3 Princess Quest arcade machines in order to somehow free Vanessa from the virus. She is freed and Vanessa helps her to escape the Pizzaplex, eating ice cream on a hill afterwards. An unknown amount of time later, FNAF Help Wanted 2 takes place. The player, who is most likely Cassie's father, comes down to the pizza place for an unknown reason, where he completes technician simulations. Eventually, one or both of the endings happen, but either way, Roxy gets her new mask, the virus infects the technician's Vanny mask, and the glitch trap focused virus dies for good as well as Cassie's father. It's unknown whether this happens before or after Help Wanted 2, but before Ruin definitely. Gregory and Vanessa join together to either create or repurpose the Mexis machine to keep the Mimic trapped underneath the Pizzaplex, and ensure that it will never get out. When prompted by someone else messing with the security, the Mexis entity will then spawn to alert the animatronics to their exact location. So then, an unknown amount of time Sometime later after this, Security Breach's Ruin DLC takes place. Cassie enters the Pizzaplex to come help Gregory, who's apparently stuck underground. She's given her father's Vanny mask and ventures through the Pizzaplex, turning off security nodes on her way, frying Monty in a lake, rebooting Roxy, and then finally going down to the underground pizza place. She reaches Gregory's location, and it turns out it was the Mimic mimicking Gregory's voice to lure her down to free it. One of the 3 Ruin endings then occur, but no matter what, the Mimic is officially free. And that's the end for now. As I mentioned earlier, the death order of the crying child, Charlie, and Elizabeth can be argued, same as who the one you should not have killed is, and some smaller details like who the guard is in FNAF 2 and 3, some argue it's not Mike, etc. For these questions to be answered, either refer back to my own opinions in the lore sections of the games the subject you want to learn about comes from, go watch some other theories based around the specific subject, or go investigate and research the subject yourself to come to your own conclusion, which I personally think is the best way to do it. Now it's time for what I've been leading up to in almost every theory section through this video. Almost every theory in FNAF completely unbiased, besides if it's outright debunked by Scott himself. But before that, just quickly, as I've personally seen people ask what these mean, MCI is short for Missing Children Incident, the 5 kids killed at Freddys that possess the original animatronics. DCI stands for Dead Children Incident, basically just to separate the second MCI, where 5 other kids die at FNAF 2 Freddys that possess the toy animatronics from the first, and Toyshink, short for the one you should not have killed. Now onto the theory names in alphabetical order, and I know for a fact you'll definitely not remember all the names specifically, but the theories themselves may interest you, and you can then use the names to then research further into them. Although you can just simply listen through all these theories to possibly come up with some inspiration for your own, or just to hear how many vastly different perspectives there are in this community. Abby Beth movie. The theory that Abby in the FNAF movie is meant to be Elizabeth from the games, as Abby is an anagram of baby, she's Mike's younger sister who wears pink/blue clothes throughout the movie, and more. Adult theory. The infamous theory before Sis Location's release that Circus Babies was actually an adult-themed location instead of a child's entertainment place, mainly due to Blora. This was actually quickly debunked by Scott once the theory started getting traction, by quickly releasing a teaser showing off 7 child-looking animatronics. Afton divorce. A theory that William Afton and his wife divorced. She didn't die or anything of the sorts, and simply just divorced William gaining the custody of the 3 children. If Elizabeth dies before the crying child, it's theorized that she may have left after her death, similar to how Henry's wife leaves him after Charlie's death in the novels. Afton family story. The theory that Help Wanted 2's Candy Cadet story about the family missing an opportunity and all dying after not going through with it is actually about the Afton family. Some theorize it to be about how William had the perfect opportunity to have a successful business with Henry, but didn't take it, and this caused the entire family to end. Afton MCI. The theory that after the events of the Follow Me minigames in FNAF 3, the 5 missing children all attached themselves to William in order to keep him alive in the spring bunny suit. This theory goes against Monton MCI. Afton Midnight Motorist. The theory that Midnight Motorist is in some way about the Afton family, and that William Afton is the one driving the Midnight Motor, aka is the yellow guy. This was seemingly, keep in mind the very important word seemingly, confirmed through 5 laps at Freddys showing the Midnight Motor containing a yellow spring bunny item. Agony Tangle. The theory that the tangle from Security Breach and Ruin, underneath the Pizzaplex, is actually made up from just pure agony, from either the events of FNAF 6 or possibly the murders of the Mimic from the Tales from the Pizzaplex epilogues. Agony Corpse. The theory that the questionably canon burn trap from Security Breach is made from the agony of William in some way, shape or form. There's a split version of this where the endoskeleton is still the Mimic while the flesh and suit come from William's agony. Agony Plush. The theory that the Fredbear plush in FNAF 4 is actually possessed by the agony of the crying child, meaning that the crying child is bullied so much that all the negative emotions may have actually generated enough agony to go on to possess the Fredbear plush, leading to all of his weird teleportation around the place and more. Some have also pointed out his clear black eyes in the intro could be hinting at it as well. Agony Plushies. A similar theory where instead of just the Fredbear plush, it's actually all of the plushies, making sense of the "we are still your friends" line. Andrew Fifth. The theory that instead of Cassidy, the 5th missing child is actually Andrew instead. This is mainly due to the fact that some believe Andrew takes Cassidy's place in the Fazbear Frights, and instead of it being a parallel, it means he has literally taken her place. Andrew Afton. The theory that Andrew is actually an Afton. There's not much evidence for this theory, it's just a random theory. Andrew Bear. The theory that Andrew is actually the bear in the Old Man Consequences cutscene in Ultimate Custom Night, meaning this cutscene has nothing to do with Cassidy and the bear Fredbear is meant to be the creator of Ultimate Custom Night, Andrew DCI. The theory that Andrew is actually one of the kids murdered in FNAF 2. This is mainly due to the fact that we have no concrete information on when or where Andrew died. Andrew experiments. The theory that Andrew was one of the kids being experimented on in the observation room seen in Sister Location and showcased in Didophobia, possibly before Rory. I've seen this as mainly to explain a reason for Andrew to be the vengeful spirit since he was experimented on unlike any of the other spirits, attaching himself to Afton this way. Andrew first. The theory that Andrew was actually the first death of the entire story. Another way to explain him possibly being the vengeful spirit, being the first and forgotten spirit. This is again mainly due to the fact that we have no concrete information on when or where Andrew died. Andrew MCI. The theory that Andrew is actually one of the kids murdered in the original missing children's incident. This is usually with the assumption that the 6 kids in Into the Pit actually mean the 5 kids and then Andrew is grouped along with them. This is also due to the fact that we have no concrete information on when or where Andrew died. Andrew Midnight Motorist. The theory that Midnight Motorist is actually based on Andrew's family, the mound possibly being Andrew's grave, or this simply showcasing Andrew's dad being abusive. From what I understand, this is another way to explain Andrew possibly being the vengeful spirit, coming from a terrible upbringing. Andrew Monty. I'm unsure, but it appears to be the theory that Andrew is, in some way, possessing Monty, or that Monty is meant to be a parallel character to Andrew, mainly due to the alligator mask connecting the two, but also due to the fact that Monty is known as the aggressive one throughout Security Breach, and so they share that in common. Andrew Pizza. What I'm 99% sure is just a joke theory that the reason Andrew is seemingly forgotten and never reported on in the story is because, let me check the script, because Andrew was turned into a pizza by William Afton after he murdered him, hinted at with the Pizza Kit story. Yep, that's truly a theory someone suggested. Andrew Plush. The theory that goes alongside Andrew first, that the Fredbear plush from the FNAF 4 minigames is actually possessed by Andrew. Andrew Receiver. The theory that goes alongside Andrew 5th, or a later theory, Golden Trio, or Do It But Andrew Instead, where Andrew is actually the one to receive the final cake in the Happiest Day minigame and be set free. Andrew saw MCI. The theory that Andrew actually witnessed the MCI. I'm personally unsure what this entails for the story, but I think it's meant to be why William may have killed Andrew, not wanting anyone to get out knowing what happened. Andrew Talbot. The theory that Andrew is the son of Dr. Talbot from the Fazbear Frights. I believe this is theorized to explain a possible reason that Dr. Talbot begins studying Remnant. Andrew Tuishink. The theory that Andrew is the one he shouldn't have killed, from Ultimate Custom Night. As I explained earlier, this can mean that it's just Andrew himself, or that he's sharing it with Cassidy in some way, but he's still the main vengeful spirit. Another Afton family. The theory that Glitchtrap is trying to mimic the Afton family, with Gregory being purposely picked for his similarities to the Crying Child, Vanessa for Elizabeth, and possibly Cassie's dad for Mike, which this is probably under the theory that Cassie's dad is the bunny bully, making him a fitting replacement for Mike, another bully. Another CC. The theory that instead it's just Gregory chosen to replace the Crying Child. Another David. The theory that Gregory was purposefully chosen to replace David. The kid Mimic has a strong connection to in its tales from the Pizzaplex origin story. Another Murray family. Similar to the other theories, the theory that instead of the Aftons they were picked to replace the Murrays. Gregory for David, Vanessa for Fiona, the mum, and Cassie's dad for Edwin. Auction theory. The theory that Mike buys the auction items after the FNAF 3 fire, these items being haunted and then causing him to experience the FNAF 4 nightmares. This is backed by the FNAF 4 trailers being about what you apparently brought home, some of the plushy toys being what turns into the nightmares, and more. Ballora Afton. The theory that Ballora is meant to be Miss Afton, whether it's by literally possessing Ballora or by William purposely basing it off of Miss Afton. In Security Breach there's a table representing each of the Aftons, and Miss Afton looks a lot like Ballora. BB Victim. The theory that the Crying Child possesses Balloon Boy, somehow, in some way. I'm personally unclear on how this works. Blob DCI. The theory that the Blob, aka the Tangle, is possessed by the DCI from FNAF 2. Blob Epilogue Victims. The theory that the Blob, aka the Tangle, is possessed by the murdered victims in the tales from the Pizzaplex epilogues, namely due to the fact that they're put in the same pile as the robot parts the Mimic was breaking apart, and they're explicitly mentioned to be tangled, the word coming up a lot. Blob MCI. The theory that the Blob, aka the Tangle, is possessed by the MCI. Blob Storyteller. The theory that the Storyteller, after being taken down from the Pizzaplex, was put underground and eventually became the Blob, namely due to the large amount of wires within it, and the fact that it's got a head that's seemingly in control. Blonde Andrew, movie. The theory that the 5th kid from the MCI in the FNAF movie, aka the blonde kid, is meant to be and or will be named Andrew. Blonde Brooks, movie. The theory that the 5th kid from the MCI in the FNAF movie, aka the blonde kid, is meant to be and or will be named Michael Brooks, the 5th MCI from the novel trilogy. Blonde Cassidy, movie. The theory that the 5th missing child in the FNAF movie, aka the blonde kid, is meant to be and or will be named Cassidy. Box Bite Victim Body. The theory that the FNAF 4 box contains the body of the Crying Child. Box Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. The theory that the FNAF 4 box is is meant to contain, whether metaphorically or literally, FNAF 6, namely due to the layout of the underground vents in the big finale looking somewhat similar to the box, with the pieces being put together possibly representing all the animatronics being lured back together. Box Happiest Day. The theory that the FNAF 4 box is meant to contain, whether metaphorically or literally, Happiest Day, namely due to the fact that the box is the pieces put together, and in FNAF World's clock ending, it's told us that now the pieces are in place for you, and in the source code of Update 2's teaser, it's noted how he put the pieces back together, which through the clock ending we specifically play through the minigames that are representations of what's needed to achieve the Happiest Day ending in FNAF 3, making the pieces the FNAF 3 minigames, and so if the box is the FNAF 3 minigames put together, that means that inside the box is Happiest Day. Box Lore. The theory that the FNAF 4 box is meant to metaphorically be about the lore itself and how it will never be unlocked. Considering FNAF 4 being the final game at the time, it's possibly meant that it's best for us to keep the lore unsolved for good. Brooks the one you shouldn't have killed. The theory that Michael Brooks, the Golden Freddy spirit in the novel trilogy, is actually the one you shouldn't have killed in Ultimate Custom Night, most likely meaning that Cassidy doesn't exist under this theory. Burn Afton. The theory that William Afton has returned as Burntrap, mainly from the theory that Glitchtrap is William too, and the fact that it looks like the next incarnation of Scraptrap, which happens to be underneath the FNAF 6 location, and more. Burn Mimic. The theory that the Mimic is actually Burntrap, mainly from the theory that Glitchtrap is the Mimic too. The fact that in the Tales from the Pizzaplex epilogues the Mimic happens to look burnt and be wearing bunny ears, to the point that it gets confused with the guitarist Bonnie, and more. Bullies MCI. The theory that the FNAF 4 bullies end up becoming the missing children, due to them wearing the mask of the characters, the crying child then being Golden Freddy, although this was basically debunked by the fact that the Foxy bully is Mike, who is confirmed to have lived past the MCI, the Bunny bully most likely being Cassie's dad, and the Freddy bully being theorized to be Oswald's dad, all of which are alive post-MCI. Bully Cassie dad. The theory that Cassie's dad is the Bunny bully, hinted at through the bunny mask being lost luggage and familiar to him, the constant bunny imagery, and more. Bite victim 5th. The theory that the 5th kid in the MCI is actually the crying child, and he's the one who goes on to possess Golden Freddy. Some theorize this was because William would then seem less likely to be guilty if his son was also missing. Bite victim Dreamer. The theory that the crying child is the one having the FNAF 4 nightmares. Now, while this was a big theory when the game first released, and he may still influence the nightmares in some form, it's practically confirmed thanks to the survival logbook and the phone call throughout the game that Mike is actually the one having the FNAF 4 nightmares. Again, he may still influence them in some form, but it seems to be constantly confirmed to us that Michael is indeed the player instead. Bite victim Emily. The theory that the crying child was actually in the Emily family, with Henry and Charlie. Bite victim experiments. The theory that the crying child was experimented on by William in the observation rooms shown in Sister Location and showcased in Didophobia. I explained this theory earlier. This is theorized to be why the crying child is afraid of the animatronics. Bite victim first. The theory that the crying child dies first in the story, before Charlie and Elizabeth. Bite victim receiver. The theory that the crying child is the one to receive the cake in Happiest Day, mainly alongside the theory that the crying child possesses Golden Freddy. Bite victim saw a failure. The theory that the thing the crying child saw, referenced in FNAF 4, was a springlock failure. This is theorized to be why the crying child is afraid of the animatronics. Bite victim saw Charlie corpse. The theory that the thing the crying child saw, referenced in FNAF 4, was Charlie's corpse. This is theorized to be why the crying child is afraid of the animatronics. Bite victim saw Elizabeth's death. The theory that the thing the crying child saw, referenced in FNAF 4, was Elizabeth's corpse, somehow. This is theorized to be why the crying child is afraid of the animatronics. Bite victim saw MCI. The theory that the thing the crying child saw, referenced in FNAF 4, was the MCI. This is theorized to be why the crying child is afraid of the animatronics, although it is seemingly debunked by the fact the MCI most likely takes place in 1985, years after this line happens. Bite victim the one you should not have killed. The theory that the crying child is actually the one you should not have killed in Ultimate Custom Night. Cassidy Afton. The theory that Cassidy is actually an Afton. Cassidy Bear. The theory that Cassidy is actually the bear in the Old Man Consequences cutscene in Ultimate Custom Night, either because she's the vengeful spirit and being told to let go, or because she's trying to stop Andrew and is told to leave William to him. Cassidy Boy. The theory that Cassidy is actually a boy, mainly because every other iteration of the 5 missing children have Golden Freddy's spirit as a boy instead. Also because some use this to explain the others in Ultimate Custom Night, calling the face of the one you should not have killed a boy. Cassidy Burger. What I'm also 99% sure is a joke theory based on the fact that people say Andrew is a parallel to Cassidy, so instead of turning Andrew into a pizza, William turns Cassidy into a burger. Cassidy experiments. The theory that Cassidy has at some point been in the observation room showed in Sister Location and showcased identitophobia. Cassidy Girl. The theory that Cassidy is a girl, mainly because the kid named Cassidy in the novel trilogy is a girl, and some compare it to the girl in the Survival Logbook being handed the cake by the puppet. Cassidy Plush. The theory that the Fredbear plush in the FNAF 4 minigames is possessed by Cassidy. This would require the MCI to happen in 1983. Cassidy Princess. The theory that the princess in Princess Quest is actually Cassidy herself, not just representing her. She's either possessing the machines or becomes the princess in some other way. Cassidy Receiver. The theory that Cassidy is the one who receives the cake in Happiest Day and wears the Golden Freddy mask, mainly due to the fact that this would make sense as, along with the other 5 kids, they'd be the 6 that have been grouped together in the last couple games, and this was the only possible theory at the time of release. Cassidy Speaker. The theory that the final speaker through the Fredbear plush in the final FNAF 4 minigame is Cassidy, stating that she'll help put him back together. Again, this would require the MCI to happen in 1983. Cassidy, the one you shouldn't have killed. The theory that Cassidy is the one you shouldn't have killed in Ultimate Custom Night. As I explained earlier, this can mean that it's just Cassidy herself, or that she's sharing it with Andrew in some way, but she's still the main vengeful spirit. Cassidy Victim. The theory that goes alongside Bite Victim 5th, but instead of Cassidy just being completely erased, the name is instead the crying child's name. Cassidy Watched. From what I can tell, it appears to be the theory that Cassidy saw the other 5 die before she was killed, possibly going alongside Cassidy, the one he shouldn't have killed, and this making her vengeful. Cassie Dadbot. The theory that Cassie's dad is the Maskbite in Ruin. This is mainly a theory and not a fact, due to some saying that it could just be showing us the future of the Vanny Mask, and more so telling the audience when the game takes place, and not being literally what Cassie's dad becomes. Cassie Dad Conspiracist. The theory that Cassie's dad is the arcade conspiracist we learn about in the many security breach duffel bag messages, who appears to be playing through all the arcade machines, possibly explaining how he's able to play the 4th Princess Quest despite seemingly not playing 1 to 3 yet. Cassie Dad Witch Story. The theory that Candy Cadet's Help Wanted 2 story about the witch is about Cassie's dad, the scar possibly coming from being a technician at Sister Location, as we hear a previous technician made a hiding spot that we used to escape the Biddy Babs, and in the end of Help Wanted 2 we visit the Sister Location elevator out of nowhere, as if it has some greater importance to Cassie's dad. Cassie Princess. The theory that the princess in Princess Quest is actually Cassie. Cassie Witch Story. The theory that Candy Cadet's Help Wanted 2 story about the witch is about Cassie. Charlie 46. The theory that Patient 46 from the Security Breach Therapy CDs is actually Charlie. This was debunked by GGY and even Freddy in Space 3, including Gregory fighting off with the therapy discs. Charlie Bots Games. The theory that Charlie was actually recreated as a robot sometime after her death, similar to how she was in the novel trilogy. Charlie First. The theory that Charlie is the first to die in the story, before the Crying Child and Elizabeth. Charlie Plush. The theory that the Fredbear plush in the FNAF 4 minigames is possessed by Charlie. Charlie post MCI. The theory that somehow Charlie actually dies after the MCI. This is assumedly, I only say assumedly because I have seen some still believe this, been debunked by Help Wanted 2 making you type 1983 in order to get the Charlie memory. The fact that Charlie dies in 1982, later changed to 1983 in the novel trilogy, and the fact that she's already around to guide the MCI spirits. Charlie pre-MCI. The theory that Charlie does die before the MCI. Charlie Speaker. The theory that the final speaker through the Fredbear plush in the final FNAF 4 minigame is Charlie, stating that she'll help put him back together like she does with the other spirits through the story. Copycat Mediocres. The theory that the mediocre melodies were created as purposeful copycats of the Freddy characters. Some say this is confirmed due to the character encyclopedia, but as I mentioned earlier, it's questionable whether we can take any information from the guidebooks as fact, and it's safer to just use them as general guidebooks. Cupcake Dog. The theory that Chica's cupcake is actually possessed by Susie's dog, answering how William knows it's missing and where it is, and the fact that Into the Pit seemingly confirms this theory with the cupcake growling and biting people. Dave Afton. The name of the crying child is Dave, obtained through the logbook as proven earlier in this video. Dead God Theory. The theory that the staff bots and the Glamrock animatronics think of the storyteller as their god once infected, and once it's taken down, dead, they end up serving Nightmare On, who here represents the dead. Dreadbear Cassidy. The theory that Dreadbear is meant to represent Cassidy. Dreadbear Victim. The theory that Dreadbear is meant to represent the crying child. Dream Theory. The theory that everything in FNAF 1 to 3 was a dream from the crying child due to some things he'd seen or heard beforehand. This has since been debunked numerous times and even joked about by Sky himself. Drowned Cassidy. The theory that the girl at the end of Drowning is actually Cassidy. Drowned Charlie. The theory that the girl at the end of Drowning is actually Charlie. Drowned Mimic. The theory that the girl at the end of Drowning is just the Mimic. Drowned Peggy. The theory that the girl at the end of Drowning is actually Peggy. Drowned Vanessa. The theory that the girl at the end of Drowning is actually Vanessa. Dual Princess. The theory that the princess in Princess Press is a mix of people. From what I understand, presumably it means it's both actually Cassidy as well as the real player of the arcade games. Dwayne Dude. The theory that Dwayne, from what we found, is the name of the phone dude due to their similar personalities. Edwin Corpse. The theory that the corpse in Burn Trap is actually Edwin's from Tales from the Pizzaplex. Edwin Mediocres, the theory that Edwin made the mediocre melodies. Eleanor Beth. From what I understand, it's the theory that Eleanor from the Fazbear Frights is possessed by Elizabeth herself, explaining the similarities to Baby. Eleanor Charliebot. The theory that Eleanor from the Fazbear Frights isn't actually an agony being, or just not at first, and is instead the robotic recreation of Elizabeth. Similar to how Henry made Robot Charlie in the novel trilogy. Eleanor MCI Agony. The theory that Eleanor from the Fazbear Frights was created with the agony of the MCI. Elizabeth Room. The theory that the empty room in the FNAF 4 minigames is actually Elizabeth's. This is usually paired with any theory where she dies before the crying child. Elizabeth First. The theory that Elizabeth dies first in the story, before Charlie and the crying child. Elizabeth Plush. The theory that the Fredbear plush in the FNAF 4 minigames is actually possessed by Elizabeth. Elizabeth post-MCI. The theory that Elizabeth dies after the MCI and Freddy's closure. Elizabeth pre-MCI. The theory that Elizabeth dies before the MCI. Emily Midnight Motorist. The theory that Midnight Motorist is about the Henry Emily family, possibly still after the night of Charlie's death, who may be in the mound, and that the runaway kid is Sammy, Charlie's brother in the novel trilogy, while the person watching TV is the mum. Experiment Midnight Motorist. The theory that Midnight Motorist is about a victim who was put into the observation rooms shown in sister location and showcased in Didophobia. Fazbear Entertainment 70s. The theory that Fazbear Entertainment has been around since the 70s. Fazbear Entertainment 80s. The theory that Fazbear Entertainment has been around only since the early 80s. Fazbear Entertainment Scooper. The theory that Fazbear Entertainment remade the Scooper that we see in Ruin. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator Fredbear's. The theory that the FNAF 6 location is actually Fredbear's Family Diner. The original story ending where it started. This is seemingly proven due to the Fredbear's Family Diner posters and references through the Pizzaplex, which was built directly above the FNAF 6 location, as well as the 70s Freddy being found directly attached to the FNAF 6 location. FNAF Arkham. The absolutely insane yet hilarious theory that FNAF takes place in the same universe as the Batman Arkham video game series. FNAF 1, 1991 to 2000. The theories that FNAF 1 takes place in any of those respective years. FNAF 3, 2015. The theory that FNAF 3 takes place in 2015, taking place 30 years after the first Freddy's closed in 1985. FNAF 3, 2017. The theory that FNAF 3 takes place in 2017, taking place 30 years after the second Freddy's closed in 1987. FNAF 3, 2023. The theory that FNAF 3 takes place in 2023, taking place 30 years after the final Freddy's closed in 1993. FNAF 6, 2015. The theory that FNAF 6 takes place in 2015, which from what I can tell is under the assumption that FNAF 3 takes place in 2015 and FNAF 6 takes place close to it. FNAF 6, 2017. The theory that FNAF 6 takes place in 2017, which from what I can tell is due to the belief that the game takes place on the date it was released. FNAF 6, 2023. The theory that FNAF 6 takes place in 2023 due to the HRY223 log. Follow Me, 1988. The theory that Follow Me takes place in 1988 after FNAF 2, in which William destroys the Wizards, and that's the reason they get rebuilt into the originals. Follow Me, 1993 plus. The theory that Follow Me takes place any year after 1993, where FNAF 1 most likely takes place. Follow Victim. The theory that the Crying Child spirit attaches itself to Mike and is the reason Mike's nightmares get Crying Child imagery, and he also appears in his logbook. Foxy Good Guy. The joke theory back in FNAF 1 days, where people believe that Foxy was actually a good guy due to him never coming towards you and killing you, stopping once he comes through the door. Freddy Bite of 87. The theory that Freddy was the one who caused the Bite of 87. Free Victim. The theory that the Crying Child possessed nothing after his death, but helped the MCI become freed through Happiest Day. Fright Guard Duo. The theory that both Mike and Hudson are the FNAF 3 guard, one taking over the other either before the gameplay or possibly even during the gameplay. Frights Fiction. The theory that the entirety of the Fazbear Frights series are books written by Fazbear Entertainment. Frights Games. The theory that the entirety of Fazbear Frights all take place in the game timeline, although this is kind of debunked by Scott stating that only some are connected to the games. Frights Parallels. The theory that the entirety of the Fazbear Frights series don't take place in the game timeline, and are just simply parallels of the events in the games, only giving us hints or rules to the game story. Freddy's Singing Show 70s. The theory that Fredbear's Singing Show from Security Breach takes place in the 70s. Freddy's Singing Show pre-70s. The theory that Freddy's Singing Show from Security Breach takes place any year before the 70s. Funtime Afton. The theory that the Afton family is meant to be represented by the Funtimes, with Circus Baby being Elizabeth, Ballora being Miss Afton, Funtime Freddy being the Crying Child, and Funtime Foxy being Michael Afton. Funtime DCI. The theory that the Funtime animatronics are possessed by the FNAF 2 kids, their remnant being taken by William sometime after FNAF 2. Funtime Illusion Discs. The theory that the Funtimes contain illusion discs, mainly started by this circle flashing disc on Funtime Freddy being theorized to be an illusion disc. I'm unsure what this impacts on the story, or other theories that use this for it. Funtime MCI. The theory that the Funtime animatronics are possessed possessed by the MCI kids, their remnant being taken by William after the Follow Me minigames. Garrett Puppet Movie. The theory that Garrett ends up becoming the puppet in the movie universe. Garrett Shadow Bunny Movie. The theory that Garrett ends up becoming Shadow Bunny in the movie universe. Garrett Victim Movie. The theory that Garrett is meant to be the crying child stand-in in the movie universe. Glam Cassidy. The theory that Glamrock Freddy is possessed by the spirit of Cassidy, which from what I can tell comes from the fact that Glamrock Freddy's bow tie and top hat slowly turns from the black to its purple throughout the game. The fact that his neon sign is golden and purple too, and Golden Freddy saying I feel you are broken, which could be a reference to You're Broken coming out of the Fredbear plush in FNAF 4. Glam Charlie. The theory that Glamrock Freddy is possessed by the spirit of Charlie, which again from what I can tell comes from Glamrock Freddy saying I feel you are broken, which could be a reference to the You're Broken line, which some theorize Charlie to be the one to say. I'm unsure if this has any more evidence. Glam Edwin. The theory that after dying inside the storyteller, Edwin ended up possessing Glamrock Freddy. Glam Henry. The theory that after Glamrock Freddy clears the path to the pizza place, Henry went on to possess him. Glam Mike. The theory that Michael Afton is possessing Glamrock Freddy, mainly due to his voice line I found myself when I cleared the path, his line I am not me, and also his mysterious second wind that he gets out of nowhere. This theory is usually paired with Gregory representing the crying child in some way, shape or form, so then it's Michael taking care of his brother in a new way. Glam Prototype. The theory that the Glamrock Freddy with the prototype on his foot that we see in Ruin is actually a different Glamrock Freddy to the one in Security Breach. Glamrock Agony. The theory that the Glamrock animatronics is possessed not by a soul or spirit, but by the agony from either FNAF 6 entirely, since they're directly above it, or from the various murders/disappearances that occur throughout the Pizzaplex, which out of the two options, it's more likely to be the latter. Glamrock AI. The theory that the Glamrock animatronics are not possessed at all and are simply just AI. Glamrock Remnant. The theory that the Glamrock animatronics are possessed by Remnant. It's unclear whose Remnant exactly, but just that the Glamrocks are possessed. Glamrock Souls. The theory that the Glamrock animatronics are possessed by souls. It's unclear who exactly, but just that the Glamrocks are possessed. Glam Therapist. The theory that Glamrock Freddy is possessed by the therapist that we hear about in the retro CDs, as one of them mentions how one of Gregory's victims was pretty messed up and that the body looked like it was mangled by machinery, which could mean that the therapist went on to possess the machine they were killed by, Glamrock Freddy. Glam Tony. The theory that Glamrock Freddy is possessed by Gregory's friend Tony from GGY, who was invited to the Pizzaplex and presumably killed, possibly going on to possess the animatronic that may have killed him. Glitch Afton. The theory that Glitch Trap is actually William Afton, who was scanned over from Scraptrap circuit boards. Glitch Both. The theory that Glitch Trap is a combination of both William Afton and the Mimic, whether it's the Mimic circuit boards that are infected with the agony of William, or both Scraptrap circuit boards being used with a Mimic, and mixing with each other, or something else. This theory usually goes hand in hand with the theory that the Mimic is the endoskeleton on a burn trap, while William Afton's agony created the suit and flesh around it. Glitch Mimic. The theory that Glitch Trap is actually the Mimic, whether it's the code itself or a branch/subroutine of it focused on mimicking Afton, scanned in from the various Mimic circuit boards that we know exist thanks to Tales from the Pizzaplex. Golden Andrew. The theory that Andrew possesses Golden Freddy. This is mainly due to how in the Fazbear Fright story The New Kid, we learn that there's a kid with curly black hair in Golden Freddy, which matches Andrew's description. Some also say that if Golden Freddy is the one in control of Ultimate Custom Night, and if Andrew is shown to be the one in charge in the Fazbear Frights, then it's possible that they're just one and the same instead of it being two separate people. Golden Duo. The theory that two kids possess Golden Freddy, the main candidates being Cassidy and the Crying Child. This mainly comes from the fact that the survival logbook has the two communicating with each other and seemingly paralleling Andrew and Jake possessing the Citraith. Some say this explains the It's Me being a direct message from the Crying Child to Mike from within Golden Freddy. Also recently some new evidence arrived due to the phone guy hearing a recording of the Bite of 83 before dying in the exact same way, the crying from the recording also continuing even after it stopped. Golden Phone. The theory that after being killed by Golden Freddy, the phone guy goes on to possess him. This got a tiny little piece of evidence recently with a week before, showing that once being stuffed inside of an animatronic, he smells bad and then says it's me. Golden Squad. What appears to be a joke theory that everyone ever associated with Golden Freddy possesses it. The phone guy, Cassidy, the Crying Child, Michael Brooks, Andrew, Kelsey, and Devon. Golden Trio. The theory that Golden Freddy is possessed by Cassidy, Andrew, and the Crying Child all in one. Golden Uno. The theory that Golden Freddy is only possessed by one spirit, Cassidy. Golden Victim. The theory that Golden Freddy is only possessed by the Crying Child, mainly with the theory that Cassidy doesn't exist as her own character and the Crying Child is Cassidy. Gregbot. The theory that Gregory is actually a robot, similar to how in the novel trilogy Charlie was recreated as a robot. Greg Human. The theory that Gregory is simply just a human. Gregory Elevator. The theory that at the end of Ruin it was the real Gregory who dropped the elevator and possibly killed Cassie. Grimmick. The theory that Grim Foxy is meant to represent the Mimic, mainly due to Freddy and Friends on Tour videos showing Foxy being a costume an endoskeleton hides in, a shock to everyone else, which seemingly mirrors the Mimic hiding in costumes. The connections the Mimic seemingly has to Full Fest 2, as well as Grim Foxy being in the level where you collect a Vanny mask. Happiest Day post FNAF 6. The theory that Happiest Day takes place after FNAF 6, since Molten Freddy possibly still contains the spirits of the MCI and Lefty still contains the puppet, showing that they're not freed. Happiest Day post FNAF 3. The theory that Happiest Day happens how we see it, directly after FNAF 3. Happiest Day post Frights. The theory that Happiest Day takes place after the Fazbear Frights Stitchline stories, mainly due to the puppet appearing in them. Happiest Day post Help Wanted 2. The theory that Happiest Day takes place after Help Wanted 2. This mainly goes in part with the theory that Cassidy is still around in Princess Quest, although I think there's a side theory in this that the memory plushies of the 5 missing children in the puppet are possibly the agony or spirits of them in some way, and so they cannot rest until Help Wanted 2 happens. Helpy Glitch Trap. The theory that Helpy in Ruin is meant to be the leftover Glitch Trap branch from Help Wanted 2. This explains why the Mimic seemingly argues with itself. Henry Corpse. The theory that the corpse in Burn Trap is actually Henry's. This mainly goes hand in hand with the theory that the separated office area we see in Security Breach is Henry's. Henry Fright Guard. The theory that Henry is actually the guard in FNAF 3. Henry Fritz. The theory that Henry is Fritz Smith in FNAF 2, coming after Phone Guy tries to contact the original owner of Fredbear's. Henry Mediocres. The theory that Henry created the mediocre melodies. From what I recall, most who believe this theory believe that he created them before his partnership with William, this being what leads to their partnership. Henry Mike Dad movie. The theory that Mike's dad in the movie is actually going to be Henry. Henry Midnight Motorist. The theory that Midnight Motorist is about the Emily family, and that Henry's the yellow guy, possibly being later that night of Charlie's murder, but from Henry's perspective. I'm unsure who is meant to be the couch person, the runaway, and the footprints in this explanation. Hudson Fright Guard. The theory that Hudson from the Fazbear Fright story What We Found is the guard in FNAF 3. Help Wanted 1 post-epilogues. The theory that Help Wanted 1 takes place after the Stitch Wraith Stingers from the Fazbear Frights. Help Wanted 1 pre-epilogues. The theory that Help Wanted 1 takes place before the Stitch Wraith Stingers from the Fazbear Frights. Help Wanted 1 random. The theory that we play as a random person in Help Wanted 1. Help Wanted 1 reboot. The theory that Help Wanted 1 completely reboots the story and that FNAF 1's Ultimate Custom Night are no longer canon in the new story, and or didn't happen exactly as we played through. This was actually debunked by Scott, stating that Scott Cawthon is not canon and that the indie game storyline was the only way to make Help Wanted 1 canon to the other games. Help Wanted 1 Vanessa. The theory that we play as Vanessa in Help Wanted 1. Help Wanted 2, both endings canon. The theory that both endings in Help Wanted 2 are canon, mainly hand in hand with the theory that Glitch Trap is the Mimic. This way the Glitch Trap branch can die, but the mask can still be infected by Rowan. Help Wanted 2, Cassie Dad. The theory that we play as Cassie's dad in Help Wanted 2. Help Wanted 2, Gregory. The theory that we play as Gregory in Help Wanted 2. Help Wanted 2, Help Trap end canon. The theory that only the ending where the player is seemingly killed by the Nightmare staff bots and becomes the mask bot is canon. Help Wanted 2, Princess Quest 4 ending canon. The theory that only the ending where Glitch Trap is destroyed for good by Vanessa, Vanny, is canon. Help Wanted 2, Vanessa. The theory that we play as Vanessa in Help Wanted 2. Imaginary plush. The theory that the Fredbear plush in FNAF 4 is actually an imaginary friend of the Crying Child, whether it's just the talking from it that he's imagining or the plush itself, to explain how it teleports everywhere. Indie Frights. The theory that the Fazbear Frights were made in universe, not by Fazbear Entertainment, but by someone who they'd try to discredit. Into the Pit Agony. The theory that Into the Pit isn't time travel and is instead visiting the agony/memory of the 1985 murders, explaining the nightmarish Spring Bunny, the random flashes of memory, and more. Into the Pit post FNAF 6. The theory that the modern day portions of Into the Pit take place after FNAF 6. Into the Pit pre-FNAF 6. The theory that the modern day portions of Into the Pit take place before FNAF 6, explaining why Trash and the gang are in the dumpsters. Into the Pit time travel. The theory that Into the Pit is actual time travel and Oswald is actually traveling to 1985. Jeremy Bully. The theory that Jeremy Fitzgerald is the FNAF 4 bully. Jeremy Dreams. The theory that Jeremy is having the dream cutscenes in FNAF 2 in between each night. Jeremy Father. The theory that Jeremy is the father of the other Jeremy he dies in the missing children's incident, likely making him Jeremy Sr., and the other Jeremy being Jeremy Jr. Jeremy Help Wanted Cassie Dad. The theory that Jeremy from the first Help Wanted survived, and is now Cassie's dad in Help Wanted 2. Jeremy Fitz Cassie Dad. The theory that Jeremy Fitzgerald is Cassie's dad in Help Wanted 2. Jeremy Witch Story. Continuing on with those theories, but adding on the theory that the Witch Story in Help Wanted 2 is about Cassie's dad. So now instead of it being about anything to do with sister location, it's instead about his experiences as the FNAF 2 guard, or it's about his experiences that we hear about in Help Wanted. Junior's Bar. The theory that Junior's in Midnight Motorist is simply a bar, the green guy likely being a bouncer. Junior's Fredbear's. The theory that Junior's in Midnight Motorist is actually Fredbear's family diner, mainly due to some connecting the path from their house to Junior's being similar to the path from the Afton house to Fredbear's in FNAF 4, if you flip the image. Kelly Corpse. The theory that the corpse in Burn Trap is actually Kelly from the Tales from the Peter Bugs epilogues. This came into existence due to the Mimic killing her inside of a costume and then entering said costume, although although it was disproven in the very next Tales book when the Mimic just quickly takes it off again. Laughing Bully. The theory that the laughing boy in the street in FNAF 4 is actually the Freddy Bully. Lefty Fredbear. The theory that the Rockstar animatronics are repurposed from the originals, meaning Golden Freddy / Fredbear would be reused for Lefty. Lefty MCI. The theory that the MCI are actually attached to Lefty / the puppet, mainly making use of Lefty's fuse function that we read about in the blueprints. This basically makes Charlie being grouped with the MCI more literal, as they're all fused into one. Logbook 23. The theory that the Survivor logbook was written for Fazbear's Fright, and that Mike writes in it during FNAF 3. Logbook 93. The theory that the Survivor logbook was written for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and that Mike writes in it during FNAF 1. Logbook Between. The theory that the Survivor logbook was written for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but that Mike writes in it after FNAF 1 and before FNAF 3. Logbook Duo. The theory that Cassidy and Dave, the Crying Child, actually haunt the Survivor logbook and or Mike himself. Logbook Meta. The theory that the Survivor logbook isn't an in-universe book and is instead just meta for the audience, purely just for leaving clues and hints towards the game's story. Logbook Plex. The theory that the Survivor logbook actually takes place within the times of Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, and that it was made for the location, explaining why it features things from all over the franchise. Logbook Uno. Basically Logbook Duo, but instead only Cassidy haunts the Survivor logbook. Luca Corpse. The theory that Luca from the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Pressure, who dies inside of a Springlock Springtrap cosplay, is actually the corpse worn by Burntrap in Security Breach. Mangle Bite of 87. The theory that Mangle caused the bite of 87. Mangle Dog. The theory that Mangle was possessed by a dog, mainly due to how animalistic Mangle acts. MCI 83. The theory that the missing children's incident takes place in 1983, and that the 1985 dates in the novel trilogy, Into the Pit, etc. are meaningless. MCI 85. The theory that the missing children's incident takes place in 1985, due to the date coming from the novel trilogy, Into the Pit, both the book and the game, etc. MCI 87. The theory that the DCI isn't actually a thing, and that instead it's the missing children's incident that we see in FNAF 2, them going on to possess the Wizards instead of possessing the originals before them. MCI Family Story. The theory that Help Wanted 2's family story is about the 5 missing children. MCI Midnight Murderist. The theory that Midnight Murderist is actually about the parents of one of the missing children. Mediocre Day. The theory that the other masks in Happiest Day are meant to represent the mediocre melodies. Mike Adopted. The theory that Mike is actually adopted, mainly due to the Immortal and the Restless all being about how the baby isn't actually Vlad's, and that the movie universe is revealing that Mike isn't actually a biological Afton. Mike Accomplice. The theory that Mike is actually an accomplice to William through the story, mainly due to him saying in Sister Location that William instructed him to go down. Mike Afton Movie. The theory that Mike is actually an Afton in the movie universe too, a plot twist possibly incoming in the future movies. Michael, the theory that we play as Mike in FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4, Sister Location, and FNAF 6. Mike all except Jeremy. The theory that we play as Mike in those games, but instead of Jeremy Fitzgerald, it's Fred Smith, which is way more likely. Mike Bot. The theory that Mike is actually a robot, some specifically believing that he's the Crying Child put back together and recreated as Mike. Mike CEO. The theory that Mike is the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment in the new story. Mike Corpse. The theory that Mike is actually the corpse on Burntrap. Mike Dreamer. The theory that Mike is the one who experiences the FNAF 4 nightmares. This seems mostly confirmed though. Mike Dreams. The theory that Mike is the one who gets the dreams in FNAF 2 in between each night. Mike Emily. Similar to Mike Adopted, but instead Mike is actually an Emily and Henry's son. Mike Experiments. The theory that Mike was experimented on by William in the FNAF 4 experimental house / observations that we see in Sister Location in some way, shape or form. Mike Fourth. The theory that Mike isn't the Crying Child nor the older brother in FNAF 4, and is instead a 4th child of William. Mike Fright Guard. The theory that Mike is the guard during FNAF 3 at Fazbear's Fright. Mike Fritz. The theory that Mike is the guard during FNAF 2's custom night as Fritz Smith. Mike Hero. The theory that Mike is meant to be the hero of the story, redeeming himself after killing his brother back in 1983, and stopping his father's evil. Mike Human. If there's a theory about him being a robot, there has to be one about him being a human. Mike Jeff. What appears to be the theory that Mike is possibly under an alias as Jeff from Into the Pit. Mike Jeremy. The theory that Mike is the guard during FNAF 2's main nights as Jeremy Fitzgerald. Mike Not. The theory that Mike isn't the guard in FNAF 2 or FNAF 3. Mike Not in 2. The theory that Mike is just not the guard in FNAF 2. Mike Not in 3. The theory that Mike is just not the guard in FNAF 3. Mike set up Happiest Day. The theory that Mike helped set up the spirit's Happiest Day in some way, shape or form, like we do in FNAF 3. Mike Survival. The theory that Mike lived past FNAF 6. Mike Trap. The theory that Mike is actually the purple guy who ends up becoming Springtrap. This theory was officially debunked by Scott himself. Mike Victim. The theory that Mike is the Crying Child and instead of being a robot he just simply survives the bite of 83. Mimic 70s. The theory that the Mimic story in the Tales from the Pizzaplex series takes place in the 1970s. Mimic 80s. The theory that the Mimic story in the Tales from the Pizzaplex series takes place in the 1980s. Mimic Baby. The theory that the Mimic is Circus Baby in some way, shape, or form. Mimic Elevator. The theory that the Mimic was the one who dropped the elevator with Cassie inside of it at the end of Ruin. Mimic Enid. The theory that Enid is the Mimic in some way, shape, or form. Mimic saw DCI. The theory that the Mimic saw the DCI and that's what caused him to begin mimicking Afton, and have an obsession with the game of hide and seek. Mimic saw Follow Me. The theory that the Mimic saw the Follow Me minigames and that's what caused him to begin mimicking Afton. Mimic saw MCI. The theory that the Mimic saw the MCI and that's what caused him to begin mimicking Afton, and have an obsession with the game of hide and seek. Mimic Wraith. The theory that appears to be that the Stitch Wraith is somehow the Mimic in some way, shape, or form. Molten Both. The theory that Molten Freddy contains the remnants/souls of both the MCI and the DCI. Molten DCI. The theory that Molten Freddy contains the remnants/souls of the DCI. Molten MCI. The theory that Molten Freddy contains the remnants/souls of the MCI. Molten MCI Alter S. The theory that Molten Freddy contains the remnant of the Freddy, Bunny, Chica, and Foxy spirits, while Golden Freddy's spirit latches onto William himself to ensure that he never dies. This possibly leading to Ultimate Custom Night. Miss Afton CEO. The theory that Miss Afton is the CEO in the new story after FNAF 6. Miss Afton Plush. The theory that Miss Afton is the speaker of the Fredbear plush throughout the FNAF 4 minigames. Murray family story. The theory that Help Wanted 2's family story is about the Murray family from the Tales from the Pizzaplex story The Mimic. Mexis Afton. The theory that the Mexis entity is somehow William Afton. Mexis Cassie Dad. The theory that the Mexis entity is somehow Cassie's dad. Mexis Strap. The theory that the Mexis entity is somehow Glitchtrap. Mystic Vanessa. The theory that Vanessa is speaking through the Mystic Hippo in Help Wanted 2 to help the player defeat Glitchtrap. Network victim. The theory that the flip side we hear about in FNAF World is the network of memories that overlaps with the real world. The agony of the crying child and others infects the flip side to create and bring agony creatures, objects, memories, and dreams into the real world. This causes what appear to be real arcade cabinets in FNAF 3 to be corrupted by memories of Fredbears, FNAF 3's guard seeing burn animatronics, Mike's FNAF 4 dreams being infected with the memories of the crying child, Into the Pit seemingly showing Oswald entering memories, and more. Nightmare victim. The theory that the crying child manifests as Nightmare Fredbear or Nightmare in FNAF 4. Nighty Agony. The theory that the Nightmarion plushies in Security Breach are created by agony of some kind. Nighty Andrew. The theory that the Nightmarion plushies in Security Breach is Andrew watching over and or returning in some way. Nighty Charlie. The theory that the Nightmarion plushies in Security Breach is Charlie watching over and or returning in some way. Nighty Eleanor. The theory that the Nightmarion plushies in Security Breach is Eleanor watching over and or returning in some way. No CEO. The theory that no one is the CEO in the new story past FNAF 6, most likely being a board of directors like the Storyteller shows, or possibly being the Mimic pretending to be the CEO and giving actions out to the staff. Non-Miss Afton. The theory that there's no Miss Afton. Norman Afton. The theory that the crying child's name is Norman because of Help Wanted's files stating that the FNAF 4 bedroom is titled Norman Bedroom, although this is debunked, as the file name turned out to be from a stock asset. Novel Frights. The theory that the novel trilogy and the Fazbear Frights are in the same timeline, mainly due to the Yellow Doll. Novel Games. The theory that the novel trilogy somehow takes place in the game timeline. Old Man Consequences Andrew. The theory that Old Man Consequences is actually the spirit of Andrew. Old Man Consequences Cassidy. The theory that Old Man Consequences is actually the spirit of Cassidy. Old Man Consequences Deity. The theory that Old Man Consequences is actually no spirit and just a cosmic deity. Old Man Consequences Edwin. The theory that Old Man Consequences is actually the spirit of Edwin Murray. Old Man Consequences Henry. The theory that Old Man Consequences is actually the spirit of Henry. Old Man Consequences Mike. The theory that Old Man Consequences is actually the spirit of Mike. Old Man Consequences William. The theory that Old Man Consequences is actually the spirit of William. Omni MCI. The theory that the missing children incident and Charlie's death happened on the exact same night. Origin Midnight Motorist. The theory that Midnight Motorist is actually about William Afton's abusive childhood. Paper Balloon Boy. The theory that the third Paper Power in FNAF 2 is meant to be Balloon Boy. Paper Jackie. The theory that the third Paper Power in FNAF 2 is meant to be Jackie / the Mimic. Paper Puppet. The theory that the third Paper Power in FNAF 2 is meant to be the puppet. Phone Father. The theory that Phone Guy is actually the father of Phone Dude. Phone Fritz. The theory that Phone Guy is Fritz Smith in FNAF 2's Custom Night. Phone Killer. The theory that Phone Guy is the murderer William Afton. This theory was debunked by Scott himself. Pigtail Beth. The theory that the Pigtail Girl in the FNAF 4 minigames is actually Elizabeth, due to looking similar to Circus Baby. Pigtail Girl Speaker. The theory that the Pigtail Girl in the FNAF 4 minigames is actually who speaks through the Fredbear plush. Plush victim. What appears to be the theory that the crying child possesses the Fredbear plush after dying. Possessed mediocres. The theory that the mediocre melodies are possessed. Possessed Springtrap. The theory that William Afton dies and goes on to possess Springtrap instead of being kept alive by the spirits. Princess Avatar. The theory that the princess in the Princess Quest is just a simple avatar for the player. So in Princess Quest 1 to 3 it's just Gregory, in Princess Quest 4 it's the Help Wanted 2 player, etc. Princess victim. The theory that the princess in Princess Quest is actually the crying child. Puppet Charlie. The theory that the puppet is possessed by just Charlie. Puppet duo. The theory that the puppet is possessed by Charlie and the Crying Child, puppet stuffed. The theory that the puppet was the one to not only guide their spirits to the suits, but actually the one to stuff the children's bodies themselves into their suits, puppet Toyshink. The theory that the vengeful spirit in Ultimate Custom Night is actually Charlie, puppet victim. The theory that the puppet is possessed by just the Crying Child, purple crank. The theory that the item the purple guy is holding in the FNAF 2 minigames is a crank for the animatronics, purple phone. The theory that the item that the purple guy is holding in the FNAF 2 minigames is a phone, likely in reference to the theory that the purple guy is the phone guy, random corpse. The theory that the corpse in Burn Trap is just random and has no specific identity, random fright guard. The theory that the Fazbear Frights guard in FNAF 3 is simply just a random person, not Mike, not Henry, and not Hudson, Rockstar MCI. The theory that the Rockstar animatronics are actually the ones in FNAF 6 who contain the spirits of the missing children, due to them possibly being made from the parts of the original animatronics, Rory Afton. The theory that Rory from the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Didophobia is actually an Afton, Rory Midnight Motorist. The theory that Midnight Motorist is about the family of Rory from the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Didophobia, Rory Toyshink. The theory that Rory from the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Didophobia is the vengeful spirit in Ultimate Custom Night, Rory victim. The theory that Rory from the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Didophobia is the Crying Child, Ruin Brazil and canon. The theory that Ruin's Brazil ending is the canon ending of the game, where Cassie is seemingly driven to insanity, Ruin Elevator and canon. The theory that Ruin's Elevator ending is the canon ending of the game, where Cassie is dropped in the elevator, Ruin Scooper ending canon. The theory that Ruin Scooper ending is the canon ending of the game, where the Mimic is seemingly removed from its suit and Cassie's fate is unknown. Sammy CEO. The theory that Charlie's brother and Henry's son from the novel trilogy is in the games, and is the current CEO of Fazbear Entertainment in the new story past FNAF 6. Sammy Toyshink. What I assume to be the joke theory that Charlie's brother and Henry's son from the novel trilogy is in the games and is the vengeful spirit in Ultimate Custom Night. Security Breach 2020s. The theory that Security Breach takes place sometime in the 2020s. Security Breach 2029. The theory that Security Breach takes place in 2029 calculated through various Tales from the Pizzaplex stories. Security Breach 2030. The theory that Security Breach takes place sometime in the 2030s. Security Breach 2035. The theory that Security Breach takes place in 2035, assuming that the Fazbear Masquerade image indeed says 2035. Security Breach, both endings canon. The theory that both the Burn Trap ending and Princess Quest ending are the canon endings of Security Breach. Security Breach, Burn Trap ending canon. The theory that the Burn Trap ending is the canon ending of Security Breach. Security Breach, Princess Quest ending canon. The theory that the Princess Quest ending is the canon ending of Security Breach. Scrap Trap new suit. The theory that the Scrap Trap suit in FNAF 6 is a new suit that William used to replace the broken and fire damaged Springtrap suit. Special Delivery 2020s. The theory that FNAF AR takes place sometime in the 2020s. Special Delivery 2030s. The theory that FNAF AR takes place sometime in the 2030s. Special Delivery Edwin. The theory that the player of FNAF AR is Edwin Murray from the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories. Special Delivery Mike. The theory that the player of FNAF AR is Mike. Special Delivery Random. The theory that the player of FNAF AR is a random person. Special Delivery Vanessa. The theory that the player of FNAF AR is Vanessa. Shadow Bunny Agony. The theory that Shadow Bunny is made up of an agony from an event, likely the DCI. Shadow Bunny Andrew. The theory that Shadow Bunny is Andrew. Shadow Freddy Agony. The theory that Shadow Freddy is made up of agony from an event, likely the MCI. Shadow Freddy Andrew. The theory that Shadow Freddy is Andrew. Shadow Freddy Cassidy. The theory that Shadow Freddy is Cassidy. Shadow Freddy Max movie. The theory that Max will become Shadow Freddy in the movie universe. Shadow Freddy Victim. The theory that Shadow Freddy is the Crying Child. Shadow Mimic. The theory that the Mimic is actually possessed in some way by the Shadow animatronics. Shadows Eleanor. The theory that both shadows are created by Eleanor. Shadows Failures. The theory that the Shadow animatronics come from Springlock failures that we hear about in FNAF 3. Shadows Physical. The theory that the Shadow animatronics are actually real physical animatronics, either made to look exactly how they do now, or simply decayed over time. Shadows Separate. The theory that the two shadows come from separate places. Shadowbeth. The theory that Elizabeth's soul and memories were split across the Funtime animatronics. Likely once she split from Enid, part of her spirit remained. Shadow Victim. From what I understand, the theory goes that the Crying Child's soul and memories were split across the 5 missing children. This explains why there's so many similarities and connections between the Crying Child and the FNAF 3 minigames, which end with a party freeing the MCI, and how despite dying after him, Cassidy somehow knows about his past, such as the Fredbear plush and his party as shown in the logbook, aka she knows his memories. To make it a lot simpler, think Golden Duo, but instead of just Cassidy/Golden Freddy, he's split up between the other 4 as well. Sister Location post FNAF 1. The theory that Sister Location takes place after FNAF 1. Sister Location post FNAF 3. The theory that Sister Location takes place after FNAF 3. Sister Location pre FNAF 1. The theory that Sister Location takes place before FNAF 1 but after FNAF FNAF 2. Sister location pre-FNAF 2. The theory that sister location takes place before FNAF 2. Sister location bunker mound. The theory that the mound in Midnight Motorist is a secret entrance to the sister location bunker. Split line games. The theory that after FNAF 6 the timeline splits up. One timeline following the Stitch Wraith Stingers, and the other following the Help Wanted story. Springlock banning 83. The theory that the Springlock suits were banned in 1983. Springlock banning 85. The theory that the Springlock suits were banned in 1985. Stitch Wraith Stingers post-security breach. The theory that the Stitch Wraith Stingers take place after security breach. Stitch Wraith Stingers pre-security breach. The theory that the Stitch Wraith Stingers take place before security breach. Staff times. The theory that the staff bot table in security breach above the sticky note room is meant to represent the fun times. Stafftons. The theory that the staff bot table in security breach above the sticky note room is meant to represent the Afton family. Stitch line games. The theory that the stories connected to the Stitch Wraith Stingers are in the game timeline. The exact stories explained in the Fazbear Fright section. Susie Artist. The theory that all the kids' art in the games was drawn by Susie. This is mainly due to Coming Home featuring Susie drawing pictures to communicate from the dead. Susie Princess. The theory that the princess in the Princess Quest is somehow Susie. Susie Toyshink. The theory that Susie is the vengeful spirit in Ultimate Custom Night. Take Cake Fredbear's. The theory that Take Cake to the children and therefore Charlie's death takes place at Fredbear's family diner. Take Cake Freddy's. The theory that Take Cake to the children and therefore Charlie's death takes place at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Tales games. The theory that the tales from the Pizzaplex books take place in the game timeline. Tales line. The theory that only the important tales from the Pizzaplex stories, such as the Mimic, GGY, the epilogues, etc., take place in the game timeline. This is assuming that the tales from the Pizzaplex series follows the same blueprint as the Fazbear Frights with Stitch line. Tape Vanessa. The theory that the tape girl from Help Wanted is Vanessa. 3 sets of victims. The theory that each FNAF 2 minigame shows different sets of kids. The 5 MCI and Give Gifts, the 5 DCI and Save Them, and another 5 in Foxy Go Go Go. Immortal and the Restless Aftons. The theory that the Immortal and the Restless also represents the Afton family. Immortal and the Restless MCI. The theory that the Immortal and the Restless also represents the MCI. The Immortal and the Restless Mike. The theory that Clara from The Immortal and the Restless represents Mike, as practically confirmed in the logbook. Torture Machine Remnant movie. The theory that within the movie universe, the Torture Machine is meant to collect remnant. Torture Machine Stuffing movie. The theory that within the movie, the Torture Machine is meant to stuff people inside the suits. Toy Chica, Bite of 87. The theory that Toy Chica is the one who caused the Bite of 87. Toys Agony. The theory that the toy animatronics are possessed by the agony of the DCI. Toys Possessed. The theory that the toy animatronics are just simply possessed by the DCI plainly. Twisted Mound. The theory that the mound in Midnight Motorist is meant to be about the twisted animatronics. 2 Miss Afton. The theory that William has 2 separate wives in the story. 2 Vans. The theory that there's 2 separate Vanessas in the story. Ultimate Custom Night Descent. The theory that Andrew is the vengeful spirit in Ultimate Custom Night, while Cassidy is trying to stop him so he can rest, only to be convinced to stop trying by Old Man Consequences. Ultimate Custom Night Duo. The theory that there's 2 spirits in Ultimate Custom Night, Cassidy and Andrew, both working against William. There's multiple sub-theories to this theory, such as Cassidy is the vengeful spirit while Andrew is Old Man Consequences, who tells her to move on so he can take over, or that Andrew is the one he shouldn't have killed, while Cassidy is the vengeful spirit, splitting what is assumedly the same character into 2 different roles. Ultimate Custom Night Nightmare. The theory that Ultimate Custom Night is an endless nightmare in William's mind, as shown in The Man in Room 120. Ultimate Custom Night Purgatory. The theory that Ultimate Custom Night is actually purgatory for William so he can't move on. Unwithereds. The theory that the Unwithereds exist as separate animatronics. Basically, instead of originals to Withers to originals FNAF 1, it's originals to Unwithereds to Withers to originals FNAF 1. Vanessa Afton. The theory that Vanessa is an Afton in the games like she is in the movie universe. Vanessa Beth movie. The theory that Vanessa is meant to be an Elizabeth stand-in for the movie universe. Vanessa Bot movie. The theory that Vanessa is actually a robot in the movie universe. Vanessa Princess. The theory that the princess in the Princess Quest is actually Vanessa. Vanessa Witch Story. The theory that Candy Cadet's Witch Story in Help Wanted 2 is about Vanessa. Vanny Scooper. The theory that Vanny made the new Scooper seen in Ruin. Video game theory. The theory that all the spin-offs are real video games in universe. Virus Cassidy. The theory that Cassidy, either herself or what's just purely representing Cassidy, is some form of antivirus against Glitchtrap, mainly going hand in hand with Cassidy being the princess in the Princess Quest. Withered Foxy Bite of 87. The theory that Withered Foxy caused the Bite of 87. Will Care. The theory that William cares about his children in any way, shape or form. This is seemingly debunked by him allowing Mike to bully his brother, not stopping Elizabeth from being captured by by Baby, trying to kill Mike in FNAF 6, and presumably FNAF 3, being implied to be a drunk abuser if he's the yellow guy in Midnight Motorist, being abusive towards Vanessa in the novel trilogy, stabbing Vanessa in the movie, and more. Will Corpse. The theory that William Afton's corpse is on Burntrap. Will Despise. The theory that William Afton despised his children and never actually cared that they were dying, instead excited to experiment on them. Will Frightguard. The theory that FNAF 3 as a whole is actually a nightmare that William has after he's spring-locked and is stuck for years. Will Fritz. The theory that William Afton is Fritz Smith in FNAF 2's Custom Night. Will Grief. The theory that William Afton is motivated to bring the crying child back after he dies. William Dreams. The theory that William has the dreams shown in FNAF 2 in between each night. Will Midnight Motorist. The theory that Midnight Motorist is about William in some way, shape or form. Will Plush. The theory that William speaks out of the Fredbear plush in the FNAF 4 minigames. Will Speaker. The theory that William is the final speaker out of the Fredbear plush in the final FNAF 4 minigame, promising that he'll put him back together. Will Stuffed. The theory that William stuffed the children into the suits to hide the bodies. Will Trap. Springtrap. The confirmed theory that William is Springtrap. Yellow Thing Eleanor. The theory that Pit Trap, aka Yellow Thing, is actually Eleanor. Yendo Agony. The theory that Yendo is made up from Agony. Yendo Golden. The theory that Yendo is actually Cassidy/Golden Freddy, showing up as a Funtime animatronic, just like she shows up looking like the current set of animatronics in every game. And boom, that's a guide to almost all of the lore from FNAF. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you did, consider checking out the full guide to everything in FNAF, more than just the theories. FNAF the Supreme Guide. That's all from me this year. Next year will start being completely new and huge content, and this year was basically just my relaxing year while working on the big Supreme Guide, but next year is where things truly kick into gear. Once that first video of the year drops, I will not be taking my foot off the gas. There's a lot coming, get ready. I hope you all have a fantastic Christmas, a lovely New Year's, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a great day, night, whatever time it is. Bye.